Hello everyone and welcome along to the home of British motorsport, the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit and round number 3 of the 2023 Intelligent Money British GT Championship. It's the Silverstone 500, for many the biggest race of the year. 3 hours of action around a circuit that was made for GT competition, and we've got the biggest grid that this championship has seen for 11 years. What better way to celebrate what's already been a very special weekend here in the United Kingdom? Coronation weekend. We've got the marching band, we've got the Union flags, and we've got hopefully a great afternoon of racing entertainment coming your way. The band of the 24th Invicta Rifles here to put on a show, and I think that's really going to be the theme of the day. What a show we've got for you after a fascinating day yesterday. Qualifying rained out. The weather today far more pleasant than it was yesterday afternoon, that is for sure. We weren't actually able to get any lap time set in qualifying, so it's given us a very jumbled grid, and that should lead us into a particularly fascinating race around what is a real driver's favourite circuit. It's fast, it's flowing, it's wide open, it always generates good racing. And our resident expert, Joe Osborne, was here the other day to take a walk around the Silverstone circuit and point out a few of the things we need to look out for over the next few hours.
Here we are at Silverstone. We're stood just before the very complex section of Maggots and Beckett's Interchapel. The Formula One drivers talk about this as being the best bit of circuit anywhere in the world, and I don't disagree. I even think in a GT car it's even harder. With the less downforce than the F1 car, the drivers are working even harder to keep their car stuck on the black stuff. As the sign shows, you've got a lot of corners coming up in a very short sequence. So you can see the curve here below my feet. The black and the white bit relatively smooth, although the serration does drop away, good inch and a half there, and then you have the red sausage. If you're confident of your car and it's got good front end, especially, and the rear isn't too leery, you can place the left-hand wheels on here, and that really opens up the right-hand part. Now at the right-hand apex, we're looking back at our approach. We know where we want to be all the way over to the right as we're looking at it, near, if not on top of that red sausage curve, opening up the angle to where I'm stood now. So interestingly, the curve, we've got the standard FIA serration, and then we've actually got a flat bit of tarmac here that the drivers will get their right-hand wheels on. They have got an extra chance to cut the corner even more potentially here by using this large red sausage curve here. You look at the size of it. This is what puts outside school playgrounds to slow you down at 20 miles an hour. So you hitting this in a race car doing 130 miles an hour, you're going to feel it. But what it lets you do is cut the corner even more. You can see the grass is being worn away there by cars using that. The real hard bit here is the more you hit it, the more likely you are to damage wheels, suspension, splitters. Any sort of bodywork is really prone to damage. But you get the benefit of a lap time. So it really is, am I going to nibble or am I going to smash this part of the curve? Because for lap time, I'm all over here smashing as hard as I can. So here we are, stood in between Vale Corner behind me and Club Corner coming up. Vale Corner, a very tight left-hander, taken in second gear. But before it, you're all the way up in fifth. So it's a big brake zone, which naturally leads to a really good overtaking opportunity. Here we are at Club, reprofiled in 2009. Now a super critical point where you pick the throttle up. The drivers in a well-handling car will be picking it up in the next couple of meters where I'm stood, and now they will be flat all the way through the second part of Club, all the way down the new pit straight. And the next corner is Abbey, which is at the end of that massive wing building complex. So 1 kilometre an hour faster here, carried all the way down the straight, suddenly turns into 2 or 3 tenths gain, and that is so important for a fast lap round here at Silverstone GP. So Silverstone we know is fast and flowing, but with Ying there must be Yang, and this is the slowest point of the circuit. In a GT3 car, the apex speed is all the way down at 40 miles an hour. It feels like walking pace, but more importantly, it is a slight overtaking opportunity, probably the cheekiest / most opportunistic one of the lap. A short brake zone means it's really got to be a lunge, but we see a lot of contact here, but it's worth the risk if you're getting held up by a slower car in front of you. Here I am stood in front of the BRDC clubhouse. The British Racing Drivers Club owns Silverstone. I'm fortunate enough to be a member, and many of the drivers on the grid today are also members. The clubhouse overlooks Brooklands Corner, one of my favourite corners. You can see the tightening radius as you come down the Wellington Straight, and I'm still not at the tightest point. The apex is still 15 metres ahead of me. The drivers are having to stay on the brakes to keep the front of the car happy and get rid of any of that understeer. We then have another difficult question. How much are we going to cut? The legal amount, the black and white, is a nice smooth tarmac that doesn't unsettle the car at all. But those big red sausage curbs protecting the grass from the drivers cutting too much allow an even shorter distance. So that is where the optimal lap time is. It then is a very short run into the last corner of Luffield.
Well, the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit, as I said, a real driver's favourite. You can see why there. It's going to put on a fantastic bit of entertainment for us this afternoon. The weather, by the way, well, what a difference a day makes. The track temperature into the 20s. It's a lovely spring day. The sun is starting to burn through the clouds. It could not be much more different from the qualifying session yesterday that really never was. Like I said, it gave us a very jumbled grid based upon free practice 2 lap times in the end, and it puts Team ABBA Racing on the overall and GT3 pole. Down there with them now is Bryn.
It's a very sunny day. We've just been listening to Queen by a marching band, which is quite nice, wasn't it, Sam? You're here on the front of the grid due to your FP2 times yesterday. Now, we weren't quite sure what was going on when we spoke yesterday, so you must be pleased to see yourself at the sharp end.
Yeah, definitely. We went back into the truck straight after our interview and sort of worked it out ourselves. Yeah, and definitely really happy. I don't think, even if quali happened, I think you can't get better than P1, so we are very happy, yeah.
Yeah, you had a bit of a problem, didn't you, in Norton Park? Didn't quite go to plan, so winning the Silverstone 500 must be up there as your all-time favourite thing to do right now.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the Monaco race for the F1. If you win the Silverstone 500, it's a great race to win. So it's definitely our aim today is to get that 37.5 points, put us back in the championship fight. So that is the plan this race.
Always the plan to win, Sam. The best of luck. Andy, back up to you.
Thank you, mate.
Thank you very much, Bryn. Yep, the Nearys starting from pole position. They had a big part to play in the early part of this race last year. They'll be hoping to stay out of trouble this time around. Now, last year it was SRO Motorsports on top, and within their driver ranks, Sandy Mitchell, the only ever 2-time winner of the Silverstone 500. Their team manager, though, Mark Lemmer, is down on the grid, enjoying the spring sunshine alongside Joe Osborne.
So obviously we get to hear from the rockstar drivers. Normally I'm on the grid myself, but I really want to hear from a team manager and a team owner. And there's none better for this race especially than Mark Lemmer, owner of SRO Motorsport. You've won the race 3 times in the past. How are you going to win it today?
Well, how are we going to try and win it? We've got good pace in the car now, but there's often some strategy to play out. So we'll be looking to capitalise on that. But as you know, this is a unique race, and we're going to have to pull some tricks out of our sleeves to do this one today, because I think the Mercs have got great pace.
Yeah, and I've run with your team, I've run you as a driver, it's been roles reversed. I call you the dictator, your baby face smile doesn't really show that winning side to you. There's one stop too many. How are you going to get rid of that pit stop today, do you think, effectively?
That's the key thing. That's what makes this race so unique. We do a lot of 3-hour races across Europe, but it's that extra stop. When can you? That gives you so many strategy options. And as you know, we've done some pretty slippery things in the past using safety cars that people might not have thought were usable. But yeah, we'll be looking to capitalise on that. But then you've got the balance. We did have a lot of safety cars a few years back. The last few races have been predominantly green. So you have to bear that in mind as well. If you go really long looking for safety cars, you're on a heavy car, you're not optimising your tyres. So I think, our engineers have got one eye on speed and performance as well as strategy.
Awesome. Thank you for giving nothing away, but a lot in equal measures. Have a good race. Back up to you, Andy. Thank you.
Cheers, Joe.
Brilliant stuff. Mark Lemmer knows a thing or two about how to win the Silverstone 500 with all of its unique strategy elements, which we'll get into a little bit later on. So many stories, so many people down there soaking up the atmosphere on the grid. Bryn Lucas down there still. Who have you found now, Bryn?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. It's great to see you back in the championship here, Nick. I know it's a one-off for you because you're focusing on Le Mans over in Europe for that championship at the moment, but it's also nice to see you out here in a different car.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it's the same brand, but just the new car, the 992. So, yeah, really looking forward to doing my first dry lap of Silverstone in it. So, I think it's going to be a baptism of fire, but we'll see what we got.
You were telling me yesterday that the car is much nicer for you as an AM to drive because it kind of is more stable and more easy, more predictable, maybe is the best way of describing it.
Yeah, be careful of the curse of the commentator or whatever, but for me so far, first impressions, I think this is like my 6th day in the car, so it just feels like it's more stable through the high speed or mid speed, so under braking it's a little bit more stable as well, so it'd be interesting to see how we get on. So treat today as a bit of an extended test session, and back in the car learning all the time, which is great.
Absolutely, look, it's great to see you back here. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you. Good luck, everyone.
Great stuff. Team Park Racing bringing the new Porsche, one of 24 GT3 cars that makes up a 43-car grid, the biggest grid that we've had in 11 years of British GT. So what's going to happen today? Well, it is the Silverstone 500. It's one of 2 3-hour races over the course of the season. We heard Joe then referencing that there's one too many pit stops. Typically in a 3-hour race, in GT racing at least, you would aim to pit at the end of each hour, 2 pit stops, an hour per stint. There are 3 mandatory driver changes though for each team, so each team have to make 3 pit stops. There is a maximum driving time per driver of 100 minutes, so you're relatively free on when you make those driver changes, but neither of your 2 drivers can do more than a total of 100 minutes. It's a minimum pit stop time for GT3 cars of 135 seconds, 165 seconds for GT4, plus any compensation time. The top 3 finishers in each of those classes from the second race at Alton Park over Easter weekend have extra time to serve, and that must be served in the final pit stop. You can see those drivers listed down below. The reigning champion Ian Loggy, who will be starting this race from 3rd on the grid, has the maximum 20 extra seconds to be served at the 3rd pit stop only. So the first 2, it's just the general minimum pit stop time. Right then, more stories to be found down in the pit lane down at Century Motorsport, I believe, is Bryn Lucas.
Well, Darren's in the car getting focused. You've got to start a little bit further back than you'd like, particularly after what happened at Alton Park, Dan.
Yeah, obviously not the ideal situation with qualifying being cancelled and some issues in FP2 and again this morning in warm-up. So hopefully we've got those fixed, and we're just going to be looking that way going forward. And I know we have strong pace in the car, especially in these conditions. So the sun's shining, everything's good, Darren's focused and ready, and yeah, I just can't wait to see what happens.
It's the only BMW M4 GT3 we have in this category. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Is it hard for you to see and compare, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously the more cars, maybe the nicer, like you say, to compare data and a few things, different setups to try. But I think we're doing a good job ourselves. And like I said before, we've done quite a bit of testing, so we know the car really well. And yeah, let's just see what happens. 3 hours is a long way to go.
Certainly is. You had a nice podium at Monza last time when you were racing as well, so we wish you the very best of luck. Andy, back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Bryn. Not a great starting position, as Dan was referencing there, starting 18th on the grid for this race, but they had 2 6th-place finishes at Alton Park, so there is pace definitely in that M4 GT3, which obviously we saw winning a race towards the back end of 2022, so we know that the team and car are capable, and this should be a track that suits that car. This very jumbled grid is going to mean that the opening part of the race, I think, is going to be particularly lively, because not only the GT3 but also the GT4 grid doesn't really resemble the sort of running order that we fully expected. Both classes, therefore, are going to be packed with action, and what happens in the opening few minutes could be crucial. Right then, down to the GT4 end of the grid, and back once more to Joe Osborne.
So I'm a little bit further back now with the GT4 grid, and I found no one better than former champion in 2017, Stuart Middleton. He won it in a Ginetta then. Ginetta have come back actually with an updated V8. Stuart, the championship's changed a bit since you've been away. How is it coming back? What's the competition levels like to what you remember?
So yeah, first of all, it's great to be back on the British GT grid. Yeah, for sure, I see like definitely an improvement coming back. The championship seems to be yeah, just as competitive, but for sure there's a lot more cars now. So yeah, you know, you've got to be quite on the ball, managing the traffic a lot more. So yeah, you know, I mean, nothing's changed in the sense of you know, what you got to do. Level's still the same. So yeah, you know, not exactly where we want to be on the grid here, but yeah, let's see what we can do. I think we've got the car to push forward, and yeah, the G56 is a nice car to drive. So yeah, let's see what we can do.
Awesome, and I'm sure you remember, but I remember sitting next to you in the passenger side when you were in Ginetta Juniors, and it's awesome to see how far you've come. It really is. Well, you allude to that traffic. Who do you not like? Which car seems to hurt you the most? Which GT3 car isn't the friendliest? Give me a prediction.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, all those years ago, sitting alongside you, still remember it, mate. It was all those good tips you had. But yeah, I think some pretty wide GT3 cars on the grid here. I'm trying to think which ones are widest. But yeah, for sure they're all, you know, pushing like hell. But I think the likes of the fastest cars for the pros, and like Gunon and Marcello especially, those guys are used to GT World Challenge, and they're not going to muck about in traffic. So yeah, I think if we give them respect, then they'll give it back, hopefully. So yeah, do what we can. We got our race going on, they've got theirs, but yeah, it's just managing it the best possible way you can, and as you know, mate.
I like his optimism, and I appreciate it, Stuart. Good luck. This is a car to watch at the start, I think, with who we've got around. Back up to you, Andy.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I agree with that. The Ginetta's looking strong. That's not actually the highest placed Ginetta. The number 55, their teammates, are the highest placed of the Ginettas on the grid. Right, nearly there. Let's head back down to Bryn Lucas.
Well, first of all, Zach, congratulations on your first pole here at Silverstone on the International.
Thank you very much.
How is it for you? I mean, looking forward here, there's a lot of GT3s ahead of you, and traffic comes into play a lot in this race because of it being 3 hours, 86 laps long, something like that, the GT3s will do.
Well, it's just see how it goes. Let's hope there isn't too much traffic with me, and let's hope when the GT3s end up catching us, they can get past quickly.
And what about the game plan for this one? We know it's 3 pit stops that you must take. We know that there are limits on how long you can spend in the car. What's the plan? I'm sure you won't tell me the exact plan, but what's the main idea?
Well, I don't think I'm really allowed to tell you that, but the plan is obviously to win it. But besides that, we've already all came up with a plan, and let's hope it actually plays out.
Absolutely. Well, we wish you the very best of luck for that one. Now, we're very, very near the start of this one. I'll let you get focused and they can put the mesh back up. I've had a lot of people saying to me, you just walk off and leave the mesh. Well, let's just show the team do put their safety mesh back up there. We don't just walk off and leave them just to prove it. There you go. You can see. But this is a long way from the start line here, the GT4s. As Andy was saying, GT3 and GT4 cars making up this grid. An incredible 11 different marks represented here at Silverstone for the 500. So many drivers want to be a part of this one. And looking back down the line, wow, there are some fantastic cars around with the brand new McLaren, the Artura, attempting to take on this place. 43 cars. The only other McLaren in GT4 is right down the back. That's the 570S of Team Britain. I'm not sure if you can see it right down there at Woodcotes. We head up all the way down there to Copse. If you're wondering where we are at Silverstone, if you watch a lot of F1 here, you'll be thinking, well, this doesn't look quite right for the grid, but that's because we're at the national pits. The wing is the other side of the circuit here, but it's beautiful conditions. The sun is coming out. It's nice and dry. It's not slippery. The track hopefully is going to be pretty consistent, and we're getting ready for this one. So back to you, Andy, up there in commentary.
Yeah, thanks very much, Bryn. I'll tell you what, the atmosphere here is palpable. There's genuine excitement about this. There's a really good crowd on hand as well at Silverstone. Silverstone, because of its sheer size, never looks that busy, but there are a lot of people. I was driving past them as they were piling into the track this morning, and they've got plenty of vantage points to try out over the next 3 hours. Place your bets then, everyone. The Silverstone 500 for 2023 is just a few minutes away. We've already had 2 fantastic races over Easter weekend at Alton Park, where we had a little bit of everything weather-wise there. 2 different winners across both the GT3 and GT4 classes means that we have a tie at the top of both of their championship tables. It's early days, but it's never too early to start thinking about championship points. But a fair few of those championship frontrunners have work to do from slightly lower grid positions than they would like. Several onboard cameras to bring you over the course of the day as well. The Sky Tempesta Racing car, the McLaren, got to get used to saying McLaren after the words Sky Tempesta Racing these days, after all those years with Mercedes AMGs. It is a Mercedes lockout at the front of the grid though. It just so happened that after those free practice times were calculated, it was 4 of the Mercedes AMGs that headed up the GT3 grid, which roars off the line now on their green flag lap, at the end of which we'll have the 2x2 rolling start, and the green flag will wave on the Silverstone 500. So cars make their way around on the warm-up lap. Let's take a look at how they're going to line up for this one then. It's Team ABBA Racing. The AM drivers, remember, starting within GT3. So Richard Neary will take the start from pole alongside Ram Racing's John Ferguson. Row 2 then for the reigning champ Ian Loggy and James Cottingham, who was out on the first lap here a year ago, hoping for better today. Andrew Howard had a crash in qualifying yesterday. The repaired Aston Martin starts 5th alongside Sean Balfe in the Barwell Motorsport Lambo. Then Brendan Areve and Nick Jones in that new Porsche starting from 8th on the grid. Top 10 completed by Garage 59's Alexander West and Mark Radcliffe for Optimum Motorsport. The Garage 59 car always seems to go well here at Silverstone. Mike Price and Mark Sansom are together on the 6th row, Mercedes ahead of Lamborghini. Then Morgan Tilbrook, definitely one to watch, one of the fastest AMs on the grid, languishing down in 13th on the grid alongside Mark Smith in his Paddock Motorsport McLaren. Then it's another 2 McLarens, Lucky Kira alongside Kevin Say with our onboard camera in the Sky Tempesta racing car, and the 9th row will be shared by Simon Orange and Darren Leung, another car that should make progress in the early stages. Top 20 of this 24-car GT3 grid, shared by Alex Martin and Chris Hart in the DriveTac Mercedes. Then it's Gilbert and Andre Borodin on the 11th row. The back row then of the GT3 grid will see Ian Campbell's Racelab McLaren start alongside the race-by-race entry of Claude Beauvais for Blackthorn. Then we move into GT4, and as we saw it, the Team Parker Racing Porsche on the class pole position. Zach Meakin will have alongside him Charles Clark in the Optimum McLaren. Then Josh Miller in the R-Racing Aston Martin has the DTO car of Aston Miller for company. Will Moore in the first of the 2 Academy Motorsport Ford Mustangs alongside ex-British touring car racer Michael Crease in the Ginetta. Carl Cavers in the BMW, and Stuart Middleton will be together on the next row. Then it's Esme Hawke, lots of Ginettas in the middle of the GT4 grid. Ian Goff for company, most recent winner in GT4 at Alton Park. Eric Evans in the second of the Mustang has Ian Duggan for company on the next row, ahead of Ed McDermott in the One Motorsport Mercedes and David Holloway for Century Motorsport in an Aston Martin. Getting towards the back of the grid now, Team Brit, Aaron Morgan should make progress there. We're getting into some of the Pro-Am entries now who have slightly shorter pit stops than the Silvers. We'll cover that later. Morgan's got Kavi Jundu for company ahead of James Kay, another ex-BTCC man. The second of the Century BMWs is going to be started by Michael Johnston, and at the back of the field it will be Harry George for Enduro Motorsport. Well, the cars making their way around towards the start of what is going to be a fantastic 3 hours of racing. 4 onboard cameras to bring you right into the heart of the action. The number 4 Mercedes will have one of them, so too will Alexander West's Garage 59 McLaren. We've already seen the Sky Tempesta Racing number 93 car. We will have you covered on every angle over the next 3 hours of racing. 3 mandatory pit stops to be made by all of the cars. Driver changes throughout. The threat of rain over the next couple of hours as well. Always the threat of safety cars as well. Over the last 10 years, 5 of the Silverstone 500s have been safety car affected, and that can turn a team's strategy on its head. Here they come then, the green Mercedes of Team ABBA Racing, starting from pole position. That is Richard Neary, John Ferguson alongside for Ram Racing, who will get the jump into Copse Corner at the beginning of this blue-ribboned event in the Intelligent Money British GT Championship. Round number 3 of the season gets underway when the red lights go out. That happens now, and the roar builds as they head towards turn 1. Not a good start made by John Ferguson from second. Neary will have the lead. To the outside goes Cottingham, to the inside goes Loggy. They've both jumped the number 15 car, with Cottingham getting up into second in the first corner from 4th on the grid. Single file the Mercedes will run. Andrew Howard jumping into 5th position. Looks like the Century Motorsport BMW is still languishing further down the order than they'd like. GT3 are cleanly through the first few corners. What about GT4? The Ginetta's trying to make progress on the outside line. They just about keep it within track limits, and we're side by side already for that GT4 race lead. That looked as though Zach Meakin was under some big pressure from the Optimum McLaren heading down the straight. Richard Neary leads at Stowe Corner. Big dive by Andrew Howard, right back onto his Alton Park form, isn't he? He was making some great overtakes a few weeks ago. He's into the top 4. Joe Osborne, what a start.
That was amazing, so clean. James Cottingham got the jump. I was looking out the window. He timed it perfectly, got all the way past Ferguson before they had to break into turn 1. Backing up there, he got the last one of the Paddock GT3 cars there, having to get over that inside curve I was talking about earlier. You can see how big it is when you can see underneath the car. But Ferguson, I thought, looked racy. He was psyching Neary out. But unfortunately, all spinner there for the Mercedes GT4. Everyone avoids well. Just needs to wait there. There'll be a gap and he can just rejoin. Costing to the inside and Neary. Costing looks like the man who's got the pace at this moment in time, doesn't it?
He's already lasted longer than he did in the Silverstone 500 a year ago, where he crashed out at Club corner on the first lap. Richard Neary nearly loops it coming out of the loop, ironically, holds on to the race lead, but you're on board with Cottingham in second place. He's got the momentum, he's got the run. Is he going to be given the inside line down to Brooklands? Of course not. This is Richard Neary we're talking about. Moves to the middle of the road to defend. He is going to be a very difficult man to pass here, and James Cottingham needs to remember that this is a 3-hour race. He's got ample opportunities to get past this Mercedes. And Joe, when you come up against someone like Richard Neary, you know you're not going to be given an easy time.
Yeah, Richard is hard and fair, but he is always hard, so you know that is a constant with him. Yeah, the team would have definitely reminded James after that mega start, right, we've already got 2 places, mate, let's chill, take a breath. You've got one of the best teammates in Johnny Adams to give this car to, so you don't need to do all the heavy lifting. You chill, you're paying the bills, have a good time, you don't need to be stressed about it. The car's still nose to tail, still moves going everywhere. So we see one of the team Parker Porsches looking down the inside of Andrew Gilbert, running a little bit wide there. The race director will start to get on top of these track limits pretty soon as well, so that's another thing we need to factor in.
Indeed so. Century Motorsport BMW here, right in the heart of the battle as they make their way through Maggots and Beckett's. Now within GT4, no longer Zach Meakin leading the way, because it is going to be the Optimum Motorsport number 90 car, which was started by Charles Clark. They have found their way through to the lead, so McLaren leads in the GT4 category. You can tell the GT4s because their headlights are yellow as opposed to the white of the GT3s. They're also noticeably slower than the GT3 cars, and they've already started to separate themselves, with the exception of Andre Borodin, who, as we've seen a few times in the past, is busy battling the GT4 cars in the early stages. So Clark leads the way in GT4, ahead of Meakin in second, and third place for Josh Miller in the Aston Martin. Those three at the moment, Joe, gapping the rest of the field.
Yeah, we saw how fast that new McLaren Artura was at Alton Park, and bad luck already for the Toro Verde car of Ian Duggan that's going into the box. Can't see any visible damage. A bit of visible damage I could see though on the Ferguson car, the 15, the front left, as we see another little look there. So on the front left, sorry, it's a bit of yellow tape. It's not super obvious, but I heard that it had a bit of contact when the GT4's on the way to the grid. So it'll be interesting to see if that hurts at all. See a lunge going into that second part of the complex there, but then Mike Price gets the drive out, and that is a common theme today. And that's the opposite of slow in, fast out for the Sky Tempesta car there.
Yeah, side by side they will run. This is the fight for 13th place then. Further up the road though, that's Brendan Aribe up the inside of John Ferguson. Now, if you watched the Silverstone 500 over the last couple of years, you'll definitely remember Brendan Aribe. He's put in some fantastic performances over recent years, and he's just gained a position there into the top 5. You're right, Joe. Ferguson looks as though he's struggling a little bit, and he's just fading down the order. But again, not necessarily a bad thing, keeping out of trouble. The race could still come to them. This is only the second lap of what we anticipate will be something in the region of 85 or 86 laps to be completed if we avoid a safety car, which so far we have. Kevin Say goes through Copse Corner, having fallen behind Mike Price in the end, so the Mercedes up to 12.
Yeah, so we've seen Mercedes on board following Neary. Now we're on board of the McLaren. We can see that Mercedes in front. Where's its strength? She's a lot of curve there on the left. He's got to get it hooked up here. Got to concentrate on opening up this last Beckett's corner, try and get the run onto the straight. So let's see, is there any speed differential? Looks pretty even at the moment, doesn't it? The McLaren used to have a much bigger top speed advantage, but the new Evo has more downforce, thus more dragging. Actually, that BMW, look at that rocket ship out dragging all the way down. So now we've actually lost a place. BMW's a little bit wide. Can we get a run? No, the BMW looks quick. Darren Lung looks on it. I think he's going to be in front of Mike Price by the end of this lap, maybe even the next corner.
This for 12th place, having started 18th, the big red Beamer, but it can't quite find a way through for the time being. The orange McLaren in this group, by the way, is the Enduro car of Morgan Tilbrook, down 2 places from where he started. I thought he would move forward. The exact opposite has happened, but that can so easily happen, Joe. The early exchanges, we saw how busy it was through those first few corners. If you make the wrong choice, you go left when you should go right, it can cost you a couple of seconds, and today, that's a couple of positions.
Yeah, frustratingly so. As we see the BMW down to the inside, it looks like Price was given a lot of room there, easily done, and now their roles reverse. Oh, I could see a little bit of contact there. Sky Tempesta car around the outside. I think Mike Price in that green Mercedes was so busy looking in his mirror that he didn't look in front and somehow missed that massive BMW. A little bit of front end contact. I would have thought the BMW's definitely okay, but the radiator and the splitter on that Mercedes can get damaged, so we need to keep an eye on that. But yeah, as you said, easily to lose 2 or 3 spaces as a driver, it's never your fault. Someone else messed you up, but yeah, you think you're going to go left of the car and he kills your momentum. Suddenly everyone else comes streaming past as we see a horde of 720 McLarens hounding the back now as Tilbrook runs wide. Is that going to have lost him any momentum? Looks like it, because Smith is down his inside now. Is that going to bring Lucky Kira through as well? So one mistake, 2 places lost it. You predicted the future, mate.
Well, absolutely. I mean, honestly, it's so close in that midfield bunch that you just can't afford to put a wheel wrong. Fantastic racing this, though. What a great sight and sound they make, and what a great spectacle British GT is going to be throughout the course of 2023. Back on board with Kevin Say then, the Sky Tempesta Racing team watching on from within the pit lane. Chris Froggatt will be jumping on board. He's the man in your picture there. He'll be jumping on board at the first pit stop, but right now I think he's enjoying himself watching his car in the midst of the battles. Race still being led by Richard Neary, by the way, by only 3.5 tenths over James Cottingham. Those two starting to gap, logging in third now. Howard fourth, Arib in fifth, looks as though he's got decent pace. And this then the battle for sixth place. Ferguson sixth, Balfe in the Lamborghini is seventh, and Mark Radcliffe right on his tail in eighth position. Balfe in the Barwell Motorsport Lamborghini. That is going to keep confusing me. Keeping out of trouble so far, but I'm sure he will be looking to move a bit further forward. We know that car should have good race pace.
Yeah, Radcliffe flashing his headlights there. All the drivers have a button on the steering wheel. Allows 3 flashes per corner. Absolutely pointless, but does it feel great when you press that button? And that's actually a second car for them this weekend. They had a crash in FP1 as he goes down to the inside. Let's hope he doesn't need a third car, and he gets the job done. That was great respect from Balfe in the Lamborghini. He could have / should have turned in on him there. That was a proper lunge. So yeah, they had a bit of an incident in FP1, so luckily Optimum had a spare car. That battle we were watching earlier with Lung at the front, that was for P12. Yeah. So I'm not belittling them. That shows you how much everyone has got their elbows out as we go back to lead battle, back on board with James Cottingham. Let's have a look at the balance of the car. So what am I looking at? I'm looking at his steering wheel. So turn 1 coming up, Copse Corner. Should be taken in 4th gear probably at the start of the race when you're heavy on fuel. Maybe 5th later on when you're light. To turn it in. Front end looks good. Doesn't look too much understeer. Nothing from the rear. There's no opposite lock. Didn't really gain time, but didn't lose time. The problem with following a Mercedes is it is the most aero-heavy car out of all of the field, which then means the wake is so dirty. So through these corners, you might get a run now, but is he going to understeer out of here and have to wait for the throttle? And he does just slightly lose that momentum, doesn't he? So he won on the way in, but lost on the way out, and that's the important bit. Winning on the way out is how you overtake at the next corner.
And it's one of those sequences of corners where it's tempting to go all-out attack going through Maggots and Beckett's, but as we saw, has a knock-on effect for the next 2 or 3 corners. So Cottingham has to start again, creeps closer to Neary through Stowe Corner, and now down towards one of the better overtaking opportunities on the lap, down into the club complex, closes under braking, not quite close enough to stick it up the inside for the time being, but there's no doubt about it, there is pace in this 2Cs Motorsports Mercedes, and James Cottingham, who was the winner of the opening round at Alton Park, wants a second of the season.
Yeah, you can see Neary have a little snap of oversteer, that second apex of club, so the rear just stepped out on him, and Cottingham got a run. Again, Cottingham needs to try and keep the front of his car in the clean end. He's doing it well. Even half a car offset just gives you a bit of front end. Neary defended into there, so you're going to be slow out of here. You need to open this up, James. Get to the right, get it open, get it in. A little wide off the apex, Neary, but he'll actually carry good momentum. It's going to be hard to get a run again. It's now going to start to get warm in these cars. The drivers haven't really had this problem this weekend, but after the first 10 minutes, the adrenaline starts to wear off and you suddenly realise how warm you are. Are we going to start to see some fatigue potentially over the next 30-40 minutes for these amateur drivers?
I'm worn out already. We've only done 10 minutes. This has been breathless stuff, hasn't it? Here is the battle for second in GT4. Zach Meakin in the Porsche ahead of Josh Miller in the R Racing Aston Martin. They make their way up through Club Corner, down the Sir Lewis Hamilton straight. This battle for second place, some way distant of the class leader, about 3 or 4 seconds away from the car that leads the class, which remember is still the number 90 machine of Charles Clark. Into the braking zone at Village, the Aston Martin peaking to the outside line, not trying to go round the outside as such, just trying to open up the entry to the corner, does the same through the loop now, so that in theory Josh Miller can get onto the throttle a bit sooner, carry the speed down the Wellington Straight and into that braking zone at Brooklands, which, as you were saying on your track walk, Joe, is a great place to try and pass because it's so wide on the entry.
Yeah, there's a lot of room to send the car there, but it also becomes a bit of no man's land. You don't really know where you are. We're also going to just start to look at these track limit walks warnings as well. So each driver, or sorry, the car per hour will get 5 warnings, then a drive-through. We've actually got car 8400 Gilbert already on his 4th one, which is quite impressive / annoying. So yeah, it's going to be hard work for him. We can see a bit of damage on that front right of the Porsche as well. I wonder if that has come from the rear of that Aston Martin. It's hard to see, but getting a bit of a visual representation there. There's the leader in the Optimum McLaren in front, and it's a good gap already. What is it, 5.5 seconds nearly? That's a great little opening stint so far from that car, sorry.
As the GT4 leaders go through Copse Corner, the GT3 leaders are going through Abbey, and that is a spin, I'm afraid, for the Team Parker Porsche. The number 66 car started by Nick Jones. This is down at Club. There is bodywork on the road, so presumably another car involved, Joe.
Yeah, I recognise that. Looks like a McLaren bonnet to me.
Oh.
I've done enough of them in my time, so I think we'll see a McLaren losing a bonnet somewhere, and it probably will need to pit in. We saw at Alton Park Marcus Clutton lose a bonnet and had to pit soon after. Although it is just a bonnet, it's so integral to the cooling of the car, getting the hot air off the back of the radiator and helping the car keep in its parameters. So we'll have to keep an eye out for that one. But this Aston Martin of our racing looks quick, doesn't it? It looks like it's trying to get past this Porsche. Be interesting to know, not all of the cars necessarily are full of fuel. They don't have that minimum time. So if you were risking there might be a safety car early on, why would you put a full stint of fuel in? Your hand would be cooled early, but it might give you a bit of performance earlier on in the race. So there's a lot of subplots going on already.
And that's one of the great fascinations of these 3-hour races. There is your bonnetless McLaren, by the way, and it is the number 13 car that is Lucky Carer, car he shares with Ewan Hankey, and as Joe predicted, into the pit lane it will come. So we'll try and piece together exactly how that car met with the Team Parker Porsche, which goes back past it now, staying out on track, Nick Jones, but unfortunately Lucky Carer's race already derailed.
Yeah, that's a big hit. That isn't a tap. What he's done to the bumper and even the front crash structure that sits there, the radiator looks bent as well. So I think that car, the engineer will give it the signal of doom, which is the old fingers to the neck and slice it, because I think that is done for the day. So unlucky Carer is our first victim. So let's have a look.
Oh.
So he was already spun by Alex West, and then Lucky Carer must be unsighted, I would say. Then goes in the back of Mark Smith, so I called it completely wrong. So we go on board a Sky Tempesta car. Look at Alex West on the inside, just spun the car around. Everyone knows something's gone on, but they can't see it because of the size of that BMW, they can't see through it. So yeah, into the garage, the guys will have a quick look over, but you can just see that metal bit behind the bumper. That's the radiator, and obviously if that's bent and it's got a leak, then the car effectively isn't going to cool itself. So maybe our first penalty as well of the race. It looked like Alex West couldn't be anything but guilty. Front to rear contact, spun the Porsche around of Nick Jones. I'm not saying it's intentional, but with a crime must come a punishment.
I'm afraid so. Speaking of, stop-go penalty for car 86. Who saw that coming? Everyone. That will be for track limits, I'm sure, the Toro Verde car, which we were mentioning earlier on. Right, leaders through Luffield, and it's no longer a two-way fight for the lead. It's almost a five-way fight, because Ian Loggy has reeled in the other two Mercedes, and Andrew Howard, who had the fastest lap a while ago, is also closing in. That fastest lap, though, has been stolen from him by Brendan Arieb in the McLaren right behind in 5th place. So 4th and 5th places, arguably the two fastest cars on the track, gaining on the leaders. We've got a real race on our hands here with nearly 15 minutes gone.
And what's great to see is that's 3 different makes of car doing exactly the same lap time within a 10th. Mercedes, Aston Martin, and now McLaren with Brendan Arieb. Brendan Arieb's also the first car on track that is a guest entry, so he's not doing the full one. We've just had a safety car called. That's going to be for that debris, I would suspect. So as they back up, the cars do have a light system to warn the driver of it. The teams will also obviously be on the radios, but I think this could be a short safety car. But who's going to gamble and box early? I expect to see nearly everyone in to get rid of one of these pits.
One car I'm looking at is Morgan Tilbrook, buried in traffic. This is a prime opportunity, isn't it, for a quick car that's stuck in traffic to get out of that traffic and plug their pro driver in. Because remember, the AMs have started the race within GT3. They've got their pros hungry, waiting in the garage, ready to have a go. And we know they've got some serious pace inside them. So we will see some pit stops now, I'm sure.
Yeah, the only added issue here is the cars really need to catch the safety car to be going the same speed. If they box under green, then they actually go a lap down on how long the pit stop takes. The GT4 leader is in, so they think he's being followed by the first 4 in GT4. The Ginetta wasn't told clear yes or no, so I suspect it's going to be tight. If these GT4 cars can actually get out before the safety car comes around. So it's obvious you should box because the cars are going slower, but how much slower? They actually haven't caught the safety car. It looks like they're actually being held up by one of the GT4s going slower. So driver's going to get out. They're going to close the door. They've both got to get back behind the white line with the door closed, and then the refueling can start. On the McLaren, you see two fueling guys. One is the fuel pipe and one is a vent pipe. So you'll see slightly different formats on that, but both drivers must always be behind the line, and then they run back out and you do the tyres with the driver change at the end.
So minimum pit stop time for GT4 is 165 seconds plus an extra 14 if you are a silver graded driver combo. That means they will lose a lap. They will drop behind the GT3 leaders, but they're still losing less net time than doing this under green.
Yeah, unless the GT3 leaders pit and give them a really big help. So we might actually see a GT4 car leading out right here who doesn't box. So who hasn't pitted? Two GT4 cars. All the GT3s I've seen in the top 10 are all boxing. This is going to be a busy pit lane. Everyone's got their own space, but not enough space to get in and out. Some teams only have enough fuel rigs for one out of the two cars. So let's see what 2Cs do. It is chaos there. 50 kilometers an hour might feel slow, but when you're nose to tail trying to spot a 5-meter piece of tarmac where you need to park parallel to get done. So there you can see one of the fuel rigs on the left, but the right-hand side one is only to change tyres. Your drivers are even struggling to get back to the white line between the cars there. This is going to be interesting. It's going to definitely be a bit of a shuffle. And actually you see the Neary car using a dump churn. So that's how little fuel they've used. They don't want to use their fuel rig, and the same the Sky Tempesta. They can get 20 litres in from that rather than 200 if needed from that big silver urn you can see on top of those boxes in the pit lane.
Now, in theory, all of these pit stops should take the same amount of time because you only serve your compensation time at the third and final pit stop. So in theory, all of the GT3 cars should be in and out in 135 seconds. That's from pit entry line to pit exit line. So there's a bit of calculating to be done. There is the front of a McLaren, a nice little souvenir for the marshals, and I'm sure the team will want that back by the end of the day. Down off the jacks goes the Team ABBA Racing Mercedes, and now they sit and wait for that minimum pit stop time to elapse, which is a safety thing, but actually here, because of the fueling situation that Joe was just alluding to, it means there's no advantage to whether you have to use the fuel churns or the fuel pump itself. With Sam Neary in the car, sat waiting, and as soon as he's given the signal, off he'll go. Yeah,
exactly. I'm surprised they haven't pushed that car back a little bit to give it an easier swing out at the moment. At the moment, they've got a little bit of space, but if that car, which is beyond them, in between them and that other McLaren, were to box, then they're different. So Nick Jones, they've kind of had to roll the dice there, haven't they, and do the opposite strategy to everyone else and hope for another safety car before the end of the next stint. So that is the race leader. The car that had a spun and sort of was involved in the safety car cooling has stayed out. I think Neary in their pit position is good, but look, actually Enduro have done a good job. They've pushed that McLaren back to give that a clear line. Pit lane's not clear. The DK cars jumped them, so they're back down to second position. I thought it'd be topsy-turvy, but I didn't think it'd be the first two straight away anyway.
Indeed, so Porsche lead in GT3, Ginetta lead in GT4, but that is by virtue of not having pitted. Out of the pit lane then goes the number 4 car, as Joe just said, it has jumped ahead of car number 8 through the pit stops, and the number 4 machine will then have the lead. Driver changes, of course, now taking place as well, and so within car number 4 we've got Johnny Adam, knows a thing or two about winning British GT races, and Sam Neary behind. They're working the cars hard, even on this outlap. We may be behind the safety car, but whilst they're catching the train, it's a chance to get the tyre temps up.
Yeah, it's also hard for the teams. They're allowed tyre ovens, so the tyres should be at operating temperature, but the teams won't want it in the oven for potentially an hour. If there wasn't a safety car, we wouldn't have seen these cars for another 40 minutes. So they've probably hedged their bets and got them 70% of the way there on a bit of a slow roast. So with it being Sunday, they want that roast dinner perfect, and they're probably then just bringing them up. I even think Johnny Adam there, listening to the onboard, was short shifting to save a bit of fuel. So he's going to have the chance maybe to extend that. So although we're under safety car, there's still strategy in play, and any bit of fuel you can save and use at the end of green flag running might be the difference, as we see GT4s and our technical race GT3 leading car pit now. So at the moment we only have 3 cars behind the safety car, and the way it will pan out is those cars will get waved around and we should pick up Johnny Adam in the DK Engineering Mercedes.
So, what do we think the reason is for Team Parker pitting a lap later? Okay, they've got a slightly less congested pit lane to deal with. I suppose that's a slightly less risky moment to come and pit, or was it perhaps just as simple as the lines of communication getting crossed? Because surely this is now a disadvantage coming in that 1 lap later.
Yeah, they didn't have any track position to lose, so they're not going to lose a lap. So they've not really lost much. The only thing they will have lost is going to be a lot more GT4s in between them. Team Parker running 3 Porsches, 2 in GT3, 1 in GT4. Again, probably couldn't pit all 3 at the same time.
True.
And normally teams run it, whoever has track position, which car of the team is in front, gets the choice. So I would have thought that is what happened there. You can see Ed McDermott talking to Mikey Broadhurst, on the right-hand side, maybe telling him a couple of things. Mikey didn't look particularly interested in, if we're being honest. I think the AM sometimes feels like he's got to talk to him and make him feel better. But I think the race director probably is waiting for everyone to finish their pits, get everyone bunched up, and then we'll go again. Maybe a lap or 2 and we'll be going. You see the seat insert clearly on the sides of driver. There's no way you could share that car and both be comfortable. So get the insert in. The mechanics are doing the wheels. 5 wheel studs on the Mercedes. So you'll see the rattle gun doing 5 movements per wheel, and it looks like they're going for brand new tyres. The way the weather's been, we've had a lot of wet running, so the teams, I think, have a set of new tyres for every single stint today. So I think that at least is an even playing field. So this guy now is actually the race leader, because that's the last GT3 to stop. So the race director has a slightly lesser headache, as it were, because he has got the technical race leader behind him.
And that man is Andre Borodin then, the Greystone GT McLaren, which was running at the back of the GT3 field. Absolutely nothing to lose, and so they may as well stay out there, get their moment in the sun, and get some track position perhaps as well. But he's now going to be an AM driver up against some very, very good professional drivers. We've got 9 factory drivers here on the grid today, and they're all out there now for this second stint of the race, which means that the action is only going to further intensify, because we know now that these drivers who have just jumped into the cars, particularly within GT3, all are capable of lapping within a couple of tenths of each other. So overtaking isn't going to be easy, but the competition should get even closer.
Yeah, again, and I'm just looking through that field. Who really stands out? Marciello in P8, that one definitely stands out. Ross Gunn, we've seen very quick at Alton Park. Ben Barnacle, former factory driver from McLaren, so knows that car. Now with Lexus, he's quick. And then you've got Sam Neary and Johnny Adam in front, who are not slow, but I just think that Mercedes maybe doesn't have the car under them that the pros want. It's such a great AM car, but maybe for the pros it's that little bit hard to hustle. And it's a hard thing to describe. What is hustling a car? The Mercedes is just so sort of soft and benign. It doesn't give you a lot of feeling, but when it goes, it's really snappy. Whereas those other cars I alluded to just have a bit more feel about them. So it's be interesting to see how it pans out. But yeah, with Borodin leading, technically the safety car is good to come in whenever. I hope Greystone screenshot that, because I'm not sure we're going to see Borodin leading many of our races early on in his racing career. You need to put that on social media, don't you, and show your friends how good you are.
Indeed. So we've got a GT4 car, by the way, in second place overall. That's Stuart Middleton in the Ginetta, number 56. So those 2 cars, they're actually second and third behind the safety car, because there's a wave-by going on now to allow not Andre Borodin through, but just the number 17 GT4 McLaren. So they're now in vaguely race order. You've got the GT3 McLaren that leads overall, the GT4 orange and grey Ginetta in second place, and then a whole host of GT4 cars that are a lap down by virtue of having just made a pit stop behind the safety car. But of course, when these 2 pit eventually, they will get that lap straight back. You then have to go a long way down the queue to start finding the front runners really in GT3 of those who have pitted. It's Johnny Adam there, car number 4, who is the highest placed of those cars to have made a pit stop. Sam Neary in the green Mercedes behind him, and Ben Barnacote in the McLaren, started by Brendan Ariba, another car there, Joe, that gained out of the pit stops.
Yeah, it did really well. The Optimum guys are actually in the middle of the pit lane, so there's a separate sort of gap between the garages, and they've effectively stolen a bit of space out of that no man's land, which I think has probably given them a nice clear entry and exit out of their pit stop there. So it's interesting to see what's going to happen next. They're trying to get everyone there going from it. So yeah, we spoke about Middleton being second overall. I said I would expect him to go forwards. Maybe not making 30 places or so, but you're welcome. I'll give you the lottery numbers later after the race round if you want.
Yes, I'll hold you to that one. So Borodin, we know why he stayed out, because he had no track position to start with. It's a chance to get out there and do something different. I'm intrigued as to what Raceway Motorsport are doing here, though, because Middleton, this is a car that has the pace to win on merit. They don't need to play any clever strategy games. Is this a stroke of genius staying out there? Of course, he's bought himself a lap on the rest of the GT4 field. Or is this something where now their hopes really hinge on another safety car?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately enough, I've waited enough hours of my life talking about strategy for this race. Did it last year, had a great run, we finished third. There's just so many permutations with this extra pit stop. We go on about it a lot, but it's so good because the teams have an awful headache. The only way I see it working for that 56 Ginetta is another safety car within the next stint. And his stint is actually that next part. So realistically, I think he's only got fuel for another 40, 45 minutes or so. If there's another safety car then, it becomes almost status quo again, and he's potentially got a lead lap depending on where that safety car picks them up. There's a lot of permutations. I would give it a 5% less, 2% chance of working, but they've rolled the dice. They've obviously worked out maybe we're not going to get a podium today with everything that's going on. Let's try it. But yeah, without a safety car by the end of Stuart Middleton's stint, then they're a lap down, lap and a half down, in fact, with the other GT4s that have got this time back under the safety car.
The chances are that we may end up with another safety car later on. The stats tell us that in the last 10 years of racing here at Silverstone, 5 of those races have been safety car affected, almost always within the opening few laps. But most of the time, if we do have an early safety car, the trend says that we get another 1 or maybe 2 later on in the race. Twice we've had 3 safety car appearances back in 2015 and 2016. So, you know, people mock me sometimes for my love of stats, but they are there for a reason, and the trends sometimes do come true. We avoided a safety car last year, but we've had one early today, and of course that just congests the field. It's a bigger, more competitive field anyway, so the likelihood of there being some incidents is arguably higher to start with. So maybe it's worth the gamble.
Yeah, I don't mean to mock you on your stats, I just find them incredibly boring, but safety car is in this lap. So, yeah, why do safety cars breed safety cars? Everyone's grouped together in a bit of a mix match as well. You've got GT4s. So he was very lucky that he came out of the pits in front of this car. So he's been given the wave round, but he's actually going to not be on the back of them. So Borodin's got this race start under control. What's he going to do? He's holding them up and he's going to go. He's going to drop it. He's got a nice gap now, so he's going to have 5.5 miles of Silverstone GP fully to himself. Remember, the GT3s cannot overtake a GT4 before that white thick line that the cars are just crossing now. It's all quite strung up at the moment, up to the pit wall, nearly down the inside of Adam. Where's that going to go?
Yeah, here we are on board with Johnny Adam. He's been forced out off the edge of the track because Sam Neary, I think, has gone through, but look at the sea of GT4 traffic ahead. This has got disaster written all over it. 3 wide, side by side between the Mercedes, and Adam on the outside line might just hang on. Here comes Barnicoat as well in the McLaren. Then you've got Ross Gunn, then Raffaele Marciello. This is the stuff that dreams are made of. Down onto the hanger straight they go. And again, Sam Neary up alongside the yellow Mercedes. This is for the net race lead, and Barnicoat makes it 3 wide on the grass. Ducking and diving in amongst the traffic. Somehow, it is still Johnny Adam ahead, but this is getting too busy for words, Joe.
This is incredible. I don't know why you get so excited. This is how I drive on the M25. You just got to find that free bit of space, haven't you? But everyone's done really well. I haven't seen a bit of contact yet. Barnicoat is a bit deep there. He's got to get around that other Optimum McLaren. That's the hard bit when you've got a team with 2 cars. Barnicoat, that's his sister car technically. You don't want to hurt them. Neary running a bit right. Look at that cluster of cars. Dan Harper, big slide in the BMW. I have to say, everyone is being really respectful. The GT4s, you've got to remember, are on their limit. The GT3's just got that advantage of the extra momentum around these high-speed corners with that downforce. But the GT4s are still hustling on and on their limit. And it actually looks like Johnny Adams just had a little break, hasn't he? Probably had his first breath for this first 3 quarters of the lap.
Maybe I should have more faith in the drivers, but I cannot believe we got through that without any major contact. That was fantastic stuff, and that is why we rave about these professional drivers within the GT3 class, but also GT4. They really do know what they're doing. So, Johnny Adam almost now on the tail of Andre Borodin, so that will be to get into the actual race lead. He's already in the lead of those who have made a pit stop. This is the fight behind them then between Sam Neary in the green Mercedes, the red McLaren of Ben Barnicoat, and behind them the grey and white Aston Martin of Ross Gunn. They rumble their way up out of Luffield, where already the lead has changed, and Johnny Adam hits the front.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting for Borodin in that blue and yellow McLaren, because he's going to want to push on, but now he's effectively a lap down. Is he going to let people go, or is he going to turn in on Ben Barnicoat and lose him half a second? I think it was the latter one there. Is Ross Gunn now got a run in that Beach Dean Aston Martin. Marciello is on their case. Marvin Kirchhoffer, all these factory drivers absolutely on it. Although we still have 2.5 hours to go, every lap counts because you need this time in the bank and, more importantly, track position. If you can get in front of another car and get in that clean air, you're going to look after your tyres a little bit more and your life is going to be easier towards the end of your stint.
Marvin Kirchhoffer and Marcus Clutton both making up good ground on that lap as well. They are the two McLarens halfway down the Hanger Straight, just behind Raffaele Marciello, who was looking up the inside of Andre Borodin for 5th position. I would imagine the Mercedes will appear first. Yes, it does, and brings with him Kirchhoffer in the Garage 59 McLaren and Marcus Clutton in the Enduro car. So Enduro did gain some ground out of all of that, not necessarily in the way we expected them to, but they're inside the top 10 now, ahead of Dan Harper in the BMW 9th and Rob Bell completing the top 10. Leaders out of Club Corner then. There are the overall race leaders. One man we haven't mentioned though, Joe, is a certain Jules Gounon.
Yeah, he has lost a lot of place, hasn't he? We saw him running in a comfortable third when Loggy was in at the start. P18 there, just flashing his headlights over the new pitch straight. It'd be interesting to see what happened. We know it was tight at 2Cs, but they've lost a lot of time. I would guess they've lost 20 seconds or so in the pit stop, which is really equated to what? 14, 15 places. That's going to be a long afternoon for those guys now. What do they need? They probably need another safety car in a little while to bunch everyone up and go again. His pace is good, Gounon, but it's not going to be better than the pros in front of him. That's the problem. A tenth or two here and there, but that is going to be a hard one. It'll be interesting to see from the 2Cs what happened. Harper down the inside of Clutton. He is on the move. That's 2 places in the last 2 laps. He was past that car at turn 1 I saw out the window. So he is absolutely motoring. That BMW round here really seems hooked up, doesn't it?
It does, doesn't it? Front engine cars do tend to do well here at Silverstone, in fairness, but the BMW being so new is a little bit of an unknown quantity. But Dan Harper up into 7th place now. Clutton 8th, Bell 9th, and Sandy Mitchell, the only driver ever to win 2 Silverstone 500s. He is inside the top 10 as well now, ahead of McLeod, Froggatt, O'Brien, Gounon 14th, as we said, and Jules Gounon is 15 seconds off the race lead already with a sea of traffic to negotiate. One of the GT3 McLarens just bailed for the pit lane as well, I saw, but at the front of the field, Johnny Adam doing his best now to start to escape. He's 1.7 seconds up the road from Sam Neary, who's got a train of cars queuing up behind him.
Yeah, 9/10 faster than Neary in that last lap. Let's have a look at a replay. Lovely lunge into Brooklands. Get it down the inside. It looked like Clutton was closing the door, realised, runs wide. Clutton's looking for a cutback. There's a V there. Clutton's getting tight and the door just closes. It's a hard one, that one. Harper's done the traditional V line and Clutton has just got a bit of extra apex speed, so it keeps it narrow, but that gap was always diminishing. Clutton expected that. He was probably asking the question of Harper, are you going to leave me a car width, which is then going to lose you time on the exit and I might get a run on you. So good, hard, clean racing by both.
An incident between cars 11 and 13 had been investigated, but no further action. That was the contact that took Lucky Kira out and brought about the safety car. Jules Gounon then with a lot of work to do. We saw Ian Loggy watching on from the pit garage, and down now at that end of the pit lane is Bryn Lucas.
Well, we can see that Jules is having a bit of a nightmare out there. He's climbed 4 places in the last few moments. But Ian, what happened? What was the delay and what caused this tumble down the order?
Yeah, so there was the safety car, so everyone scrambled for the box to change drivers, take fuel, and to change tyres. Our sister car was in front of us, so he was in the box in front. And then there was a BMW GT4, which is in the next door garage, that had came in and had came too far forward. So it never left enough room for us to get to exactly where we wanted to be. So where the car was parked, our wheel gun wouldn't allow us to get the left front wheel off, and they had to end up borrowing another wheel gun off the other car to get the wheel off. So we lost 28 seconds in the pits, so we're quite far back. But he was 22nd. He's been out there 10 minutes, and he's 14th now. So it's not dead yet, but it's going to be a tough old 2.5 hours.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to ask for somebody to be in the car and try and recover it, it'd be Gounon, wouldn't it? If you were to pick any of the drivers up and down this order.
He's the man for sure. He's definitely got the ability to get us up the table, and I'm sure every lap he's going to steal a few places. So he's out there. I'm not sure how long. Probably if there's another safety car, it'll be a short one. and then we'll go long at the end. But yeah, let's wait and see how it unfolds.
Cheers, Ian. Thank you.
Cheers.
Yeah, thanks very much, Bryn. So Jules Gounon with it all to do now, down in 14th place. And it was kind of what you suspected there, Joe, just the congestion in the pit lane.
Yeah, so we can see Johnny Adam already sat in the car. You can just see the splitter of Gounon. So they should be leaving 2 or 3 seconds separately. What's going on? There's a lot of confusion. They're looking for something. They're obviously looking for that spare gun, I think, that Ian Loggy was talking about. That poor wheel guy there knows that gun on the boom can't reach, and they're having to wait for the sister car's boom on the pit stop on the left to undo their wheel. That's so hard for the 2Cs team. I don't know if the communication could have been a little bit better. Someone maybe needs to just go and grab that gun. You can actually undo and do up these car wheels with an electric gun, but the regulations don't allow it. So they have to be these air-powered ones, which obviously need a connection. We haven't managed to get wireless ones just yet. So they're limited with their range, and that is what has hurt them. You can see Loggy in the background was fuming. Not always a bad thing. Getting a fiery Scotsman in a race car later on has proven a very good tactic in the past. He was talking about if there's another safety car, they're going to box. They're not, because the pro cannot do more than 100 minutes. So they need to realistically do at least 25 in this first one to be able to maximise that 100 minutes. So you take 25 off 100, you've got 75 minutes left. That is right on the limit of what these cars can do fuel-wise. So that is what they're playing to. There's no regulations, it's just a physical limit of how much fuel they carry and how they burn it. Luckily for them, the Mercedes is probably the most efficient engine out there. The other end of the scale is the McLaren that struggles to do 66, 67 minutes around here is a big ask. So suddenly you've got an 8-minute window difference between some cars, which really goes, you can see that 56 car Middleton hustling on. Sometimes I think you look at that and you go, I think the driver knows they're not on the right strategy and they're just out there now driving with a lot of frustration. But he's in a good bit of clear space and his pace is good. But like I said, they need another safety car realistically in the next 25 to 30 minutes to stay in a hunt of it. You see the shot there, that is actually the technical race leader in my opinion, the Optimum 90 car. That is going on really well. That was strong at Alton Park. Jack Brown in the car, third year in British GT, first year in this Artura, like all the other guys obviously, and he's really, really cracking on well. And, it's going to be an interesting battle as that all starts to pan out, I think, after the next set of pit stops. The only thing, sorry, to keep talking, is that 29 car is a Pro-Am car, and like you said, that's going to serve 14 seconds less every pit stop until the rest of the race. So Jack Brown's got to pull out a stint every time. Every time he's got to really attack it.
That 29 car, though, does have the full 20 seconds of compensation time to serve at the final pit stop. Academy in trouble. That is the number 62 car in the garage. So that is the Matt Nicol-Jones and Will Moore one that started 5th on the grid within GT4, but a mechanical issue of some sort for the Mustang, unfortunately, and work to be done on the big V8 under the hood before they can get that car back out on track. Also, I mentioned a while ago a McLaren was in the pits. That was James Kell in the number 42 Race Lab car. There is an incident between that car and the number 84 of Fran Rueda that's under investigation. So put the pieces together and come to your own conclusions there, but it's possible that those two cars made a little bit of contact. So already only 40 minutes into this race and we're getting a few of our contenders starting to drop away. This car in particular, I'm sad to see go though, because the Mustang always has gone well here at Silverstone, hasn't it?
Yeah, and we saw Alton Park the last round, they're going really, really well and right at the sharp end. So battle's starting to pan out a bit. They got Malvern in that Porsche on the left, Newton's Championship, the 992 Porsche, and then actually that's the older 991, completely different concept, right? Engine in the wrong place, looks like a VW Beetle, but the 992, the Malvern car, the blue one, the aerodynamics have moved on so far. Every generation of car, we're just going faster and faster. I remember 10 years ago, the 2-minute barrier around here being the holy grail. We're now seeing 56s in qualifying. Such is the arm race. It is really, really impressive.
Fran Rueda here in the number 84 car then. So this is the Greystone GT car that he shares with Andrew Gilbert, which is under investigation for an incident that I just mentioned. So we'll wait and give you further news on that as and when we get it. He's got Scott Malvern behind him. Malvern, remember, that car pitted a lap later than the rest of the GT3 cars, and it means that they're languishing down in 18th position, but are gaining ground, remember, after that spin that they had earlier on. They've got the number 72 of Will Tregurtha right behind them. Wherever you look within GT3, be it at the front, back, or anywhere in between, there are battles to be had. 4 cars here together, and Tregurtha, the man who sticks his nose out on the inside in the Lamborghini, but just can't quite find a way alongside the Porsche as they drop down through through Brooklands Corner. At the front of the field, Johnny Adam, 2.3 seconds to the good over Sam Neary, but Sam weathering the storm now. He looked a bit under pressure earlier on from Ross Gunn. Now 2.5 seconds clear, and it's Gunn who has got the train forming behind him.
Yeah, although Gunn has got in front of Barnacle. We didn't see it, but
yes.
Barnacle was that guy in front. But they are all very close. Like you said, Gunn is the leader of that train. On board of the Ginetta GT4 here in the loop. That's the slowest corner of the lap. Look at the size difference between that Ginetta and the Mustang. Both in the same class, and both will produce a very similar lap time. And that is the beauty of the balanced performance. I was actually going to touch on it when we saw Tregurtha in the Lamborghini behind Mulvin in the Porsche. Looks like that middle sector around Vale Round Club really suited the Porsche as we see the Mustang down to the inside. Is there space there? Not quite, but Matt Cowley is looking on the offensive, isn't he? And these cars will have their traits, their positives and their negatives. What's the Mustang? It probably is top speed. What's the Ginetta? It's probably ability and nobility, if that's a word, in the slow speed, and he is showing it very, very well there. Watch the Mustang now probably start to reel it in. One, because he's got a bit of a slipstream, but two, he's got a massive American V8 pumping through there, showing his inside. Not enough braking there into Cops. You're only on the brakes for 50, 60 metres or so. Ginetta running wide there. Like we're seeing, track limits are starting to get shown through Max and Beck. It's really not a chance to overtake, but you are setting it up coming into the hangar straight. That's the important bit. Hold it over to the right, get it into the left. Nibble or smash. It's a big smash on the left. Look at him. Car width further to the left. Go, full throttle. Get the run. The Ginetta will pull away. I'm not surprised by that. And then go. Let's go for it. Open it up. Really good. Where are we? Under the bridge. Halfway down the straight. Look at it. Reel it in. Is he going to send it on the brakes into Stowe? Show your nose. 3, 2, 1. Now. And let's go. Good on the brakes. Got the inside. Fair by the Ginetta. Gave him the space. I don't know if he was listening to me, but I felt like I was a remote control car then with audio. But the Ginetta fights back on the outside. I got too distracted. Sorry, and Jess has got the inside. Is he going to try and brave it around the outside in that Mustang? No. Looking for another run out of club now. Another long straight coming. Gets balked though. Do you hear him just have to lift out the throttle? Couldn't attack it like he wanted to.
Yeah, clever driving that from Thomas Holland, who's come through the Ginetta one make ranks to now race in the British GT4 Championship. Again, Matt Cowley closing in on in a straight line. Looks to the outside of Abbey. That will give him a much better exit now through the left-hander at Farm, and perhaps sets him up for a dive on the brakes into Village. There is a Mustang-sized gap on the inside, to which Cowley commits. He gets to the apex first, drifts wide, but the next corner's a left-hander. As long as he parks that sizable Mustang on the apex, there shouldn't be a way through for Thomas Holland. He gets a bit too eager on the throttle anyway, and so Cowley will move up into the top 5 now, and look, already starts to stretch his legs down the Wellington Straight and builds up a bit of a margin. News from Bryn in the pits, by the way. James Kellett's a gearbox issue, so unrelated to Fran Rueda, as we perhaps suspected. The number 13 still having its front end rebuilt as well, so thanks to Bryn. Even when we're not hearing from him, he's busy beavering away in the pit lane and digging out the stories, of which there will be plenty.
Yeah, he works damn hard, doesn't he? What was great about that was the 2 onboard cameras. We saw it from both angles, and I have to say, Holland and Cowley there, a lot of respect. A lot of that was side by side, so Holland doesn't mind sort of holding it out there. I think they're going to have a bit of a race, as we see now Barnacote, who was in front of Gunn after that restart, hounding him down. It is going to be an interesting scene. And then we see Kirchhoffer. That gap's closed, and I think one of the fastest cars lap in, lap out, Dan Harper in that Century BMW. This battle is about to get spicy.
It is indeed, as if it hadn't been spicy enough already. Would you believe we're nearly 3/4 of an hour into this race? It's absolutely flying by, and this is the fight for third place. Ross Gunn in the Beach Dean AMR Aston Martin, and Ben Barnacote in behind him in the number 70 car. Now that is a race-by-race entry, the number 70, which means when we get to the end of the race, it doesn't score points. You delete it, essentially, from the finishing positions when it comes to sorting out championship points, but they don't care. They are here just to try and win the race, and they've got a very, very good chance, although drop away ever so slightly from the Aston through Cobb's Corner. That means we can focus instead on Marvin Kirchhoffer here, who is the lap record holder at Silverstone from last year. Did a 158.3, which was the new lap record for a GT3 car around here. At the moment, Johnny Adams' fastest lap of 58.8, half a second or so away from that. But right now, Kirchhoffer isn't thinking about lap times, he's thinking about defending, because Dan Harper looks fast, that BMW performing well down the straights and asking all the right questions right now of the McLaren ahead.
Yeah, Marvin knows the strength of that BMW is its top speed, and that's why he moved over to cover it off before Dan Harper had a chance to show his nose. So Marvin knows that McLaren inside out. Been working together for the last couple of years. Really nice guy and super fast. So he's going to have have a bit of a battle on his hands. The only thing he should be thinking is it worth the battle? Should I be losing 2 or 3 tenths a lap in keeping this position, or should I let him go? I might see him at the end of the stint if he burns his tyres out as Gunn making a move on the Paddock GT4 car. And it's a really hard one. As an egotistical racing driver, losing a place is never good. Giving a place away feels even worse. But the greater good, the big picture, what would Alex West want from his teammate? You would want the car further up, time-wise, rather than, I don't really mind if it's 6th, 5th place. It is all about the time. That's what's going to win you the race, ultimately.
In the pit lane, the 86 car perhaps about to burst back into life. That's good news, but it's an interesting point you bring up there, and perhaps it's a bit of the obvious thing for me to say that there is some ego involved with racing drivers, but with the pros in particular, Joe, I know that what you're saying is right. They don't have to fight for every position, but is that ego perhaps a little bit more of a thing when it is the pros out there, because it's such a stacked grid? They all want to prove that they're the best of the best, and sometimes that bigger picture can get lost.
Yeah, when you're at that level, when you're a factory driver, if you don't think you're the best, then there's something wrong. You've got to have that self-belief in your own ability and mentality to be able to get that car to where it needs to be, which ultimately is at the front. That is what the manufacturer is paying you to do. And if you don't do it, then you're sort of surplus to requirements, and that's what I found with myself, and that's why I'm here this year, not out on the track. So it is so hard. You have to really attack it. Good driving by Bradley Ellis in the 21st Century GT4 McEwan. You actually saw the indicator come on, and you think, oh, he's knocked it on by mistake. But that helps him as well, because it shows the GT3 where I'm going, where you're going to go, and then no one loses as much time. And it is amazing. The better the driver in a GT4, the less time, that both of you lose, and everyone's a winner. And that's pretty rare in life, isn't it?
It is indeed, and we're now really starting to get into that GT4 traffic, and you really get to see not only how it affects the GT3 battle, but how it can possibly open up an opportunity for some overtakes within GT4 too, which was, I think, the case there with the One Motorsport Mercedes gaining a position out of all of that. Just strings out the GT3s momentarily, but Ben Barnicoat really coming back now at Ross Gunn. They've been dropped by Sam Neary now to the tune of a couple of seconds or so, and the McLaren driver closing in through this tight technical middle sector where the mid-engine McLaren will always thrive, and then out onto the Wellington straight. The Aston Martin stretches its legs once more. Is it going to be far enough ahead into Brooklands, though, that Ross Gunn doesn't feel the need to defend? Indeed so, but Dan Harper is up the inside of Marvin Kirchhoffer, who I think realised that time there wasn't much he could do about that, and Harper is into the top 5.
Yeah, and I think that's the best place for a car to be overtaken by. You don't lose that much time. You can take a slightly deeper line into Brooklands and you can go. But I said about it earlier, the cars can change over the stint. Why is that? The main one really is tyre pressures. So the tyre pressures, there's an open window. There's no minimum, there's no maximum, but there's a sweet spot. And to keep them in that operating window is a very hard job that teams have to do. The harder you push, the more oversteer, understeer you get. The higher the pressure goes, the slower the car goes. But if you start too low, the car doesn't feel great. You don't have the stability. The tyre wall is too soft. And I think that's what we're maybe starting to see with a few cars. One especially is the 15 car of Marciello. He hasn't done the fastest lap, but his last 3 laps have been the fastest. And that maybe is just starting to add up. Look at this GT4 traffic now. It's going to get really, really interesting. And we've got our first drive-through penalty. This car on shot, car 23. I think this was going to be really interesting. It's going to really start to come into play. And what we have to remember is for the car, not the driver. Each hour they're reset. So although he's got in the car, maybe not done all of them, as a car collectively, they have now copped a penalty.
Yeah, Seb Hopkins at the wheel of the Aston Martin right now, and he had been in a good position, you'd have to say. That car started 3rd on the grid. It was one of the quicker GT4 cars. They could bounce back from this, but they might now need some assistance from things like safety cars in order to get properly back in the fight once they do serve that penalty. GT4 still being led by Stuart Middleton at the moment, but in the pit lane, interestingly, from 2nd place within that class is the Enduro Motorsport car of Harry George. So that is that car's first pit stop, and it means that we're now only waiting for Middleton to make a stop. Dan Harper getting involved down the GT4 battles, and that's the 55 Ginetta losing a position, I think, isn't it, down the Wellington straight. GT3 cars going left and right, and I think this is going to allow the number 36 McLaren of Josh Rowledge to come through. Marvin Kirchhoffer coming past. Is Rowledge going to make the move on the brakes, though? The white and black McLaren will slip through into Brooklands corner, and I just don't think there's anywhere really for Thomas Holland to go. So he's gone from being on the attack earlier on to now losing a couple of positions in the last few laps. That one, though, really all caused by the GT3 cars coming through.
Yeah, it's a good shot as well, as we see the 23 serving its drive-through penalty. So you can go flat out all the way around this right, on the brakes, get it down to 50 kilometres an hour now, and cruise through the pit lane. 20 seconds that will take him. So that is a very, very big penalty for a very small game, track limits. That's the hard bit. So Marciello, like I said, he's got a good pace, but he hasn't got that electric pace. I just wonder if that damage that Ferguson had on the grid, lap to the grid, is starting to hurt him. It's that front corner. You see the Pirelli stick on his right-hand side, but not on the left. That's because there's yellow tank tape covering it. So the team have done a good job to match the colours, but there might be a little bit more than just cosmetic damage. Even if it's just a few aero points down the straight, it's enough for these top guys to really, really feel it. We had a great shot coming to Brooklands a while back. The gap between Harper and Kirchhoffer had really, really grown. So I don't know if Kirchhoffer's maybe got a similar thing. We saw Alex West hit Nick Jones, and actually hasn't got a penalty for that yet either. So I don't know if that's still brewing and that's in the clerk of the course office, but it's amazing how these cars are so sensitive to the smallest, minute bits of damage.
It is indeed, and the pros are the ones who will really spot that, I suppose, aren't they? So it makes sense that in this stint, Marciello is struggling a little. He's still running 7th, though, and has gapped Marcus Clutton by over a second now. Clutton's got the number 27 behind him at the moment, which is a car that started deep in the field, I seem to recall, so that car moving nicely through the field as we follow Jules Gounon's progress. Well, he isn't making any, he's still 14th, he's stuck behind Chris Froggatt now in the Sky 10 Besta Racing McLaren, and Jules Gounon similarly not really able to unlock the true performance that we know he and this Mercedes-AMG GT3 Evo are capable of. They both slip up the inside of the GT4 Team Parker Porsche, which I meant to mention a while ago, lost a lot of time through the pit stops. Remember, it had been sat inside the top 2 or 3, it dropped down to about 8th or 9th in class after the pit stops. That just bunches the McLaren and the Mercedes together ever so slightly, and Gounon surely now is close enough to have a go. Does he look to the inside? He does. Doesn't really fully commit to the move though, interestingly, and Froggatt fends him off.
Yeah, it's so difficult for both drivers involved. I saw why Gounon was doing it, showing intent, but then it was a bit sort of half-hearted really. So now Froggatt in front is like, well, if you do that again, is that another half-hearted effort, or is this a full send? And that's when it starts to get messy. It's easy to say from up here, but the moves always need to be black or white, yes or no. As soon as it gets into that no man's land, that's when we start to get messy. But every lap that goes on that Gounon is being held up by Froggatt, it's another lap that he's not gaining on that lead pack, and it really starts to take away their chance of a race win today, I think. You go on board briefly, you see the speed difference, and Gounon's really lost a lot of time to GT4 traffic there. He's got to get around the outside of 2 cars. The BMW's turning in. It's just about seen, wasn't he? That was good driving by everyone involved, but again, what's that? A second and a half, 2 seconds lost.
Yeah, I mentioned a while ago that he was about 10 seconds off the lead, Gounon. He is now 24 seconds off the lead, and probably even more time lost with that little moment in traffic. He's flashing the headlights now, the number 36 McLaren of Josh Rolich, which sits 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th in GT4 at the moment. Lewis Plato will be the next of the GT4 cars to be negotiated, and that is the Century BMW that was in the barriers last time we saw it at Alton Park, but it's running a lot more strongly here today. Gounon then stuck down in 13th, but Joe, I think we've had a change further up in GT3.
Yeah, it looks like Barnicoat is back in front of Gunn on the timing screen, so that's the second time that position has changed. That's interesting, isn't it? It's going to be interesting to see now where that McLaren and Barnicoat can get to. P3, he's only, what, 1.3 seconds behind Neary, who started to lose a little bit of pace now. Are we going to start to see something coming alive in that number 70 Inception McLaren going on board with Chris Froggatt, opening up the steering wheel, off we go. Get the car in, Mikey O'Brien in front in another McLaren. So it's going to be really, really interesting to start to see who can go where. Just remember, Gounon's still behind Froggatt here. It's going to be really difficult for Gounon to make much progress in the next 10-15 minutes, I think.
One driver not making progress, I'm afraid, is Marvin Kirchhoffer. 6th place he was, but he's just been in the pit lane for a stop-go penalty. Not quite sure what for, but he is plunging down the order now. So Marcello goes 6th, Clutton 7th, Mitchell 8th, Bell 9th. And it moves potentially Jules Gounon one position closer towards the top 10 again. He's all over the back of the McLaren, heading, in fact these are 2 McLarens together, aren't we, on board with Froggatt. It's all getting very busy in the traffic. A GT4 car appears out of nowhere. Froggatt runs off the road, and where is Gounon in all of this? nowhere near them because he's still not regained the time that he lost in the traffic down here a lap ago, and that's doubling his frustration because that was his chance to get past the McLaren and he wasn't there.
Yeah, exactly. I love what Froggatt did there at turn 1. He saw the traffic holding him up, so he unwound the lock, he ran wide, did a massive track limit, got the momentum and nearly got it going. He obviously picked up some marbles, hence why he's weaving left to right, try and clear it. What are the marbles? Big bits of rubber that all these cars are shedding, and the racing line stays clear. Purely on the volume of traffic, it stays clear. But those marbles always get thrown to the outside. So if you run wide on the outside, you pick them up, and it can feel like a puncher. It's absolutely brutal. Steering wheel vibrating. And luckily these days, the cars have a live tyre pressure monitoring system, so you can see it. But sometimes the vibration is so big, it kills the tyre pressure monitoring system. So it says you've got a puncher because the vibration's so big. And then as a driver, you're in a whole world of loss. You've got no idea what's going on. But looks okay for Froggatt, but he seems to have picked the pace up a bit, doesn't he? Gounon lost time in traffic, we know, but he actually looks on the front foot to Mikey O'Brien, but Gounon was late on the brakes there, wasn't he? Really took a huge amount out of Froggatt on the brakes. But yeah, we're really starting to get into this natural flow of it. Ben Barnicoat's just done his best lap of the race, and it was 8/10 quicker than Neary, so that gap now under half a second. It is tight. He is on his tail over the start-finish line as well, so that is going to be another battle that's going to, I think, open up real quick.
Stuart Middleton here, still leading in GT4 because he's the only car now in the race not to have made his first pit stop of the day. So he's going really long on this first stint. We'll have to come in within the next 10 minutes or so, surely, because we're getting towards the end of the opening hour of the Silverstone 500. What an enthralling hour of racing it has been, and there's still more drama to come, that's for sure. As Joe just mentioned, it's nose to tail for second place right now, Sam Neary versus Ben Barnicoat, and both of them sort of more or less matching the race leader. If anything, Barnicoat, I think, capable of going quicker than Johnny Adam right now, so if he can clear Neary, he could go after the race leader. Sky Tempesta McLaren still busy battling away too, as there is Raffaele Marcello heading down the hanger straight. We can see that tank tape on the left front corner of the car after contact that his teammate John Ferguson had on the way to the grid. Now, we've heard what happened. Let's try and get it from the horse's mouth, so to speak, because Bryn Lucas is down in the garage. He's found John Ferguson, who hopefully can explain exactly where that damage came from.
Yeah, certainly I found him. He looks a bit dejected. So, John, we didn't catch what happened at the start, but a bit of front-end damage to your car. We can see the tape on it. What happened there?
Leaving the pits, I was waved out, and I went out, and there was unfortunately a generator going down past. So we touched it, and we have a bit of front-end damage, which seems to be affecting the aero in some way.
And that was even before you really got out on track at all?
Yes, absolutely, on the way to the start grid.
So Marcello's doing a pretty good job. We know that if you want a decent guy in the car that's going to be able to do stuff, it's Gounon or it's Marcello. You've got one of the two there. What can you do today?
It's damage limitation. If we can come away with points, we'll be delighted. We have a 15 seconds penalty from the second place at Oulton, so we have that to deal with as well. But who knows, safety cars and all things can still happen.
But it's just aero, it's nothing else, no other components?
No, the car's fine.
Thanks, John.
Cheers.
Thanks, Bryn, for shedding some light on that, as we hope. So the car just superficially damaged, at least as far as they're telling us, but you can see the tank tape. There's a bit of a dent in that left front corner as well. And, you know, the cars are designed a certain shape for a reason, Joe. As soon as you start modifying that, it will have an effect on performance.
Yeah, you can see it's missing one of its dive planes on that side. The dive plane is a carbon fibre flick, which helps stall the air over that front end and give it front end downforce. So if we get another shot on the front, on the left as we look at it, you'll see this black little carbon flick just underneath the yellow part of the livery there. On the left, you see it sticking out nicely. On the right, looks like there's a tiny bit left of it, but that is a big loss. I've not driven the Mercedes, but when we used to lose them on the McLaren, it's 4 to 5 tenths a lap, and it is every lap. And the bigger negative is it really works the front tyre harder. And the worst thing is it's the left-hand side, and there's more fast right-handers here, so it's even more effective. So I actually think Marcello is doing a super job. He's just done his fastest lap of the race at 59.8, which is actually about a second quicker than anyone else at this moment in time.
Tom Wrigley here we're seeing in the number 29 Race Lab McLaren, leading within the Pro-Am element of GT4. GT4 split between the Silver Cup and the Pro-Ams. However, beautiful timing as always, they've just been given a stop-go penalty. I noticed a while ago the team manager for Race Lab had been summoned to see the race director, and the decision's been made that a penalty is going their way. So number 29 will drop out of the Pro-Am class lead. They're sat third overall within GT4. They were the winners, remember, of the second race back at Alton Park a few weeks ago, which means they're joint championship leaders in GT4 with the Wilmore Matt Nicol-Jones Academy Mustang, which we've seen in the garage. So this GT4 battle, Joe, is almost impossible to predict on a championship scale this year, because both of the cars that won at Alton Park last time also had a non-score in the other race. One of them perhaps destined for another one here today, and now a penalty for 29. So it's going to be one of those seasons, I think, where we could have maybe a new points leader after every race.
Yeah, and that's the great thing with having such great depth of quality throughout the field. It opens it up. Most years in GT4, if we're being honest, we've only really had probably 3 or 4 cars that look like they're going to win it. This year, not unsurprisingly, the grid's doubled, so the chances of who's going to win it. I think, yeah, there's definitely 8 or 9 cars that could win it. And now the manufacturers are taking GT4 even more seriously. That competition seems to get even hotter as the cars and the balance performance is even better. I think it's going to be really interesting. You're on board of this Mustang. Amazingly, you actually can't really hear the V8. That is the whine of the gearbox. So the gearbox always has straight cut gears. It allows for faster and better cooling for the gearbox, but it's so noisy in that car. If you were to sit in that now without any earplugs or helmets on, your ears would be bleeding. So we haven't really seen Johnny Adam for a while, have we? And that's exactly what he would have wanted. He's been an hour into this race between him and Cottingham. Still got that good gap, but like we said, Neary is now starting to hold up Barnacote and Gunn, and there's that Harper on the back as well. So this is going to be a 4-car battle. When are they going to pit? I think we've probably still got another 15 to 20 minutes, probably before we see the fuel run out in that McLaren first, then probably the BMW, then the Aston and the Mercedes. So it'll be interesting. All of the drivers can fuel save. How do you fuel save? You can short shift, so you shift up the gears early, use less engine revs. You can lift and coast, so down the long straight before you brake, rather than going Barnacote to the inside. What a lunge. Sam Neary was really clean, maybe even a little naive, if I'm being brutal, to give someone of Ben Barnacote's quality that much space, and Ben has done a good job to get on his way, and is now the hard job is going to be for this car. Ross Gunn, is he going to be able to pull the same move twice? Let's have a look on board. Neary's looking to the outside. It's going to be a long way around Brooklands here to get back past that McLaren. He needs to really tuck in behind Ben in the McLaren and not lose another position to Gunn. That would be my sort of little tip for him right now if I could speak to him.
Which is exactly what he does through Luffield Corner. So Ben Barnacote into second position now then in the Inception Racing McLaren that started 7th in the hands of Brendan Areve. It is looking now like a potential race winner. We're on board though with Ross Gunn as he tries to find a way past Sam Neary as well. Sam all of a sudden now has to deal with the dirty air from the McLaren ahead of him. He's got the Aston Martin and the BMW behind of Dan Harper peeking his nose out of line too as they race for Maggots and Beckett's from the 29th lap of the Silverstone 500. And this, the fight for third position. Mercedes, Aston Martin, BMW, and right now it's the green AMG that seems to be struggling.
Yeah, as we go on board with Gunn, you can really see the dirty air. His windscreen wiper in the middle there, flapping around. He's in a void of air. He's got a great run. Is Neary going to defend? Looks like he's opening the door for him, doesn't it? Late on the brakes for Gunn. Neary's, I'm being amazed of his maturity in terms of, like I said earlier, he's not bothered by position. He's trying to run his own race. He maybe knows the tyres have gone off or what he's got to do, but he's almost found himself into that bit of space. He can regroup now, find what pace he's done. He's done a good job of not losing any more time than needed, which is painful when you consider it's 3 places and it drops him off that podium position, which is where everyone wants to be today.
GT4 leader is in, by the way, there, right on cue. So that is Stuart Middleton coming in. An excellent first stint, going an hour and 3 minutes or so. And he hands over now to Freddie Tomlinson, who was debutant in the championship alongside Joe Wheeler in a Ginetta last year. Has a quick debrief now with Stuart Middleton, who's probably hopeful of a rest and a glass of cold water after that. That was some hard work that he's put in over the last hour. They're refueling the car. No one else can touch the car whilst that is happening. Then they will get the driver change and tyre change done at the same time. And Raceway Motorsport will send the Ginetta back on its way. But this will now move the number 90 McLaren, good timing again, into the lead of the GT4 class, with Lewis Plato in the number 22 BMW inheriting second. It will take a couple of laps because the GT4 pit stops are in excess of 2 minutes. As that is happening, by the way, there's another car about to appear in the back of shot, and it's a green Mercedes because Sam Neary has bailed for the pit lane too. So there he goes. Was this maybe the beginnings of a problem for Team ABBA Racing?
You would say so, wouldn't you? I think my guess would be a slow puncher, just purely on a drop off of the pace and how he was so submissive to those moves. So a slow punch, you're never going to spot it with a naked eye, but what the team doing, let's have a look. It's a driver change as normal, which they're going to have to do every time anyway, so there's still maybe a problem, but they'll go through their routine service first so they can just get ready and diagnose it. There's nothing obvious, is there? Haven't seen any contact, don't see any moves on it. Just seeing the last wheel go on that Ginetta, like the BMW earlier, 5-wheel studs to go on. Mechanics putting them on by finger tight first, and the electric rattle guns can do them up in GT4, no problem whatsoever. But yeah, I mean, the only chance that it wasn't a problem is that they short-fueled Neary to make him a bit faster at the start of his stint, but that's a big roll of the dice. You're seeing on track that this car is still in the lead until that McLaren comes round, but I think we've still got about 20 seconds or so until that car's going to leave, so I would expect that car to be turning into sort of probably Maggots or Beckett's by the time that Ginetta leaves pit exit. He's all the way at the start as well, so he's got another 18 seconds of pit lane to trundle down, so it's worth the roll of the dice, like I said. But I think that's still going to hurt them later on, not pitting under safety car.
Yeah, 165 seconds, the minimum pit stop time for all GT4 cars. This is a silver class car, so there's an extra 14 seconds to throw onto that. Then you've got to trundle all the way down the pit lane. So yes, in the end, no contest. It's the number 90 McLaren that does now take the lead. But for the first time, really, in about an hour, we've got a realistic picture of what the GT4 running order looks like, or we will at the end of the next lap anyway, when the timing screen updates. But it will be 90 from 22, from 61, 14 and 36, the top 5, and it's a reasonable lead now actually, because the number 90 car has pulled out something like a 2.5 second lead over Lewis Plato, although Lewis has been lapping quicker over the last couple of laps. So the BMW, as we're seeing in GT3 really, starting to inch its way into contention for the class.
He's in a great bit of space as well at the moment, isn't he? No GT3s in sight at the moment, and when you're in this race you really need to make hay while the sun shines. So when you have got space, you need some nice, clean, hard laps to sort of cement your stint. When you're in the traffic, that's then when you need to start to kind of, how risky am I going to be? So it's really like 2 races in one once you're the driver. You've got your clear space and you've got your traffic, and they're so hard to determine between. But like we see, the top drivers lose less time, and that's how they win the race. And there's that second place BMW, Lewis Plato. See a little bit of bodywork hanging off the right-hand sill there. Doesn't look like it's too structural, does it? It's probably just a little bit of aerodynamics to help turn something away, cooling-wise, I would guess. But these GT4 cars, like I said, have come on so far. They used to be so heavy and cumbersome, but now they've got such a stiff platform. You don't really see that much body roll from them. They're just getting quicker and quicker, and you've seen so many manufacturers involved. I think in the next 2 or 3 years, this is going to really take off as a part of the championship that we've been willing to get to this sort of size and quality for a long time.
Indeed so. The Ford Mustang here sat in 3rd place is Matt Cowley. That's the untroubled Academy Motorsport Ford Mustang. We saw the 62 in trouble earlier on, but the 61 car 3rd in the points. So with the dramas for the other Ford Mustang and the Raceland McLaren as well with its penalty, this is the car now that, if we were to throw the checkered flag now, would come out with the championship lead. But needless to say, that is not happening. We've got an hour and 52 minutes of this race still to go, and Johnny Adam is not showing as the race leader on that timing tower, because Ben Barnicoat has gone past him. Yes, Barnicoat's got the lead. Johnny Adam has had a drama on that lap. Now, he's not pitted, so it's not a problem. We can assume, therefore, some sort of moments in traffic, but it gives us another lead change with Ben Barnicoat getting the Inception McLaren out in front and something happening to Johnny Adam.
And interestingly, he doesn't have a speed trap through Sector 1, which is in the middle of Hangar Straight. If I had to really guess, I would say he's overtaken a GT4 and had to go on the grass to avoid, because then his Sector 2 is where he's lost the time. So anywhere from on this straight all the way to the new pit straight is where he lost the time, but he's still losing time, it looks like. Has that car got a problem? It doesn't look anything obvious, does it? Let's see the straight line speed performance. We know the Aston's a little bit stronger anyway. What's he going to do? He's defending. You see a little snap of oversteer under braking there for Gunn, but can't see any damage with it. I'm sure Johnny Adam wouldn't defend if he had a problem, so it must have been a one-off. You can see the inside, little bit of contact there down the inside. That Ginetta holding up Adam more than Gunn. What an awful lap for Johnny Adam. I don't think I've ever said that before. He's now got to get back down, but we know how quick this BMW is. I think we've got a replay coming up. Down Hangar Straight, like I said, he's just got boxed in. Just to go left, just to go right, then Barnicoat sprung on him and just got round him, so he kept it on the track, but it looked like the gap was to the left, but Johnny was keen to go down the inside to hold the inside line for Stowe. But I wonder if he should have just gone for the outside. Yes, it's risky the outside, but there was momentum there. And Barnicoat, sometimes it is easier being that second car on the scene, but Barnicoat didn't have to lift, and that's why he's got so much momentum. And we've seen a really, really good last 10 minutes from Ben Barnicoat in that Inception car. He's hauled that car all the way up from 4th at the time. Yes, Neary had to box, but he got past him, I think, on merit. Then Gunn, then Adam. This is really starting to turn into their race.
In fairness, Ben Barnicoat had caught Johnny Adam anyway, even when Johnny had the little hiccup in the traffic, so I think the move was perhaps on. It's almost just as if the Mercedes is losing pace, like we saw from Sam Neary towards the end of his stint. Looking at some of the other AMGs as well, they're not exactly pumping in really competitive lap times. Most of the really quick GT3s in the 2-minute zeros at the moment, whereas people like Marcello in the mid to high 2-minute ones. The same is true really of Gounon further back. So the Mercedes AMG, it is a front engine car. We know that it does rely on that aero very heavily. Are they just punishing those front tyres a little bit harder than some of the others out there?
Quite possibly. The other thing to factor in is we haven't had it this warm all weekend, let alone this dry. So the teams have lots of data. They know their target tyre pressures, and they have a very clever matrix system. So every degree of ambient and track temperature up, they know roughly what they should bleed. The only thing with this track, it is so much faster than any other circuit we go to in the UK. If that matrix formula is slightly out, we go super slow-mo. Let's have a look. What can we see? If that front tyre is too high and he's got too much understeer, we expect to see a lot of lock now. The car rocking side to side, relatively normal for the curb usage. Let's have a look at this front tyre. Is he scrubbing it? It doesn't look so, does it? And the rear looks okay. I can't really spot much on that super slow-mo. It looks like the rear just starting to kick out. But the thing is, when you're looking for a tenth or two, a tiny, tiny issue, be it tyre pressure or something else, can be enough to just start to lose you that time, and you never get it back. It's not going to get better until you put another set of tyres on.
On this lap alone, Johnny Adam looking set to lose another second or so. Johnny Adam does not just drop a second a lap to everyone, does he? So there's something going on with that Mercedes AMG, and he will be itching for a chance to come in, which perhaps is going to come very shortly, because James Cottingham is suited and booted and ready to go. So they're going to bring that number 4 Mercedes in. Well, I was going to say early, we're almost on track, aren't we? We're getting towards about an hour probably since these GT3 cars were last in, and so it is time to bring the pros in, get the AMs back out into the fray, and they can give the car a once-over as well. Perhaps we can get Bryn down there to, well, A, have a chat with Johnny Adam, and B, have a look at those tyres that will be coming off the car shortly, because car number 4 is in. Johnny Adam then having faded recently, and that is Dan Harper in as well. So interestingly, the BMW from Century is in too. Marcello is in the number 15, so the pit lane once more a busy place.
Yeah, they're splitting this 100 minutes early, I think, so their last stint is as long as possible, which isn't a bad strategy because that will allow a larger safety car window for them at the end of the race. It's hard to see. I just thought as Johnny pulled into the pit lane, the front left for him was just bouncing around a little bit. Again, the tyre looked all right. Johnny doesn't look particularly concerned. What's he trying to say with his hands? Turn it in, get it in and point it out. That last flick was like, you've got understeer. It won't turn in. Trying to help him. Definitely looks like he's saying something's front limited. Is it the tyre or is there a bit of damage? We just know what these curbs can do. If you hit them hard enough, long enough, it can be bodywork damage, be it the splitter, it can be the dampers. You can even start to bend wishbone so you get different tracking so the car doesn't drive in a straight line. There's an infinite amount of possibilities. But at this moment in time, there's no point trying to fix it. You've just got to keep going and see what happens over the next 1 hour, 46 minutes.
So Harper, Adam Marcello and Rob Bell all making their way into the pit lane then. That means that Ben Barnicoat now has a 4.6 second lead over Ross Gunn, whilst Marcus Clutton is up into 3rd place for Enduro Motorsport. Big dive there from Jules Gounon just as we cut away, and I don't think that was for position. It was the lapped Lamborghini that he was trying to find a way past, but that was a big lunge under braking as the new Pirelli P0s are fitted onto the DK Engineering Mercedes, and the 2Cs Motorsport team will send James Cottingham back on his way. It was a solid opening stint for Cottingham, wasn't it? And now he's going to go straight back into battle again. Needs some really good laps now on those fresh tyres. That negates a little bit of that Pro-Am deficit, doesn't it? So these are important laps now for Cottingham. In theory, he's out on track surrounded by quicker Pro drivers, but that tyre advantage might just save him.
Yeah, and don't worry, Cottingham or Adam fans, the mechanic, the engineer was releasing the car with the lollipop up, but it wasn't a problem. They have to wait for this minimum pit stop time. The lollipop really in GT racing is indicate if there was traffic or not. And you saw Harper actually get out in front of him, so I would suspect they've left a little bit early and they may have to slow down a little bit in the pit lane. There is a rule, and it is technically illegal, but there is a bit of grey area. The speed limit's 50 and you can't go lower than 40, but there's a still 20% margin. So we know the pit lane's 19.6 seconds to do. So if you knock 20% off it, you could leave 2 seconds early and maybe get track position, which we've just seen.
We have indeed. John Ferguson back out in the number 15. Number 27 is now Mark Radcliffe again. And then here comes Richard Neary. Now remember, he was in before all of this lot, and you can see the time that he's lost because he's been out there as an AM driver, a rapid AM driver, but he's been out there whilst the pros have been pounding around for another 10 minutes or so. And that means that the number 8 car, when all is said and done with this round of pit stops, will have lost a number of positions. Jules Gounon coming up to effectively put a lap on Richard Neary because Jules has not yet pitted in the silver number 1 Mercedes. This is that part of the race where everyone's on slightly different strategies. It's not immediately obvious who's doing well and who isn't doing so well, but it certainly looks as though that number 8 car has a bit of a hole to dig itself out of now.
Yeah, the only thing, it's a bit of a short-term win, isn't it, for everyone against Richard, the only AM that's gone that bit longer, because when Sam gets back in, he'll have longer against their AMs. So you've had one too many drinks, it's a great time at the bar, but the next day you feel it. So that's what we're seeing at the moment. I'm not sure it's a bad strategy, it's a different one again, and it's going to make Sam Neary's stint the longest out of everyone. So they're very happy with their fuel mileage that they're going to get out of it. As we see Johnny Adam, there was a couple of seconds between them that we saw him at the start of the lap, but he's, sorry, Costingham versus Dan Lung now, they've swapped. That's the interesting bit. So we're so used to seeing Johnny Adam against Harper for the last 40 minutes or so. Now we've got the AMs, same cars, different tyres, mind, but different drivers. And I would say Cottingham was the driver of the opening stint, wasn't he? Darren Lung was quick, but Cottingham, I think, was the quickest out of everyone.
And this is that fascinating thing, isn't it? The cars go up and down the leaderboard depending on who is in them at any given moment. Right, lots of questions that we want answering from DK Engineering's 2Cs Motorsports car. Johnny Adam has just got out of the car and Bryn Lucas is down there to give him a grilling.
Well, Johnny, it looked like you were struggling a fair bit out there, but struggling with some of those GT4 cars.
Yeah, a little bit of traffic, obviously, down Hanger, they caught me out. But yeah, it's just, it feels like we're quite high on tyre deg at the moment. And we're picking up a lot of pickup out there because it's a 3-hour race. There's a lot of pickup out there at the moment, so yeah, we struggled the last 5 or 6 laps with that, trying to shake that off. But yeah, still a long way to go. Just have to keep it clean and then see what unfolds later on.
It might be hard for you to say, but do you think that's the same problem for all the Mercedes out there, the AMGs, or what do you think about the other cars and how they're doing with the tyres?
No, it looks like the others maybe are a bit lighter. I know we are quite heavy this weekend on weight, but I think it's a case of, you know, maybe the next thing try and manage it a bit better, but it's hard because you're sort of pushing every lap when you get a clear run at it, and yeah, I really did suffer the last 5 or 6 laps, but long way to go. James is driving well this weekend. If we can clear a bit of traffic, you know, hopefully we're still in the mix at the end.
Yeah, just how hard is it when you've got so many GT4 cars that you're coming up to and you don't know which way to go, and then you've got a GT3 on your shoulder as well?
It's hard. You have to obviously take risks, but at the same time be respectful, and I was maybe too respectful down the back straight, but at the same time they're having their own race, so you have to obviously give them a bit of room. But yeah, you know, getting caught out is not great, but at the same time, you know, the pace looks strong for the McLaren and some other cars. But yeah, well, hopefully the strategy will swing, and we'll see where we finish up at the end.
Wait and see. Cheers, John.
Thank you.
So out onto the Wellington Straight they go, and Johnny Adam there giving us, I think, a few answers there to what was going on. This was how he actually lost the lead, getting stuck in the traffic, but before this point, Joe, it did look as though he was struggling anyway, and he was leading us in there, I think, to some of the reasons as to why that may have been.
Yeah, that obviously is from the front. I think if you were on board with Johnny Adam, we see maybe a potential fire in pit lane. Doesn't look like it, maybe an extinguisher's gone off, but a little bit of running. The teams don't seem too panicked. Maybe it's the Raceway Ginetta, the furthest car away, because it's covered in what I hope is fire extinguisher dust there. The team are cracking on with the refueling, so you sometimes get the car coming in, a tiny bit of splash. As those fuelers put on, there's a coupling process, and a tiny bit, you saw it there on the left side, just spray off. If that hits an exhaust, a brake, anything really above 100 degrees, it's going to ignite rather quickly. So yeah, if we were on this board, this camera view, sorry, watching Johnny Adam on that back straight, I think what you would see is, yes, there's 3 GT4s, but they were single file, then they went to 2 wide, then they went to 3 wide, so the gap he wanted disappeared, and Barnacote had the easier / good fortune, good pre-planning to kind of know that gap was opening on the left, not the right, and Barnicoat kind of sweep through, and Johnny really wanted to go left, but Ben Barnicoat was already there and had the sense to know, if I turn left now, I'm either going to turn myself around or I'm going to take us both out, sort of thing. So go on board with Cottingham. We saw how good this car looked in stint 1. That BMW is just so fast. From this point onwards, 110 kilometres an hour, it really starts to open its legs up. Also very good through the high-speed stuff. A bit of oversteer there as he turned in for Cottingham in the 2C's car. The BMW is just so soft as well. You can see it moving around. And as a driver, you either love it or hate it. I've always preferred a stiffer car, rather a level platform. Some drivers love a soft car because it talks to them more. You can feel the weight moving around. Sometimes you get it where it doesn't actually matter. I remember with the McLaren GT3, we could go from full stiff to full soft springs, and it would be a tenth of a difference lap difference. It would just be, what does the driver prefer? So you see him just tightening his belts there, which is always a good sign that something interesting is about to happen, I think. Is he losing time behind the BMW? Probably not much, but it's definitely a distraction, isn't it? And he will want to get in front of it to give Johnny a better chance when he gets back in later to really take it to Harper, who will take over the BMW.
A moment that Johnny had in the traffic down the Hangar Straight came less than 100 metres or so beyond the point of the track in which he lost this race in 2019 after contact with a back marker in the closing stages. Ian Logie and Callum McLeod came out victorious that day, but Johnny Adam knows what it's like to be on the wrong side of the traffic here at Silverstone, that's for sure. Right, we're getting the second wave now of GT3 pit stops underway with more of the midfielders and indeed a couple of front runners actually. Ross Gunn in the Beach Dean Aston Martin right now, so we're not that far away from seeing how all this plays out, but again we're expecting some of these cars like the James Cottingham, Darren Leung cars to have dropped back a little bit by virtue of having that earlier pit stop. The AMs have been out there a little bit longer, but they may well come to them through the second part of the stint. Round Stowe goes the 2C's Mercedes, not quite close enough for the time being to have a go as they drop down through the Vale and into the club sequence of corners, but massively better on the brakes there, the Mercedes. James Cottingham visibly closing in on the way in to the club chicane, but then loses ground maybe slightly on the exit. All part of the fascinations, the ebb and flow of GT racing, with the various balanced performance measures taken to make sure that everyone's as even as they can be. What of GT4? Well, Lewis Plato is leading the way, having gained a few places over the last 10 minutes or so. He leads now in GT4. BMW leads. Aston Martin of Hopkins in second place now because Matt Cowley has just pitted in the Ford Mustang. And then the number 56 Ginetta on your screen of Freddie Tomlinson running in a strong third position. So this is the car, remember, that was on this alternate strategy. Stuart Middleton doing that really long opening stint. It's completely out of sync with everyone else, but at this point in the stint, Joe, it's back at the pointy end. Yeah, and the pace looks good of it, doesn't it? So it's so hard to say what's right or wrong until you get all the way to the end, and then hindsight even makes idiots like me look like a genius. I'm just starting to think about this slight difference we're seeing with the GT3s in terms of the early stoppers getting their AMs back in. What they want is no safety car for the pros that are still in the GT3s to be able to get that free pit stop, and then they get the luckier chance if there's a safety car towards the end. They will get the better track position over the guys that are going long now with their pros. So I appreciate it's pretty confusing, and like I said, I'm only going to look like a genius when I've got hindsight. But at the moment, all I know in both classes, we've got some mega racing going on that's been hard, and so far pretty fair, to be honest, as well. So it's been an absolute delight. I'm just looking through the timing screens. There's a few cars starting to close up. One of them's Kirchhoffer. We saw him strong at the start of his stint, get the drive-through penalty. We're still not 100% sure what it's for. I'd guess it was Alex West nerfing Jones around in the Porsche, but we didn't get it, so I'm speculating on that. But yeah, his pace is starting to look good as we see a GT4 battle, BMW versus McLaren. Big size difference. McLaren's got the inside into Brooklands, coming into the sunshine, really bright there, isn't it? Get it over, and where's the strength of these cars then? The McLaren carbon fibre chassis, little V6 in it now rather than the traditional V8, so very, very nimble, and it looks like that BMW must have a lot of straight line speed, doesn't it? The size of it, it must need that to push it through the air. Is it going to start to get a run on it? But this battle is definitely getting intense, isn't it? It is, and that's been a change of position as well. Charles Clark in the McLaren up ahead now of Michael Johnston in the Century Motorsport BMW, which makes its way down towards the left, right sequence at Maggots and Beckett's, and all the time being reeled in by the 56 car, which is technically a lap ahead of it for now. Towards us comes the race leader, Ben Barnicoat, in the Inception Racing McLaren, the car that he shares with Brendan Areve. 16.2 seconds to the good now over Marcus Clutton, but both of them owe us a pit stop, as does Jules Goon on third, Marvin Kirkhofer fourth, and Chris Froggatt in fifth. Will Tregurtha from sixth has just brought the 72 Lamborghini in. So Andrew Howard, seventh position then, the highest placed of the AM drivers right now in the Beech Dean Aston Martin. So things working out well for Beech Dean right now, but it should be an even bigger advantage really for the number 70 car when it does come in. It's beyond the length of the Hanger Straight, the gap between the two McLarens, isn't it? Because this Kazoo-sponsored number 77 McLaren is the Marcus Clutton machine in second. An under-the-radar performance, really, for this team so far. But I've got a feeling that they're going to put themselves into a top 5 or 6 position by the end of the race. A dreadful grid position, but they are creeping further forward. Second at the moment, but I think maybe a net 6th or 7th. That's not bad for the first half of the race.
Yeah, and we're seeing Goon on there, which is in third place. I think these are the 3 outliers with their strategy now. And I'd say Clutton's going to be a little low. I think he's going to be 8th. And I reckon Goonon's still going to be 12th or 13th. And what's going to happen is Lung, Cottingham, Ferguson, Ratcliffe, Neary, maybe even Balfe are going to fill those gaps definitely between. So it's going to be interesting. Cottingham past Lung now. So let's see what pace he's got. I think it's going to be really tight between that 2Cs Mercedes with Cottingham at the moment and the Barnicoat McLaren. I think that is where the battle is. Look back down the inside, saw how much performance it had. It was again a bit half-hearted, wasn't it? It wasn't really committed. It's going to be so interesting when these next round of pit stops go. Who's been lucky with the traffic? Who's been unlucky? But that shows you how much time they've lost. That Gounon car owes us a whole extra pit stop, and they've got to get that success penalty done in the last stop as well. So yeah, I don't think we're going to see that car in the top 10 by the checkered flag.
No, and again, that really speaks to the strength in depth we've got in the field this year. Darren Leung now trying to come back at James Cottingham. He's just lost the place to the Mercedes, but he's back up the inside at Brooklands, washes him out wide, and somewhere we've got to fit a Jules Gounon into all of this, or is Jules going to dive for the pit lane maybe? Might not be a bad time to do that, because these two are getting very close to each other, and Gounon does take the tight line out of Luffield and bails for the pits. Sensible move, I think, there, Jules. The team have been calling him in anyway, I'm sure, but he comes in to hand back over to Loggy. Now, what can Leung do about James Cottingham? The BMW so quick down the straight, but just can't quite get the overlap into Cops Corner, where apparently it's impossible to go side by side, and actually, on that occasion, Darren Leung does bail out of it. They avoid contact, and the Mercedes stays in front, as out gets Gounon. In shortly, we'll get Ian Loggy. And, well, a bit of a disappointing race, this, it has to be said, for the reigning champion, Ian Loggy, and the current joint championship leaders. And with half the race still to go, it's going to be hard to see them, as Joe says, getting into the top 10, because, like I said, such a strong grid. You have a slightly off day, then you've got that success penalty. It's going to cost you more than usual.
Yeah, and everyone's doing their own race, but I was a little surprised that Gounon didn't put a bit of a move on Lung, even though he was coming in. There was a gap at Luffield at last corner, just to help his teammate out to get that gap. We know that car's quicker, but that BMW having the top speed performance really put him under pressure. I just sometimes look into things way too much. But it's Gounon being really competitive. Yes, they're teammates, yes, they're the same car, but there is no one you want to beat more than your teammate. I thought it was an opportunity to help him out there, but there didn't seem to be much support across the garage. So maybe we're seeing some very short shots fired. Barnicoat is just pitted, I've seen out the window, so we're really going to get a very good indication. Arebe is going to get in the car. He's going to be leaving the pits, and he's going to really have an understanding of where it is. Just remember, the pit stop is a whole lap, so these guys are going to come past, and then it will get interesting to see where they slot in.
Yeah, so Andrew Howard still the highest placed of those to have made a second pit stop. He's 13.8 seconds then ahead of the Cottingham-Lung battle, so some cars are going to drop into that gap, that's for sure, and we'll have to wait and see exactly who they are. Past us, in fact, right now goes the number 97 Aston Martin, so it will jump ahead of the number 1 Mercedes, which is sat watching the stopwatch, waiting for the time to tick down. Ian Loggy goes and then stalls the car. Does he? Still can't get it going. Now it gets gone, and all of that time sat waiting for the minimum pit stop time to elapse. and then Loggy goes and makes a small mistake, so that will cost them a few seconds in total, and might well cost them another position or so. We'll have to wait and see. Out of the pits he goes. Marcus Clutton takes over the race lead, but we're almost now cycled through our second round of pit stops.
Yeah, we see those dump churn fuelers there. Because Optimum are running 3 cars, only allowed 2 fuel rigs. They'll need 5 of these to brim it. So let's say that's the first one, 20 litres a go. How long do we think Arib's going to do? He did half an hour, so that was either 2 or 3 dump churns. So I think he needs to get his drive up time up to about 80 minutes, so the maximum doesn't go over 100 for Barnacote. So he's got 50 minutes stint or so, I think. So it must have been 3 dump churns to get him through that window of it. This is going to be interesting. Where are we going to see this car versus this car in about half a lap's time? Down the inside, but held up there. That's an easier 2.5 loss. They're the differences to who's going to be leading by the end of next lap.
Tell you what, Barnacote was pushing on that in lap, wasn't he? Personal best sector 1, outright fastest sector 2. He knew that he was coming in that lap, and clearly still had some good pace in the car, despite being on old tyres. Off the jacks it goes then, so pit stop complete. And again, it's now just about waiting for that minimum pit stop time to elapse. No traffic coming. James Cottingham continuing to get held up in traffic, and already down the pit lane is going the Inception McLaren. These 2 cars were right together at the start of this cycle of pit stops, but as that McLaren heads out of the pit lane, Cottingham has not yet got into the final sequence of corners. He's only exiting Aintree corner now, going into the final sector. So a big time loss by keeping the pro in that little bit longer in the Inception McLaren. But as we've said, short time gain, maybe long-term loss. We'll have to wait until the final stint of the race. But Inception Racing, for the time being, in a good position.
Really good position. But Ben Barnacote, like you said, has had another 11 laps or so over Johnny Adam at this moment in time. So they've got that to come back at them. Sometimes just a bit of luck. You look at the track position that Brendan slotted into. That is some good opening lap space just to be able to get into a rhythm. We know Brendan's super fast. I've been his teammate in sister cars for many a year. The guy is completely unhinged in the most positive manner that someone from the west coast of America can possibly be. He has zero fear, and it's not through bravery, it's through stupidity, but it does mean he can hustle a race car, and he might be able to make the difference today. Across all of those AMs that we've been talking about, he's kind of flown under the radar that little bit. I said he's a guest entry. They're not going for the championship, but this is the one race everyone wants to win, and that's why they're here this weekend to come and steal the trophy from under the noses. As you see Neary having a big slide behind Ferguson. We know Neary was much faster than Ferguson at the start of the race. We know the damage that's going on the 15 car. Mark Radcliffe as well, getting in on the mix, looking racy. Mark Radcliffe, first year in British GT, but has been coming on so quickly. Rob Bell, one of the best in the business, is really going to speed. Look at that big moment. I don't think there was any contact. I think it was just on the dirty part of the track was enough to take away the grip from him. Now Radcliffe is on the front foot. How much does Ferguson want to fight? Where do we think he probably is? 6th, 7th? He's in the mix, but that car's squaring well. This is the worst I've ever seen the Mercedes look on its tyres. I have to say, Johnny Adams said earlier in that interview the car's heavy. That's not Mercedes' fault. That's the balance of performance. That's the organisers trying to make all of these very different cars do the same lap time. And maybe they've just found their critical point. That extra 10, 15 kilos they were given after Alton Park is really hurting them. Ferguson is on the big defence, isn't he?
He is indeed. Oh, in fact, runs wide through Village and makes it easy in the end for Mark Radcliffe, who picks up his 2nd position in half a lap. They're also being joined by Alexander Westlock in the blue and orange Garage 59 McLaren. And not that far behind them are Ian Loggy and Kevin Say as well, I think. So Loggy could well become a part of this battle before much longer. On board now with Alexander West, the number 88 McLaren closing in on the squabbling group of cars ahead. And there is GT4 traffic on the horizon as again Richard Neary does not make friends with the apex through Brooklands. Comes off the corner well though, but there's just nowhere to go. John Ferguson sat directly in his path, and Richard Neary can't quite get the overcut on the exit of the corner either. The inside of the GT4 cars, they will go towards Cops Corner. That probably takes away an overtaking opportunity for Richard Neary for the time being. He takes a slightly wider line in. The GT4 Team Parker Porsche doesn't exactly leap out of the way, and this has all really played into the hands of Mark Radcliffe, who's gapped them already.
Yeah, as a driver, especially leaving Luffield, because you have a good long look down the pit straight, you know where a GT4 is. If it's like 70 metres or so in front, you're going to get it into Cops. If it's 71 metres ahead, you're like, I might get it, and I'm going to send it anyway. But they were in that awkward sort of position, and that's the flow of the race again. So is Mark Radcliffe going to get unlucky, or is he going to keep riding that wave of good fortune with GT4 traffic, and it like we know, it is half a second to a second each time that you get held up. It looks like he's going to get another clean run into Vale. Does that mean Ferguson's going to get that GT4 car that Radcliffe is just going past the DTO McLaren, somewhere in the middle of club, which is a really bad place, and he's had his own moment as well. So look at that gap, it's expanding under a lap, it really has, and it looks like they're actually going to get him on this pit straight, but maybe Westerson's Neary runs wide, kisses the gravel. These cars are looking hard work, aren't they? They're not as planted as we're used to seeing. That is a definite.
No, not at all. We've, by the way, had our final sort of front-running GT3 pit stop has taken place. That was the Enduro McLaren, which has come out in second place. So a massive gain by keeping Marcus Clutton in as long as they possibly could. So Brendan Arieb leads a McLaren 1-2 now with the Aston Martin of Andrew Howard in third place. I think at the start of the day, it was Mercedes domination, and now there's only one Mercedes inside the top half dozen. Arieb from Tilbrook is 18 seconds or so. Andrew Howard third, fourth James Cottingham in the 2Cs Mercedes, fifth Darren Young in the Century BMW, seventh Mark Radcliffe in the number 27 McLaren, and then the battle for eighth position, the number 27 Mercedes, sorry, 15 Mercedes of John Ferguson, 8 Mercedes of Richard Neary and Alexander West, who you ride on board with coming out of Luffield Corner. They've just spaced themselves out ever so slightly for the time being, but this is all a battle within the top 10 as the running order takes a massive shuffle over that second round of pit stops because they were free to pit when they liked. There wasn't a safety car that forced their hands. They were able to really start playing the strategy game there, leaving their pros in a bit longer for some of the teams, and it has made a big difference to the running order. But that will have a knock-on effect now at the final round of pit stops that will come within the final hour of the race. So it's going to keep us guessing, but Enduro Motorsport did indeed make a big gain there.
Yeah, and we have to see the pace of Tilbrook because we know he's fast, and I think the McLaren's quick today because Arieb is doing low 201s. That's just about 2 seconds off Ben Barnicoat, who we know was flying. That's phenomenal. It's a long lap round here as well, so that's like 2.4% roughly. That's incredible performance for an amateur driver against one of the best guys in the business. Mustang in the gravel. Are those rear tyres going to be stuck? Who's this going to help? This is going to help those guys that have stopped that little bit earlier. It's too long for anyone to get to the end on fuel. Don't bury it. Oh my God, that's got really good traction, hasn't it? I would bet a lot of money on not getting out. So safety car will be averted as long as he gets away cleanly. But yeah, I am super impressed with Arieb's pace. I'm looking down all the other Rams. They're at least a second slower, and he's done another 201.5 this lap. So it wasn't a fluky lap either. These cars are so fast, so complex, so many things to do. As you see the Greystone car stop there, is that a problem? Is that going to be a safety car? At the moment, the good news is I actually think the safety car is the same for everyone because there isn't anyone that hasn't done that second pit stop. He gets going, does he? We'll go back to a battle. Let's work about that one later. But yeah, going to these big cut of grass there for Neary. He looks angry, doesn't he? But you can't get away round him. He just take a chill, relax. Let's work out where he's at his worst. You're both in Mercedes, but you're different drivers. Let's pick one go. Let's stop just throwing everything at him every single corner. Just regroup, and that's where maybe it's probably a bit hard. Sam, his teammate, also being his son, like trying to tell your dad how to drive a car is never the easiest thing. As we see it going, so obviously a front right. It doesn't look like a puncher, does it? Maybe a suspension failure. The bodywork and the tyre are definitely meeting in a fashion that they shouldn't. There's a chance he can get out of the way there on the national bit of the circuit. I don't really mind a safety car, yes or no. I think it's even for everyone. Everyone's got their ram in now. I think what it would do, it would really hurt Arieb and Tilbrook because it would lose that gap they've gained by leaving their pro in longer. It's a huge roll of the dice for everyone here, but yeah, it's hard to call at the moment, isn't it?
Zach Meakin, by the way, has just been in to serve a track limits drive-through penalty. That's the number 18 GT4 Porsche that was running right at the front in the opening stint, but things are unravelling for them slightly. Richard Neary, meanwhile, trying to find a way still past the John Ferguson Mercedes, whilst there, Ian Loggy has found a way ahead now of Kevin Say, so logging into the top 10, but he's got Alexander West right in front of him, so he's the Mercedes meet in a McLaren sandwich right now, heading past the wing down this Lewis Hamilton straight. Kevin Say trying to get up the inside of Loggy, who's flashing the lights at Alex West, and for once no GT4 traffic getting too involved in this either. Out through Abbey Corner they go, through the left-hander at Farm, now onto the brakes into Village, and Loggy carrying so much speed through the left, but it puts him way offline then into the right-hander at Village. Say's got the inside for the loop, and Loggy losing a position that was not part of the script. They negotiate plenty of debris there from the stricken McLaren. The car may be out of the way, but bits of it are still littering the side of the road, or the middle of the road really, as Loggy runs out wide over the curbs. That debris, much of a concern, do you think? It looked fairly sizable.
Yeah, it's only a couple of pieces. The race control guys will be hoping it gets hit and just put out the way. It's a hard one. It would definitely be carbon fibre, so it could easily slice through a tyre. I think it's just not enough to call a safety car at this moment in time. I think race control will want to keep this race green as long as they can. Interesting on that Wellington Street. See how much rain we had yesterday. It's quite a good self-policing tactic there for track limits. You just wet the curb and cover it in mud, and no one's used it all day. It's a curb we'd normally see the drivers using to get rid of some of that lock. Safety car, I love being wrong. So yeah, I think this really, really hurts. So Enduro in already. That won't really help or hurt. Who's the biggest winner? I think we're going to see Andrew Howard and Ross Gunn win this race. There you go. My call, an hour and 20 minutes away.
Well, you're on form today, Joe, so I'm not going to argue with you. Your predictions this weekend have been spot on so far. Certainly they're going to gain a lot of time on the leader, because Brendan Reid was 20 seconds up the road from the rest of the pack, and Andrew Howard showing some good pace. We know Ross Gunn has been quick in that car as well, and yeah, they are absolutely in contention for this race. They're on a similar pit strategy to the before car, which is behind them too, so if we're considering one of them as being contenders, then they both have to be in that conversation. Inception Racing then will retain the lead behind the safety car, which we have confirmation it is because of the debris up at the loop and entry part of the circuit, and depending on how long this lasts, it's eating into the AM stint of the race as well, the final AM stint of the race, which again has a factor on strategy.
Yeah, there's a couple of roll of dice you could do here. One would be you pit very early and get your pro in. Like I said, the Mercedes think they can do 70, 75 minutes on. We're 5 minutes away from that. If I was logging Gounon, and Gounon had the time, which he doesn't because he went too long, so that's the negative of that part of the stint, so that's called them. The other thing you could do is you could get rid of one of your mandatory stops. So yes, Gounon hasn't got enough time, but would you pit Loggy, get Gounon in, come straight back in with Gounon, get Loggy back in, and then you do your last pit stop, an extra one, as fast as you want, because you've done your mandatory. This is the stuff the teams would have talked about, and it's what you are looking for. A lot of the teams, podium for whatever reason is always the holy grail. The win's the best, obviously, but if you're not going to get a podium, what's the point? Who's going to remember 8th place, even on Monday, let alone next year? So you might as well try something different. They're the only two strategies I can picture working. The big one is that driver stint time, the pro or the AM, but they can't do over 100 minutes. That is the big one. And those guys that went long with their pro early, we know Barnacote did with Reed, we know Clutton did with Tilbrook, we know Gounon did with Loggy. Those guys have really already called their shot. So yeah, that's why I'm quite confident it's really going to be between Howard and Gunn in the Aston. I think that's helped them a little bit, this Tomlinson and Middleton Ginetta. Again, they just need to make sure they don't go a lap down. They haven't pitted too early before they've caught the safety car chain. I think we've got a realistic 3-car battle. The Aston, the BMW and the Mercedes. I think it's going to get really, really hot in that last pro stint.
Indeed, and this is all assuming we don't get another safety car as well. Remember that we've had 3 safety cars twice in the Silverstone 500. We're on our second already, and we've still got over an hour and a quarter to go. So Brendan Arib then leads in the number 70 McLaren. GT4 is seeing a bit of pit stop activity. We just saw the Freddie Tomlinson car come in. That was leading GT4, so that will presumably put the number 90 car back in front now. That is the Jack Brown and Charles Clark car. It's Charles Clark at the wheel of the number 90 McLaren for the time being, from Carl Caver second and Michael Johnston in third. As Joe was just saying, though, this could be a benefit for the 55, but that tyre that has just come off the left front did not look healthy, Joe.
That looked like a bit of canvas showing, didn't it, on the inside edge. So those front tyres are always run positive camber, so that means they lean into the car more. If you were to look at it from the top end, the inside is more over, and that helps the car roll into grip. But I think the only thing it could be, I think because they had a fire there with the pit stop, I think it actually might just be cement dust. It's the only thing. I saw it the same as you, but seeing that other one that was fully covered in white stuff, I think is there. So these guys need to beat the safety car.
the safety car does a constant-ish speed, but depending on what the race director wants, if they want this to be a short one, it might be better he goes a bit slower so he can get it done in one lap less, which is ultimately a shorter safety car window. I think that car is going to struggle to get out. If they were still doing the wheels, we know that when we watched the sister car earlier, it stood there for about 20-25 seconds longer, and I don't think that is going to be 25 seconds enough time. The pit exit lights go red when the safety car is in the final corner, which it is in now. So I think, unfortunately, that car is going to get held at the end of the pit lane by a red traffic light.
I think you might be right, unfortunately, because out of the last corner now comes the safety car, so the car may be released from the pit box, but whether it's allowed out of the pit lane, we'll have to wait and see. Now, as the Crocodile exits Luffield, we're getting towards that 75 minutes to go window. Will we see any of the GT3 cars dive for the pit lane? So far, the answer is no. Out of the box goes the 56 car. Into the pit lane has come one of the GT4 BMWs as well, but no takers yet in GT3.
Yeah, we saw a red light on the exit there. How do I say this? I've done exactly, I was going to say, how do I say this without making myself look bad? Drive through that red light. What's the penalty? It should be a drive-through. What's a drive-through? 20 seconds. What's being a lap behind? 2.5 minutes. Which one do you want? Yeah. I've done it before. I'm not promoting it being a positive cheat, but he's done exactly what I've done before. I'm very proud of it, and I don't like talking about it. Let's see what race control do now. The penalty is a drive-through, but he's benefited a hell of a lot more than a drive-through is worth.
Surprisingly enough, car 56 is under investigation for its pit exit. I can't think why. Let's wait and see what comes of that. But you're right, sometimes it's the lesser of two evils, isn't it? And like you say, the time loss is going to be greater if they'd have just sat there, because you have to wait for the whole group of cars to come through. We've mentioned a few times there are lots of them here today, and it would have cost them a huge amount of time and track position. So perhaps that was the right thing to do. We'll wait and see how that one plays out. No takers from the GT3 pack, though, that time around, so all of them staying out. And we have got still, even at this, well, we're almost 2/3 of the way through this race, we've still got 16 GT3 cars on the lead lap, so plenty of them still in contention, with another round of pit stops still to go. In GT4, it is the well, it was the Raceway Motorsport car that led. It will now be Optimum Motorsports number 90 that will take over the class lead, with DTO Motorsport up there as well. These new Arturas, they're a brand new car. You wouldn't know that, really, would you? When you look at the results and the way they've raced in the first few rounds this season, it has immediately become a competitive package. It doesn't look that dissimilar to the outgoing car, but I'm sure underneath, Joe, there have been quite a few updates.
Yeah, see one of the BMWs being pushed in. I mean, the main reason the McLaren Artura is so competitive is I did a lot of the development, so naturally, obviously I could do all of that, but it starts as a great package. The road car, as I said earlier, is a carbon fibre chassis. It's what every F1 car has been since McLaren introduced it into Formula 1 in the 80s, and that V6 has got so much torque. It's such a drivable car for a pro or an AM alike, and they've got strength in numbers as well, haven't they? There's 7 of them on the grid, so if you're a betting man, you'd choose that one because there's the most of them anyway. But yeah, they've done really, really well with that car. Lots of customer teams, so it isn't as easy as just give the car to a team and they're fast. Those customer teams have got to make the car fast. All the setup, all the development of that car, and I think you're seeing probably early on which teams can get on top of it, and you'd say probably Optimum have maybe done the best job out of all of them, just purely on that pace at Ultra. Remember, they're on pole position by a second over everyone. That was one of the biggest gaps I've ever seen. Safety car lights are off, so Arib is going to back them up. What should he do? He should go relatively early to spread them out. There's not that many GT4 cars involved. There is one in front of Cottingham, though, so that would be worth going, but he still looks quite steady away, doesn't he? He can drop it whenever he wants. They're starting to spread out. Yeah, they've gone. So Tilbrook is behind. That's the car we're looking. He has got one of the Parker Porsches in between of Martin. That slightly older one technically should be getting blue flags, but there's enough going on for all the marshals where that is going to be pretty hard for them to see. And you see that GT4 holding up Cottingham. He was just getting past him as they crossed the line, which is the correct thing to do. Painfully slow, but unfortunately it's the only way you can do it.
So back underway then with 1 hour and 12 minutes to go in the 2023 Silverstone 500, and it's Brendan Arib who holds officially a 1.3 second advantage over Morgan Tilbrook, who has already got past that lapped Porsche. Third place then for the Aston Martin of Andrew Howard, fourth place the Mercedes of James Cottingham, and fifth the red BMW on your screen there of Darren Leung. filter their way through Maggots and Beckett. It will take probably a lap or two for this to filter itself out as Richard Neary and John Ferguson go either side there of the Club Beauvais number 19 Aston Martin, and Neary will come out of that on top. So that's a change for 7th place. Richard Neary always on his toes at a race start or restart, and that is why, because it's a prime opportunity to gain positions.
Yeah, it really is. And Beauvais in his first ever British GT race would have thought, I've just bought a brand new Aston Martin, I'm sure I'm going to win this weekend. And then you come into a championship and you get a real understanding of the level of everyone going. As we see Kevin say to the inside of his sister car, there's always one car you don't want to hit unless you really hate them, and it's your sister car. What's it going to do? And he's got down the inside easily. I actually think Alex West probably didn't read that situation of that Aston Martin going slowly and really hurt it. Kevin Say's on the move, isn't he? We saw him being quick at the start of the race as we go on board with West. And look at that gap already. 1.5 seconds to Kevin Say. He's got to get going if he's got a chance to give Kirchhoff a chance of really being anywhere near the sharp end.
Indeed so. Stuart Middleton, by the way, does still lead in GT4. I think I said before it was Charles Clark. I was anticipating this penalty that probably will be coming for the Ginetta. So Middleton leading from Clark, Havers, Johnson and Miller in GT4. But there, coming through your screen, is the fight for 3rd place in GT3. Andrew Howard and James Cottingham. Cottingham at the moment looking the quicker of the two, it must be said. And this could be significant because we think they're both on a fairly similar strategy. And this could end up being for the race victory come the end of the race if Joe's prediction is true. And the 97 car is the one to beat at the end of the day. Across the line they will go. The lead gap 1.5 seconds. It's 2.5 further back then to the fight for 3rd, as there Morgan Tilbrook tries his best to chase after the Inception Racing McLaren out in front, but no one really at this point in the race seemingly able to live with the pace being set by Brendan Areve. Howard and Cottingham through Maggots and Beckett's, two front engine cars, both generating their lap time in similar ways, but the Mercedes, as we've seen, has been super strong on the short run. That though is an ailing number 88 McLaren, and this perhaps explains why Alexander West was struggling for pace on the restart. He's crawling out of Luffield in the Garage 59 McLaren. He's heading for the pit lane. What the problem is, I'm not sure, but it looks like it's maybe low on the left front corner, either damage or a puncture on that corner perhaps, sending him into the pits.
Yeah, well, I said he needed to pick the pace up if he was winning a chance of a good position, and that's eluding him with the car. Yeah, I think you're bang on there, something on the front left corner. I know 3 hours seems like a long time, but these cars are designed for 24-hour racing. They should be able to go flat out every lap, as hard as you want, on every curve, as hard as on the brakes and the throttle as you want, and take it. But unfortunately, something's always going to fail at some point of its life, and they're expensive cars. Everything's lifed on the car, every individual component. The top teams are now starting to use these RFID readers to know which component is doing what. They can just barcode scan it. The level of technology is going through the roof. So, for example, a wheel, the wheel that connects there, not very well, has a life of 4,000 kilometres, which is 24 hours of racing. That has hit something, I would say. And then the bodywork's a bit damaged, that from the tyre, but everything's got a life rise. We see Kevin say to the inside of Neary, big slide, pick the throttle up too early, too eager, lost traction. Neary lives to fight another day. That Neary car, I haven't highlighted it as one of my favourites to win, but that does have the most amount of pro time remaining. So that's another one to be interested by. 2-3 seconds a lap in the pocket. Sam Neary's maybe got 8 laps more than the next car with the most, which is that group of cars, which I think is destined to win, Howard Cottingham and Darren Lung. But there's so much to play out still, isn't there? And Loggie's back on it again behind Ferguson. They were teammates last year, same cars now, but by different teams. What's going to go on there? Loggie has left Ram Racing, which was bought by John Ferguson. Anything to read into there? I'm not sure. I'm not going to say anything on that. But this is what I love, all those little battles going on. And these are the amateurs. Again, I'm talking about them. But these guys are the best of their, whatever they do. Ian Loggie, he made cardboard boxes. John Ferguson, big farmer in Northern Ireland. They're the best of what they do. Their egos are probably bigger than the pros. The pros are stupid. All they can do is drive around in circles. These AMs are making millions and millions of pounds to go and drive around in their circles. So their egos are probably in a different manner, but as important for them to beat their their level. They're not going to beat the pro, but they can beat another AM fair and square.
And it's become such a competitive part of the races now. When the AMs are out on track, you get some of the fiercest racing, actually. It's always hugely exciting, and we're going to get this for at least another few minutes. I agree. I do think that this team have a racing cars in with a shout today, actually, because, of course, as you alluded to, they took their pain earlier on by putting Richard Neary in that a little bit earlier. They lost a huge amount of track time, which they got back for free thanks to the safety car. So this has really played into their hands, and they should be able to plug Sam Neary in a little bit sooner than some of the other drivers can go to their pro runners. Here the fight for third place, still the same order then. Andrew Howard ahead of James Cottingham, but nose to tail they run down the first part of the Wellington Straight. By the end of it though, that Aston Martin looks a little bit smaller to me.
Yeah, it really pulls away, doesn't it? See how dirty the windscreen is. It's definitely not rain, but look at the pull under straight. I've been fortunate enough to race an Aston Martin 4 Pro Drive, and they're so good at maximising the performance from the engine. There'll be 12 engine maps that you can choose from, a mixture of how much fuel and boost you can use, and they'll be right up to the legal limit. So as soon as you can get a bit more fuel in because the air's gone a little bit thinner, they'll be throwing it in. They're the best at the business, in my opinion, at maximising performance. And don't forget, that car was in the wall less than 12 hours ago in qualifying. What a hero to zero story that would be. Cottingham looks a little cagey, doesn't he, of Howard? He doesn't look as confident as we've seen him against some of the other cars with showing his inside, running wide there. They're going to have to do what I would say is one of the windscreen tear-offs at the next stop. So the windscreen will have 3 or 4 layers of clear plastic, obviously clear, and then they'll pull them off, and then they'll get a fresh, clean windscreen. The problem is if you try and clean it, sometimes you just smear it, so it's better just to rip it off and start afresh, basically.
Out of Stowe Corner then, third place battle we continue to watch. They are now 7, nearly 8 seconds behind the race lead. No one can live with a Reba Tilbrook in this particular stint, but Morgan Tilbrook going better than he did previously, given the fact that he is in clean air. Here comes Loggy round the outside into Stowe Corner, trying to take 9th place away from John Ferguson, and that might work. No, Ferguson had the better exit. McLaren behind them, by the way, is multiple laps down. That is the number 13 race lab car that we saw Lucky Kira suffering damage in at this exact part of the circuit early on. They brought it in, they fixed the damage, they've got the car back out there, multiple laps down, but actually Lucky Kira, well, bails out of it completely now, just as I was about to say nice things about him. He was keeping pace with these two, but either another problem or he decides to take himself out of the fight altogether.
Yeah, Brendan Uribe's last lap, a 2-minute flat 0.9. That's less than 2 seconds off Ben Barnico. That's like me playing in the Premier League and scoring 7 slightly less goals than Erling Haaland. This performance is incredible, and I genuinely feel for them because of their strategy. They're not going to win today, but if there wasn't a safety car, they probably would have won today. That's that roll of the dice that you do, and the strategy sometimes is too black and white as we see them go side by side. I am expecting Neary to pit any lap. I think maybe within the next 3 laps, he will be coming in side-to-side contact. Neary letting Kevin say, great save there. Did you see the black lines leaving the back tyres as he went sideways? I think Neary politely just said in a slightly Scouse accent, not today, mate. You're going to stay behind, maybe for another 2 laps.
That was polite, was it? Blimey, I wouldn't want to get on the wrong side of Richard Neary, that's for sure. That was very close quarters stuff, but the Mercedes stays ahead and doesn't pit, so they're obviously going to try and push this as close to the hour as they can. I guess what they don't want is to pit early and then get trapped behind another safety car, because that could then really take them completely out of the equation. But I think their big advantage, as we've said, is getting Sam Neary in as soon as possible. It's surely worth the risk. There, the number 55 Ginetta, that car is running a little bit further down the order, but its sister car, 56, has a very, very healthy lead within the GT4 category. We haven't yet heard anything about any penalty for that pit lane exit past the red light, but they're a minute and 20-something up the road right now. So I think that that car, even with a penalty, unless they give it a 1-lap penalty or something, is still going to come out with the race lead. So I think, Joe, you were absolutely right. That was the right call. Wait and see what, if any, penalty they get, but it's unlikely that it will cost them the lead.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? And yes, going for a red light is bad, especially on the road. I don't do it that often anymore. But the problem, like what's happened? They've got in front of the safety car. They haven't caused a crash or anything. That's what the team manager will be saying to Peter Daly, the race control. Yes, he went for a red light, but what happened? Nothing happened. Like, let's just have a drive-through. We call it quits. Thank you very much. I'm going to see you on the podium when I've won the race anyway. So it is difficult. But this GT4 battle, I think, is again the ebb and flow of it. It feels like the McLaren is probably the best at the end of the stint, but the BMW at the start and the middle of its stint is so strong. It's difficult. And you see the Porsche down the inside, Enduro McLaren to the outside of the DTO one. That's going to give the Porsche a run now potentially into Vale. As we flick then to the Aston and the BMW just in front of that battle. Mustang a little bit lonely by itself. Porsche to the inside. Is there going to be contact? Looks clean, but now he's on the outside, so it's going to be hard for him to stay in front, and that's let the paddock McLaren through. So when you look at like track position and changes, you think you're the guy on the front foot, and then suddenly you've lost a place. You're like, well, that wasn't part of the plan 10 seconds ago. And you have to, again, regroup, stay calm, think about what you're going to do and move on to the next battle.
Ed McDermott there doing some curb hopping, coming out of club. That's never usually a good idea, but this is all for position within GT4. This is essentially third place on pack. Fantastic racing from the GT4 contingent, as we've come to expect. And it's McLaren, Aston Martin, BMW, Ford, Porsche, all involved in this long, long train of cars. And there's a side-by-side battle between Cavers and Miller. Aston Miller there, ex-Ginetta Junior racer, trying to get up the inside. It delays them both. It brings the group of cars behind even closer now. And 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th and 10th place within the class, heading into the left-hander at Brooklands. On the inside goes Ian Goff. He roughs up the number 17 car, which actually is the only car in that group that is not fighting them for position. And then at the very next corner, there'll be a change between the BMW and the McLaren, because Aston Miller had got himself ahead of Carl Cavers, only to run wide at Luffield. Cavers goes back through, and this is proper GT4 racing now. They've got the lapped car out of the way, and the four of them can do battle now for track position for 6th place within the class. And again, there'll be a slight variation in strategy between all of these teams as well, which will now start to play out, because unbelievably, we are into nearly the final hour of the race.
Yeah, and I think last bit, we're into the last hour bang now, so all the track limits have been reset. I actually wasn't seeing many black and white track limits towards the end of the hour. As a driver, I'd be asking my engineer, just politely asking, how many track limit warnings have I got left? You got 3 left, right? How long till the next hour? 6 minutes. I'm about to have the best 6 minutes of my life. I'm going to use all 3 of those track limits up, because they're going to be reset. And even if you're only finding a 10th or 2, it's enough to make a difference in this sort of battle, as you're seeing the DTO car to the front. We saw that car that looked like it might get overtaken by the Porsche less than a lap ago, and it's already now at the front of this 5-car battle pack. It's great racing. I love the GT4s. That slightly less aero-dependent lap time means they can follow nose to tail without really any time loss, and it really does lead to really, really close, hard racing.
Fantastic stuff. Not so much for Carl Cavers, though. He was at the front of this group a moment ago. Now he's right at the back of it, from 6th down to 9th in a handful of corners for the number 22 BMW. But he will try and fight back now, the car that he shares with Lewis Plato for Century Motorsport. The blue and orange McLaren behind is a lap down. That's Harry George, who, as we've seen, has been on this sort of alternate strategy for a little while. Now, collision or an incident between cars 19 and 88 is under investigation. Now, this presumably is relating to Alex West's issue and his damage earlier on. Now, Bryn has been doing some digging for us in the pit lane. Alex West said that he hit the side of Andrew Howard's car after Ian Logie sort of squeezed him a little bit. So there was a bit of a sort of 3-way bit of contact. Somewhere in all of that, the 19 car was involved too, and that is why West was in the pits.
Yeah, I'm not saying he's wrong, but he's wrong, because it wasn't Andrew Howard. 19 is the other Aston of Bovit, which is easily done in the heat at the moment. There's 2 Astons. You've got a 50-50 chance of claiming someone's hit you. But yeah, that sort of stuff is hard as a driver, because he's obviously effectively lost any chance of the race today. So the adrenaline is pumping, but the race director, I think, has always done a good thing by buying him some time. All the cars have really, really good onboard camera system. So after the race, let's review it and see who was at fault, rather than he said this, she said that, and whoever shouts the loudest wins sort of scenario. They're kind of playing the game correctly. See Kevin Say still with really good pace in front of Neary and starting to gap him now. Like I said, I expect Neary to be in any time soon. The car can do it on fuel. The driver time for Neary is in this window now, where he can get all the way to the end with Sam Neary, that is the pro, and all those extra laps against all the other AMs is free time effectively.
So, yeah, I agree with you. I would have thought that they'd be wanting to come in as soon as they possibly can. Team manager, by the way, of car 56 being summoned to race control. That is the Stuart Middleton Ginetta, so that'll be an interesting conversation. Here, the super slow-mo of the little bit of contact we saw before between Neary and Say.
Yeah, I love this. I don't know if it's just me, but so you see the inside just touching behind the front wheel. That forces the McLaren light on the rear. Then look at the opposite lock. The steering wheel's going to go the wrong way to the corner, and the big black lines out the back. You see the whole car wobble left to right because the weight's moving around in such an unorderly fashion, and then back to the job, get the car into the corner and off you go. But amazingly, no carbon fibre went flying. It shows you the strength of these cars, that you can get your elbows out a nerve from around. We're seeing Loggy still stuck behind Ferguson, quite literally stuck to him. This is getting racy. Ferguson to the inside. He's defending. Loggy's still got the run. Your best chance here, Ian, in that silver D2 livery is late on the brakes, and he does the absolute opposite to that. He gets Ferguson back ahead of him, and it's hard. He needed to brake late, run round the outside, maybe run off the track, use the track limit warning, then get the run into Vale. He's bleeding time. We know that Ram Mercedes with Ferguson in has damage. It's definitely losing half a second a lap, and it just not worked for Loggy Dares. It's amazing sometimes that pit stop, the front left wheel they couldn't get on. It's all unravelled from there. They're in a part of the grid that they shouldn't be racing, but yet they can't get back to where they belong because it's so competitive.
And of course got caught up in that lap 1 incident here a year ago too, so it's not been a particularly happy hunting ground for Ian Loggy. Now, the gap between these two McLarens at the start of this lap was nearly 2 seconds. It is now about 2 car lengths separating Brendan Aribe and Morgan Tilbrook, so something has happened to Brendan on that lap, perhaps traffic related, that means the gap comes down from 2 seconds to 0.6 seconds. Meanwhile, team manager for Team ABBA Racing is now being summoned to race control. Not entirely sure, well, I think I do know what that's about. That may well have been the contact with the Sky Tempesta McLaren that we just saw the super slow-mo replay of. Ian Loggy still stuck behind John Ferguson, and once again has got Lucky Kira on his tail in the number 13 McLaren. It is all going on here as we move into the final hour.
Yeah, I think it's actually Ewan Hankey, and that's why we're seeing that car so hard. It's really hard for Ewan, so he's a pro against these AMs, but they are so far behind, he just kind of needs to stay out of the battle. Loggy might not mind if he came past and opened a gap then on Ferguson, as they look like they were brushing coming out of Copse. That is 125, 130 miles an hour at that point, and actually runs a little bit wide there. Ewan Hankey looks like he's going to try and get round the outside of Ian Loggy. Has he seen him? Yes, he has, but he's not really passed, is he?
But no, Loggy's not letting him go at all, is he? Down the Hanger Straight they head, and I can sense more than a touch of frustration starting to seep out of that number 1 Mercedes now. Shulgunon watching on, but he looks a little bit more nervous now than we're used to seeing him. The man who races under an Andorran flag does Shulgunon, and he is going to be determined to try and get a better result out of this race. But to do that, needs a clean car, and right now I think Ian Loggy is perhaps putting that in jeopardy, rubbing the nose of his number 1 Mercedes AMG onto the back of the number 15 ahead of him, and Ewan Hankey right behind. In fact, Ewan Hankey driving through the gravel trap, so engaged in the battle that he's not really a part of, was he? And falls back behind the number 78. Now that's Sean Balfe also fighting against these two for position, so suddenly the Lamborghini are part of this battle as well, and that isn't going to improve Loggy's mood one bit.
No, it's not, but I would have to say that Balfe is struggling, or the Lambo is struggling. It's peeling over. We see a car off to the right there. I didn't quite see what car that was.
Century Aston, I think.
Okay, so we see a stop-go penalty, 131 seconds. That kind of alludes to exactly how much they've gained. So the race director has thrown the book at them and everything else that they go. So what happens to that Century Aston Martin? Caution's down the inside. Did you just squeeze him over?
Oh, dear.
I mean, hopefully for everyone involved, the Aston gets going and it's put down as a racing incident. But if that was the same class, that's going to be a penalty, isn't it? Should it be any different for multi-class racing? In my opinion, no. As we see Sam Neary, the first pro to get in for the last stint of the race. That's an added spice of dynamic, isn't it? But going back to that Ginetta, like I said, the penalty should be a stop and go. The race director is a dictator, not a director, so he can really use the rules to whatever he feels is fair and necessary. Would you say it's fair? Yes. Is it necessary? Maybe. It's a shame for those guys. We said early on in the race they rolled the dice. Oh, big impact there. Who's that? Is that the Team Brit 570 McLaren? It was a GT3 McLaren. Couldn't quite make out which one it was, but that is going to be another safety car. Who's going to win here? Sam Neary, if he hasn't gone a lap down, which I think he must have, is the big loser I can think of straight away. I think this has got a chance of playing just into Cottinger and Howard's hands the most.
That was indeed a big hit for the team Bryn McLaren. I think it was Maggots Beckett's, but I couldn't quite tell for sure. One of the McLarens I suspected it might have been was the number 13, but it's not. Ewan Hankey is still there. And indeed, the safety car comes out just as Sam Neary has left the pit lane in the Team ABBA Racing Mercedes. This will turn the race on its head. And what did I say? When you get one safety car, in this race in particular, it seems you're always likely to get 2 or 3. And this is now a third safety car period of the race. It's the third time in the history of this 3-hour race that we've had 3 safety car periods, and this is going to be perhaps a slightly lengthier safety car period, because that's going to be a lot of recovery work to be done. First of all, we need to make sure the drivers are okay, then we need to get the cars out of the way, and then there was a lot of debris. You'd have to imagine some fluid maybe getting dropped on the track as well. This could take a little while, and again, really couldn't have come at a worse time.
Yeah, the Arib and Tilbrook car, with Barnacote and Clutton respectively for those cars doing the maximum first stint of like 65 minutes. It means they've only got 35 minutes left to do. We're 15 minutes away from that. Is the safety car going to be 15 minutes? I would probably say yes at this moment in time. That might just bring them back into the game. After me writing them off, this long safety car, right at there couldn't be a better point of a 3-hour race for this safety car for them. The only thing is it negates the win they've got. So they did have all that extra time over them because they'd already had their pros. So it's going to be really tight. It now opens it up to 6 cars, I think, really, that have got a chance of winning. And it's down to which pro do you think is the fastest out of those 6 cars?
Don't forget, of course, this is the third and final pit stop. This is when those compensation times are added on for those who were on the podium in the second race at Alton Park. Now, this is the worst time that there could have been a safety car then, because it bunches everyone together. You sit there for an extra 10, 15 or 20 seconds, you're going to lose a handful of positions. So, car number 1, 20 extra seconds. Car 15, 15 extra seconds. And the Garage 59 McLaren, which is sort of irrelevant now, 10 extra seconds. Within GT4, Race Labs number 29 car has 20 seconds of compensation time to serve. Optimum's number 90 has 15 seconds. That could be significant because they are running at the moment second in the class. That will become the class lead when Middleton serves his penalty, and then 10 extra seconds for DTO Motorsport. So that is another thing now to factor into what is already a bit of a head scratcher.
Yeah, luckily the compensation times that you said to for GT3, none of them are in the top 7, which shows you how competitive, because they were the top 3 at Alton Park and they're not even in the top 7 before the compensation time. The real interesting one that I'm very excited about is, what does the safety car do for that 56 Ginetta that's got to stop and go at a minute 31? Yes, it's going to lose a lot of track position, but it's going to stay on the lead lap, and where can he slot back into? A minute 31 is obviously longer than the lap. He would have gone a lap down, but under a safety car, it's not even half a lap time. So as long as they time it right and they don't drive through another red light on pit exit, they might live to fight another day. Their strategy has been rogue, to say the least, and they've been thrown another lifeline.
Where I'm trying to pick them out. I think they're about halfway down the safety car queue, aren't they? So, yeah, I think they'll be okay. I think you're absolutely right. They'll stay on the lead lap for sure, because that penalty, 131 seconds, that's 2 minutes 11, which is a GT4 lap time. So it was almost exactly a 1-lap penalty, but that's a green flag lap time, not a safety car lap time that will be well in excess of 4 minutes or so. So, yeah, another twist in the story within GT4 in particular, with the top 2 cars, both about to serve lengthier times in the pit lane than they would like to for slightly different reasons, but that will certainly have an effect on the outcome of that race. Whilst in GT3, Joe, we're already starting to see some people in.
Yeah, just seen Balf pit in that Barwell Lambo we're talking about. Mitchell is now in, so it's been very interesting to see which pros have got it. Barwell are the real first top team, I would say, in that GT3 pack to be able to take a real advantage of this safety car. And you're kind of thinking, why would you pit now rather than later in the safety car? The earlier you pit, the better your track position will be, because obviously you lose the track position, but everyone that needs to pit will then go back behind you again. So it is as early as you can do it, the best you can now with that stint time remaining. And as a driver, I'd be getting in as Sandy Mitchell, 48 minutes. I'd be the most annoying person. I'd be making sure that the tyres are all good, the best I've got available. I'd be like, you know, it's only 48 minutes. I don't need a full stint of fuel. Only for a fuel save a bit. Give me 45. I would want that car as light as possible. So potentially, if Sandy Mitchell could catch the back of this train, he could be jumping all of these top 7 GT3 cars that I said were going to win the race.
Yes, that was a confident prediction that you made a little while ago, but that's the unpredictable nature of motorsport, isn't it? And these things can happen. And very aggressive entry into pit lane there for James Cottingham, sends the pit board flying. Johnny Adam moves over to help him get out of the car. So a wave of GT3 cars in. Interestingly, not all of them though. As Joe said, the earlier you come in, the better your track position should be when the whole pit cycle is done. So we've got Cottingham jumping in. The number 27 car is in as well. Darren Leung will get out of the number 91 BMW. John Ferguson will hand over there to Raffaele Marciello in the number 15 Mercedes, but that means that Arib, Tilbrook, Howard, Say, Loggy all stayed out. Mark Sansom in the top 10 as well. I don't think I've mentioned Mark yet, but he in the Lamborghini for this year, running with Barwell Motorsport, is into the top 10 as well, whilst Dan Harper and Darren Leung have a quick chat before Dan, arguably the quickest GT3 driver here today, jumps into the Century Motorsport BMW ahead of what could be a massive, massive stint for him. Depending on how much racing we get in here after this safety car's been dealt with, that car absolutely could be a contender for a race victory. Driver change ongoing, and yeah, can't wait to see how this looks once all is said and done.
It's going to get real interesting real quick. The pros will also have a little bit of a hard job. Like I say, the tyres are at the perfect temperature now, hopefully out the tyre oven, but behind the safety car they all start to drop off. So you've got to try and find the balance. The harder you work the tyre to keep it warm, the better, but you are taking life out of it. So when it does go back to green, it's there. So your job now is to try and assess the situation. How long is the safety car going to be? The pros know their cars. They know, in the McLaren, for example, I know it takes me a lap and a half to get the tyres back up to where I want them. So 2 laps before I think the safety car is going to come in, I start working it. That's the hard bit to call now. There's a lot of factors for these pros to go in. And when it feels like a short stint, like 45 minutes, you know you've got to go maximum attack. Let's see that Ram car. Where they're going to release should be behind the 2Cs by at least 6 or 7 seconds. Car control, we saw them get a drive-through penalty at Alton Park for too short a pit stop. So the car controller, I'm sure, will have that in the back of his mind. Rob Bell leaving there. They've really jumped up the order as well. They're in front of that Century BMW, which we know was running inside the top 3. It's an agonising wait, isn't it, for Raffaele Marciello in there. I'm surprised they haven't attempted to try and get a dive plane on the front of that Ram car. With all this extra time, I don't know the Mercedes inside out, but most cars, it's just a couple of screws, quick turns in it. Just throw it on and see if it sticks. Worst thing, it falls off and you get another safety car anyway and you can try again. But yeah, with the deficit they've got, it's going to be a real hard fight for probably one of the best GT drivers in the world to be in there for a podium. We see Kevin Say should be boxing sometime soon, shouldn't he, to get Chris Froggatt in for that last stint. Drives very close to the steering wheel, doesn't look at the bend in his arm. That looks uncomfortable to me, but I'm sure he's happy with it. Still super focused, even going 80, 90 kilometers an hour under a safety car. Easy to make a mistake. Doesn't really sound like he's fuel saving too much, does it? He's keeping a bit of tyre temperature, maybe moving left to right, so maybe they're not planning on boxing under this safety car. Yeah, although look at his seatbelt. So actually, you see his hands device, that blue padding on. The seatbelt isn't actually touching that. So I don't think he's undone it to come in, but I think he hasn't quite got it right there either. So that would be quite uncomfortable to have a seatbelt right on your skin rather than sitting over the top of the hands device. Safety car still with its lights on. We know those lights need to be off before the bridge. You can just see the shadow of in the background to know it's that lap it's coming in. So we're looking at our race leader. When can they pit? I think we're still 8 minutes away. And at the moment, with safety car laps being 4 minutes 15 seconds, I think 2 more laps. Like I said, they're in with a mix, but they're going to be a long way back in that pack now.
And all of this, really, they're limited by the maximum driver time, and this essentially is a decision that was taken a couple of hours ago at the very first safety car that's now having a knock-on effect as we move into the final 3/4 of an hour. They cannot put their pro driver in too soon, otherwise they'll exceed that 100 minutes. A wave now of GT4 cars making their way in, so again they've just managed to tick into their pit window, if you like, the driver time window that will allow them to make it from here to the end without having to do another driver change. And in also comes the number 56 car, so they've got this 1 lap penalty as it should be, but actually it's a 2-minute 11-second penalty to be served. And well, will they come out still with the race lead? Looks as though they might have half or won't be the lead, but they'll still be on the lead lap and well in contention. Enduro Motorsport struggling there to get the fuel hose out, but they've got plenty of time. They can't start that refueling process until everyone is safely back behind the line, which now is the case. So GT4 cars coming in. We also have the 64 GT3 in too. Also worth mentioning that Sam Neary is trapped a lap down. I saw him in that safety car queue. So by pitting before the safety car, that car has unfortunately been trapped one lap down and therefore out of contention. A really rotten bit of luck, that.
Yeah, it really is. And they tried it and you thought they were the strongest. It's amazing how strategy goes. You think you've got it. So it was really, really hard for those guys. These guys, I think, have probably already done their stop-go penalty that we were talking about. The stop-go box is just in front of them. This is actually the first garage in the pit lane. So let's see where they are. We see a lot of damage to that JMH GT3 McLaren already on the flatbed on the right. See its bonnet all the way up. The Team Brit car, I think the damage is the other side of the car, so we can't see it. We've been told both drivers are out and okay on their way to Manchester. So the Team Brit car has had a spin and then has rejoined, and that might look really, really stupid. Why has he done that? You are so blind in a race car. You've got to rejoin. He's obviously gone off, hit the wall. He's looking to his left. You can see the driver looking, but there's such a big blind spot in that pillar. He's pulled away thinking he's clear. And then Simon Orange comes into shot. Nowhere to go. That is a big, big impact. Luckily, it was just behind the driver's door, wasn't it? The yellow flags are up for the marshals. Could the cars have been going slower? The yellow flag, you should be able to come to a controlled stop, but I've never had a car pull out in front of me, so it's hard to say. I'm not putting any blame on anyone, but I can see why it's happened. I'm not saying someone could have done a better job, but it is difficult in that circumstance.
Drivers we're hearing are being taken to the medical centre for check-up, essentially. Aaron Morgan was the driver in the Team Brit car. Wheelchair user is Aaron Morgan, and that really has always been Team Brit's ethos, isn't it? Bringing drivers with disabilities into motorsport, and they both have shown how incredibly quick they are into the pit lane. Which of the McLarens was that, Joe?
That's the Paddock Motorsport 29 car that was doing really, really well and had the Pro to go in. Obviously, a Pro-Am GT4 don't have this extra long pit stop that we see in the Enduro do. They would have had 14 seconds on them. But as soon as that car goes into the garage, like I said, it's game over. It's too big a problem. I know a lot of the McLaren's been struggling with suspension issues. I couldn't see anything on it, so it's going to be hard to call. Be interesting to see how quickly that car comes back out of the garage and gets going again. But realistically, look where the safety car is. He's got 30 seconds to get back out and gone. I think that's them out of contention for today.
Well, the joint championship leaders in GT4, Ian Goff and Tom Wrigley, their second drama of the day, this, of course. And GT4, really the class no one seems to want to win, although the number 90 car of Optimum Motorsport, Charles Clark, at the wheel at this particular point. They are, at the moment, in a pretty good position, leading their class for the time being. And, well, yes, they are leading the class because the Ginetta has just pitted to serve that penalty. It's rejoined, but still very much on the lead lap. As we saw, there's still a bit of clean-up work to be done down at Maggotts and Beckett, so we're going to have at least one more lap behind the safety car, and this time, maybe, we'll start to see some of the GT3 cars come in. It's all weather. We've got into that window now, a couple of them hanging right, but no, staying out once again. However, we've got an Aston Martin coming in, and this is Andrew Howard. So Andrew Howard bringing the 97 Aston Martin in, the first of those GT3 front runners to blink, and he brings a whole queue of others in with him.
Yeah, I'm surprised he hasn't pitted slightly earlier. I think 78, this Barwell car, is the one that's going to be really, really near the front, because it's the first one that's got his Pro in, because it pitted that little bit earlier. Like I said, it was the first one to pit. Mitchell was the Pro with the longest available. Adam then was the lap after in the 2Cs car. Then it was Rob Bell, then Harper Marcello. So I think Mitchell is our race leader. They were P10. We were watching that battle, weren't we, with Loggy and Ferguson in front, languishing towards that back end of the top 10. That is where strategy goes. And I interviewed him on the grid. I called him a dictator, but Mark Lemmer knows how to win races. That is why they're the most winningest team in the Silverstone 500.
Exactly, because they're not afraid to play an interesting strategy game. They've pitted at the end of the first lap before and managed to make that a winning strategy. And of course, it would be Sandy Mitchell in that car, wouldn't it, to bring it home? The man who has won this race twice before. We know that he can get the job done. The only question I have is whether that car has the outright pace, the raw pace to defend, because yes, they might get some good track position, but they're not going to be far ahead of the rest of the pack here because of this safety car. So Sandy has one heck of a battle on his hands.
Yeah, we really are. Looking at that 55 Ginetta, it's got a lot of marks all over it, hasn't it? It really shows you when you think that car's been on fire. We've seen it have contact with 2 other cars at least. The door's not quite closing like a VW Golf would, I don't think, either. So these cars are now starting to get to a point where they need to be nursed back. Going back to Sandy Mitchell, I think that Evo 2 Lambo that's been launched this year hasn't hit the ground running as much as we were expecting. We always see Barwell at the front with a Lambo, but that Evo 2 is the first time we've seen him take a step back. And actually, not on the driver union defence. I don't think it's the drivers. When you think you've got Sandy Mitchell, Sean Balfe, race winners in their own right, you've got Sansom and Tregurtha. We're looking at that Ginetta. I think we're hearing some reports that the door may be even looser than I was saying it was. And I think he's having to hold the door open. Is that a latch failure, or is that it is very warm? Obviously, the car is built up in Garforth, Yorkshire, so it's probably designed for 10, 12 degrees on a good day. I think it's the driver just getting a bit of air. It's going to be really, really difficult if it's a latch failure. I've had it before when it's the passenger door, and you're like, oh, it's okay, and then it swings open, like, oh, it's the other side, I'm not going to fall out of that door. But hopefully it's nothing serious, and it is just him getting a little bit of air. We are getting a black and white for the Nearies final warning contact, which is interesting. I wonder where that was. That must be that Kevin Say incident that we saw the super slow-mo of, because we haven't really seen any others. Go to the Optimum car there doing its final pit stop. Car controller talking to the driver on the road. You can see him touching that box on the hip. The mechanics all look happy. We're all good to go. What's he got on? Can't quite see any stickers on the tyres. Don't look quite new, do they? That Pirelli mark on the front left tyre looks a little worn, so maybe these are a scrub set to get him through to the end. The flashing indicators on the McLaren mean the pit speed is active, nothing to worry about. Can't hear the engine on, so probably more than 10 seconds to go. He'll fire up and off he goes. So quiet, I don't think I could hear it. It's like a Formula E car. Still green on pit exit, nothing to go, so he should take it off, and off we go. But look how close that was to the safety car boxing them in effectively.
Yes, and that safety car staying out for one more lap at least. I would hope this might be the last lap behind the safety car for now. And this, surely now, the opportunity for some of those, well, the rest of those GT3 cars who haven't yet pitted for a third time to do exactly that. Brendan Arieb and Morgan Tilbrook towards the front of the queue. And, well, Arieb is in, but I don't think Tilbrook is. So Arieb in from the lead, but Enduro Motorsports staying out for one more lap. So too appears to be Kevin Say. So even now, some of them not quite in that window.
Yeah, and it is quite difficult as well, because yes, they can't do 100 minutes or more, but that drive time isn't like as black and white. It starts as the driver leaves pit lane. So right now we're kind of in no one stint time, because Brendan's come in, it's stopped, and Ben Barnacle getting in, it hasn't started. But obviously the race is 3 hours, but that doesn't mean that's when the driver finishes his driving. You could get across the line with 2 seconds to go and do another 2 minutes. So you need some margin there as well. And that might be the difference of why we've not seen Enduro pit and why we have seen Inception pit, is that margin for error. They're obviously maybe just not as happy down in the Enduro garage.
Yeah, real shame this, though, for those who are having to wait and wait and wait, because the track position they're going to lose is fairly immense, with so many cars still on the lead lap within the GT3 class, 14 of them in total on the lead lap. Sam Neary, the first of those off the lead lap, unfortunately, in 15th place. Quick clean of the windscreen there on the Inception McLaren. They and Ian Loggy came in that time, so they were the only 2 GT3 cars to head to the pit lane that time around. And there, Sandy Mitchell gaining a position. Every time someone comes into the pit lane, he is still the highest placed of the pro drivers that doesn't owe us another pit stop. So this is the net race leader here, Sandy Mitchell. Johnny Adam will be second, And third place will be Rob Bell ahead of Dan Harper, Raffaele Marcello, Ross Good, Will Tregurtha. A fight that you would buy a ticket for, that, isn't it? And I honestly don't know which way this is going to go. We've got a car out in front that we haven't seen out in front all day long, but a driver who we know when the chips are down knows how to get it done. This is going to be a fantastic final for half an hour.
Yeah, his fastest lap is 4/10 slower than Johnny Adam, who is behind him, who's doing the same pace as Rob Bell behind him. Like I said, not a car we've seen at the front. And then Harper and Marciello. Harper's the same, Marciello's that bit off, we know he's got damage. So you've got 3 cars 4/10 of a second quicker than you. You're Sandy Mitchell. How are you feeling? One thing, you need the restart of your life. You need to get going, and then you're going to be hanging on for half an hour. What can you do in your defense? You've got no GT4 cars to help you. You've got those 3 cars lined up all the way behind, and yeah, we're seeing a long day for that car, aren't we? Like I said, that's not going to be in the top 10. It might even struggle to be in the top 15, I think, now. And that was our championship winner at La, and one of our best cars at Alton Park by a margin at some points, wasn't it?
It was indeed. Under the bridge goes the safety car on Stay the Light. So we're getting one more lap out of this then. Now, surely we will see the top 2 make their way to the pit lane. And that will release Sam Neary back onto the lead lap. So actually, he will get that lap back if they give him the time to race back around. But he should be able to do it. So this is good news because these 2 are first and second. Once they pit, the safety car will then try to pick up the overall race leader. So that Academy Mustang will get waved through. And so too will be Sam Neary. So again, chance of a win or a podium has gone, but at least they might have a chance of gaining some more positions. Tilbrook is in, Kevin Say is in as well, very cautiously down the pit entry here for Morgan Tilbrook. What's this all about, Joe?
So there's a pit in line where you can't be in front of the safety car, but they're miles by that. I don't know if he's knocked the pit speed limiter on too early, can't take it off. It's really hard. There's a bit of an unwritten rule because it's a safety car, you can't overtake, but the pit lane isn't part of the racetrack. Seeing Kevin Say undo his belts, ready for the driver change, fully legal, that's fine, as long as he doesn't undo them. So that buckle in the middle, he's got his hand on it now. Don't touch it, I'm not going to say anything if you do undo it, but it's fine. And then he'll come to stop, then he will undo it. But I hope it's not a problem for that McLaren, but that was going really slow. And you can see the frustration of Kevin Say. Couldn't do anything about it, but drive near him and look angry, basically.
Which didn't make the slightest bit of difference. So Marcus Clutton will get into the Enduro Motorsport car. Sandy Mitchell now does take over the genuine race lead from Johnny Adams second, Rob Bell third, Dan Harper fourth. There are no back markers between any of those cars either, so that is a straight race. Bart Lemmer not looking quite as relaxed as he was when you were chatting to him on the grid a few hours ago. He has all of his chips are down now, aren't they? He has made the call that has put them in the lead of the race. It's now down to his driver Sandy Mitchell to try and defend for his life. The wave around happening here, so it waves a number of cars by. The 55 of Michael Kreese gets one of it, so gets its lap back now within GT4, and that's of interest as well because that car is running within the top 5, I think, in GT4. We don't have that many cars, therefore, on the lead lap in that class, but we're believing the safety car will be coming in this time around. We're going to go racing with something in the region of 27 minutes or so to go, and as I said, Joe, no back markers between those top 4 or 5 GT3 cars. It's a straight race, and it'll be a while before they catch the back of the pack as well. So this is a genuine fight now for the race victory.
Yeah, especially when I reel off the driver names. You've got Mitchell, Adam, Bell, Harper, Marciello. Gunn will be next, then Tregurtha, Callum McLeod. You've got like 9, 10 of the best GT drivers out there, and they're all going to win this. We're going to get a 28-minute shootout, so roughly 13 laps around this Silverstone track. What have we got? Where's my prediction now? I'm fancying Harper in the BMW. We've seen how strong that car is at the end of the straight. If you could pick one strength to have in a race car, it's end of straight performance. It's the easiest time and the easiest, safest time to overtake another car. You can hustle a car in the corner. Once you're in the corner, if your car's a little bit rubbish and lethargic like that BMW looks sometimes, no one can overtake you. You're already in the corner. There's not another line. Whereas at the end of the straight, you can just blast past them. Mark Lemmer, Chris Nadell there on the left, Mark Sansom as well, the teammate of Will Tregurtha. Sandy Mitchell starting to back him up. Accelerate, brake, get those brakes up. 600-700 degrees, those discs will be glowing, getting those wheels
and tyres then warm. What's he going to do? I think I would go pretty early. I would go actually on the way into Brooklands. Everyone expects you to go in the middle. That's the obvious point. I would be going in the next 2 or 3 seconds, try to get him going. Sean Balfe looks nice and nervous, doesn't he? Teammate, he was running around 9th and 10th, did a good job. Sandy's already gone. Look at that, that is a mega restart. 2 car lengths to Johnny Adam.
Top 4 cars then, fighting for position, then a back marker, and then Raffaele Marcello. What has he got? What has Ross Gunn got in the Beach Team Aston Martin? 27.5 minutes left to settle it, and Sandy Mitchell's had the restart of dreams. He's already 6/10 to the good over Johnny Adams second, Rob Bell third, and Dan Harper in 4th position. Watch further back there is Ross Gunn coming through on the inside, bringing with him Will Tregurtha. So both of the Barwell cars have suddenly brought themselves right back into this out of really nowhere. Fingers crossed they all get through Maggots, Beckett's cleanly. There is some GT4 traffic to be dealt with further back. The Paddock McLaren comes scything through the middle of it all and then runs straight on, almost off the road completely. And here then comes the number 50 car around the outside of it. That was a very close moment for James Wallace, but he does manage to get the track position back. Damage is that on the side of Johnny Adams' car. Didn't notice that before. He is into 2nd place now with Dan Harper up to 3rd ahead of Rob Bell. So already some chopping and changing, and your prediction may well come right here. Dan Harper is on a mission.
Yeah, I'm trying to spot that damage. I could see it. I think it's more behind the front wheel. Is it? See those tyre marks just underneath the number 4? I wonder if part of that seal's just starting to break through. I don't think it's super important. The exhaust sit in those seals, and they've cut sort of grills to let the air out. I think it's just a tiny bit of carbon fibre flicking around, but there might even be the front wheel arch liner. So to stop all the debris going up into the bodywork and wreaking havoc, they do have normal sort of road car wheel liners. I think it might be on them. I'm not too worried about that. But yeah, Harper looks racy, doesn't he? Already passed Rob Bell on this first restart. I was surprised Johnny was that far back off Mitchell. Johnny's one of the sharpest tools in the game, knows all the tricks, but Mitchell sold him a dummy there. 2 canny Scotsmen playing against each other. I like it. It is really, really good. 26 remaining. Everyone has been clean so far, which when you see them go through Maggots and Beckett's in a ball of cars, you do wonder how they're going to pick a course through there without wiping each other out. But yeah, that 2C car doesn't look too bad, does it?
After that first safety car restart, quite frankly, I'd believe anything now when it comes to the congestion on those restarts. They survive that, they can survive anything. Through they come then. This is the completion of lap number 65. Raffaele Marcello, remember, is the next car behind this group. He's also going with them. 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th, all within sort of a second of each other. It's half a second between Adam and Harper, half a second back to Bell. Marcello is 8/10 back, and then it is 4.3 seconds back to Ross Gunn in the Aston Martin 6th. But the lead gap, that's the important one, and it's 1.2 seconds between Sandy Mitchell and Johnny Adam. This is really playing nicely into the hands of the Lamborghini. Lots of curb usage there for Johnny Adam, who also doesn't really have to worry about tyre wear, does he? If we're thinking that the Mercedes are struggling on tyres on the longer stints, this will not be a particularly long stint, will it? So he doesn't have to worry too much about that. What he does have to worry about is the top speed of that BMW.
Yeah, it's looking strong, isn't it? But Mitchell also, pace-wise, is looking good. That last lap was his best lap. So I said he was 4/10 slower on his best lap before this restart. That's now down to 2/10, so he's half the deficit. We're getting a message up there as well, the stop and go penalty of the 56 suspended. So I think because it got 1 minute and 31, but then the safety car came out, which kind of made it not pointless, but it was basically then back to a normal stop and go. They're now going to have to work out what they're going to do after the race, and that is where it gets really messy. I'm not going to get involved in that, but again, worth the roll of the dice. We'll leave it as that for now, shall we? Rob Bell looking fast and racy there into the first part of Village. Open the car up and off we go. You're amazed sometimes when you get that rear view of the Mercedes how much the wing shakes left to right. Those pylons holding up that main part of the wing all the way down to the chassis, so they're secure, but they're just so thin. Be it the pursuit of trying to get these cars as light as possible, and obviously weight up high is very bad for central gravity, so they are all the way down minimum weight that they can possibly be. And you actually look at the shape of the BMW ones, if we're getting a bit nerdy, that lovely swan neck, leaving the bottom part of the wing, which is actually the more important part of the wing. You always think the top bit's pushing you down, but it's the slowing down of the air to speed up the air under the car through the diffuser that's important. So BMW approaching that sort of clever concept of mounting it from the top rather than the traditional bottom.
Stock-go penalty, by the way, for Paddock Motorsports GT4 car for a short final pit stop, as there the number 56 machine makes its way through with this suspended penalty. They may not end up winning on the road though, because this safety car has bunched everyone back together, and they've got the very rapid number 90 machine of Jack Brown, the Optimum Motorsport McLaren, within about 3 seconds. Although, is that a pass for position? It is, isn't it? No, Dan Vaughan is a lap behind them. So there's the 90 car running in second position. The Dan Vaughan Porsche was battling this car for a podium place in the opening stint of the race, but the green and orange Porsche 1 lap down, given the way that the strategies have played out so far. So the first job, I guess, really here for the number 90 car is to find a way past. Jack Brown needs to get past the Porsche, get past some of the traffic, and start setting off after the Ginetta, which on that previous lap was actually half a second quicker than him. So the gap grows now to 3.6. As we focus in the main picture here on the GT4 battle, the inset shows us the GT3 squabble, which still has Johnny Adam ahead of Dan Harper. You need about 6 pairs of eyes, though, at this stage of the race to cover everything that's going on. And Jack Brown trying to work his way past the traffic is only a small part of it.
Yeah, we also had a message up on our timing screens about an incident under investigation, and it was that 2Cs one of Cottering and the GT4 Aston, which eventually the Aston hit the wall. We've kind of forgotten about it almost with everything that's gone on, but that is under investigation, so that potentially is a very, very dark cloud over our current second place car. If it was to get a drive-through penalty quickly, that would release Harper, I think, for a little bit more pace to burn. But as I say that, Mitchell's just done his fastest lap and the fastest lap of the race to get him right into that 58 8-bit, and Harper has gone, he's got through. See that flag from the marshal? I think it's just for debris. The yellow and red stripe flag can be a few things, can be debris, can be slippery surface, but I couldn't see anything too much. What's Harper got now? This is going to be his first clear lap. Shouldn't get any GT4s this lap either. Again, it looks like that Mercedes goes off almost, doesn't it? I think you were right. I thought it would be fine for a 30-minute stint. Started so strong, but Rob Bell's now all over the back of him. Something's not working particularly well on that Mercedes. Not that one, but all of them as a collective over a longer period of running.
Dan Harper, even with that overtake, was about 3/10 faster than Sandy Mitchell on the previous lap, so now he has been released. I tend to agree with Joe. I think he will have the pace to catch the Lamborghini. It's then about how well Sandy can defend the lead. Raffaele Marcello also joining in the fun now, and he can suddenly sniff an opportunity for a podium, because I think he's a little bit quicker than Rob Bell, and they're both a little bit quicker than Johnny Adam, who we ride on board with. Way wide over the curbs goes Rod Bell, using up all of his track limits warnings that he's got, and they drop down through the Vale into the club chicane, with 3rd, 4th and 5th positions getting as close as they can. This is the incident that Joe just referenced, the contact between the Mercedes and the Aston Martin. Boof, off goes the Aston into the barriers, and if that ends up with a penalty, it could change things greatly. We're hearing that the team manager of car number 4 has been summoned to race control, and that usually only ends one way.
Yeah, I'm normally the bad guy saying what should happen. What do you think that penalty should be? What do you think is a fair assessment of that one?
I mean, there wasn't really anywhere the Century car could go, was there, on that occasion, I would say. So I've seen penalties given for less, that's for sure. Thought there that we were going to have the change for 3rd place. Johnny Adam and Rob Bell were side by side, but Rob not quite able to commit to the move. That brings Marcello now right onto his tail as well, and they're both stuck behind this car that may have a penalty incoming. And of course, what Rob Bell and Raffaele Marcello want is that penalty to be coming now. Get the Mercedes out of the way, because then they're released to chase after Dan Harper. But right now, that isn't happening, and they're going to have to find a way through the hard way.
Yeah, and the McLaren had a lot of straight line speed in it right at the end, but really loses out on that low end traction. I think just that punchy 6.3 litre V8 naturally aspirated. There's so much torque in this Mercedes we're on board with. The McLaren, yes, it's a 4 litre twin turbo V8, but there's always just a little bit of lag with turbo, and everyone works so hard to get rid of it, but it's just a natural inherent issue with turbo engines. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes at the end of this next straight. So they're all over these curbs now. They're really, really pushing hard, aren't they? Just a little bit back. Look at that gap. It's coming down again. Another half a second, same as the lap before. It was a purple sector 1, which is the sector they're just finishing now. We know the BMW is so, so strong. What's he got? We've got 8 laps, 9 laps remaining or so. It's looking good for the BMW, isn't it? But you always want track position. Doesn't matter who's got the fastest car. Track position is key.
Yes, the gap went up by another 10th in the first sector. Meanwhile, news from race control, 10-second stop-and-go penalty for both cars 4 and 19. Number 19 is the Claude Beauvais David McDonald Blackthorn Aston Martin. Car 4 is the car you're on board with right now. Johnny Adam in 3rd position. not for the first time, his chances of a Silverstone 500 victory will disappear inside the final 20 minutes or so of the race. He's already slipped down into third place. He's dropping away from the leaders. He's got that little bit of something hanging loose from the front of the car, and now he's got a stop-go penalty to serve as well. That will release Rob Bell and Raffaele Marcello behind him, but I think really the damage is done as far as them catching Harper goes, because Dan Harper has gone in the middle sector of this lap, though. Couple of tenths slower than Sandy Mitchell again. So Sandy responding a little bit now. Maybe he was just keeping something in reserve until he saw Dan Harper take that chunk of time out of him last time. On this occasion, if anything, the Lamborghini pulling away.
Yeah, he obviously had that new tyre hit really well, Mitchell. Now he's probably just learning the car a little. What's it like now the tyres are starting to drop off? But yeah, Harper's pace is really good in this first half of the lap, and then it ebbs slightly back to the Lamborghini again. So basically we've got a minute of positive BMW time coming up, and then a positive minute for Lambo. Mark Lemmer on the radio. Doesn't look like he's talking, looks like he's trying to pretend he's busy. He's actually put the mic out now, he's not fooling anyone. But what we're going to see, we're also getting the speed traps at the end of this straight. They're about to come onto a big slide there for Harper. He's throwing everything at it, and he is 4 miles an hour quicker than the Lamborghini. That is a huge amount. A mile an hour or two is enough to get an easy overtake. So to be more than double that is really interesting. Mitchell must have got held up a little as well with that GT4 Aston coming on to hang a straight. Johnny Adams still hasn't come in to take his drive-through penalty. I'm sure Optima have told Rob Bell in the McLaren behind, you can chill a little. We've got a podium being given to us at the moment. All you need to do is keep Raffaele Marciello behind you for another 16.5 minutes.
Albeit a slightly wounded Raffaele Marcello, although actually Rob Bell's problems may come instead in the form of Ross Gunn in the Aston Martin, because he's just done a new fastest lap of the race, and he is there almost on the back of Marciello. So the number 97 Aston Martin absolutely flying right now. Fastest lap of the race. He was about 4.5 seconds behind this group of cars on the restart, and he's already up there with them. The question is now, where can he make the move? Not quite close enough into the braking zone at Village. Marcello stays ahead, but this car has got some serious pace and could still be on the podium.
Yeah, I'm still a bit confused why they boxed so late in that last safety car. They were with that main group that did this long last stint for the pros, but they didn't seem to take so much of an advantage on it. Don't know if it's a fueling thing, if they've got the thing wound up so much on the turbos, maybe it can only do, it can definitely do more than the time they gave Ross Gunn to do it. So it's not that, I'm a bit lost by their strategy. That's why I thought they were on for the win, because they've got so much pace, but they lost 4 or 5 places not boxing as early as potentially they could have.
Johnny Adam in to serve the stop-go penalty, but no, you're absolutely right. We were fully expecting that Aston Martin to be a real factor in this race. It could still make the podium, but surely the race win is a step too far even for a fired-up Ross Gunn. The lead gap 1.0 seconds because they lapped within a tenth of each other last time. Fractionally quicker was Dan Harper, but he just hasn't quite got enough of a pace advantage over Sandy Mitchell, and that makes the overtake that little bit harder. These drivers are always going to be harder to overtake because they're the pros. They know how to defend. When the lap times are within a tenth or so of each other, it's not going to be an easy pass, is it? Yes, the BMW's got that straight line speed advantage, but really you're looking for 4-5 tenths of a second of an advantage per lap for it to be a relatively easy pass.
Yeah, exactly that, and it is the best strength. Where's the overtake going to come if he gets a bit closer? I think the end of Hanger Straight where they've just left, I think Sandy will defend, he'll go to the inside, but there's enough space to go all the way around the outside there, potentially then have the inside to Vale where we're looking now. Next best one probably into Brooklands. We saw Harper overtake Marvin Kirchhoffer there earlier of a really nice overtake. As we get more news on the 56, I hope the team manager's got his Fitbit on, because his step count is going to be through the roof. They've got the stop and go penalty for 131 seconds, which I think race control have been very clever there. They postponed the penalty under the safety car because it wouldn't have hurt them as much, and now we've gone back to green, they've got the penalty again. So I think it was the right thing, but I'm not caring anymore, I'm just a bit bored of it.
Yeah, it would be nice to get that saga resolved, wouldn't it, before the checkered flag? Of course, the problem is that the safety car actually negated most of the advantage that they got by beating the red light of the previous safety car, so it's going to doubly hurt them now. But anyway, it's all sorted. The number 90 car will take the lead, and it has got a very sizable lead, actually, so that's going to be a pretty dominant victory within the class, it seems. This, if you remember, was what they got the penalty for. The red light is on at the end of the pit lane, meaning you're not supposed to go past it, just as is the case on the road, and well, they went straight past it, out onto the track. They took the gamble, and it's going to cost them the win.
Yeah, as I said, you had to roll the dice, you had to do it. That gap's getting small, 0.3 of a second
8/10 taken out on that last lap alone. It's going to get real tasty quickly. Sandy will be all in his mirrors and rear camera working out where's his best bit. See a huge slide from Mitchell there, really working that rear tyre. He's definitely got nothing in reserve now as he is throwing everything at it. Both cars, they're sizing each other up. What have they got? Rob Bell in the background now, P3. Ross Gunn still behind Rafael Marciello, hasn't managed to do it. It just really closes that gap up as well. It looks so good on the brakes, the BMW. I think this is a matter of when rather than if, personally.
Well, the closer we get to that checkered flag lap, though, the more defensive Sandy Mitchell will become. The BMW gobbles him up under braking, but then the Lamborghini changes direction well through club and gets off the corner well enough to keep Dan Harper at arm's length. If they do start battling, don't count out Rob Bell and Raffaele Bargello, though, because on the previous lap, Bell was half a second quicker than Mitchell. If Mitchell starts to defend, that could bring them back into the fray as well. Meanwhile, an incident we're hearing between cars 4 and 97 will be investigated after the race. That is Johnny Adam and Ross Gunn, so the Beach Team Aston Martin and the 2Cs Mercedes. Right now, though, we focus on the fight for the victory. There are 12.25 minutes to go in this 2023 Silverstone 500. Is it going to be Barwell Motorsports Day? Will Century Motorsport get the victory? Surely the favourite is the BMW, with a much superior exit there from Aintree. Down the Wellington Straight, jinked from the outside to the inside. Fantastic stuff there from Dan Harper. Sandy Mitchell is desperately late on the brakes through Brooklands. Can he hang on? Surely not. He's got the inside line for Luffield, drifts out wide. Harper goes up the inside and finally manages to outfox the double Silverstone winner, almost leaning on each other off the corner. They're door handle to door handle past the pits with a handful of laps to go. Can Dan Harper wrestle the BMW through into the lead of the race? The answer is yes. Through he goes at Copse Corner. Dan Harper makes it stick with some terrific side-by-side racing.
That was the best dummy I've seen sold in a long time. Mitchell went on the defence, so it looked like the job was done. He then started drifting over rather greedily to the racing line, and Harper went, you know what, I'm coming back at you. And you saw the body language of that car. Darren Lung pretty happy with that one. Nathan Freak, team manager, giving him a big hug. Thank you for your money, and we might win this race. But that was brilliant by Harper, sold in the dummy, and then Mitchell had one chance. He was so late on the brakes to Brooklands to keep the win alive, which he did well, but he needed to brake earlier, stop it at Luffield, not run wide, park it on the apex, and not allow that BMW, one, to go through, and two, to keep the momentum on it all the way onto the start of the next lap. He's still close, but that BMW, I think, is really got it hooked up today.
And it's always so hard to pass a car that's quicker than you down the straights. That's the 64 Porsche off at the Beckett's complex, but thankfully no damage done. And as long as it got there on its own and there isn't another car stationary somewhere, we should be okay to keep green. Bounces itself back out onto the road, and we carry on as if nothing ever happened. But yeah, Dan Harper, now he's got that track position advantage, is going to be almost impossible to pass, surely. The question now, I guess, is whether or not Rob Bell can do anything about Sandy Mitchell. The starting point for him was 2.8 seconds at the start of the lap, but he has been going quicker than the Lamborghini driver so far on this, the 73rd lap of the race. Down the back straight they go, and now they catch the traffic. So that was perfect timing, really, for Harper, getting that move done before they hit the GT4 traffic, because that can take time away from you so easily and could well have ultimately robbed him of the chance to make the move.
Yeah, and he's got that gap of a second or so to Mitchell, which allows him a little bit of a conservative take on this GT4 traffic. When you've got a car right on your rear, you have to be a bit more aggressive to get past the GT4s, whereas if you've got that second, you can maybe let one of them slide and go, right, I'll lose 2 or 3 tenths, but I'm not going to damage the car potentially. So yeah, it's really played into his hands really well. But even with a bit of bad luck, get held up, don't get a run. We saw it with Johnny Adam losing the position to Ben Barnacle on the hanger straight. It's easily done, and that is happening right this second.
Exactly. Maggotts Beckett's such a difficult part of the circuit to catch the traffic at. Dan Harper doing a good job to side his way through. Ross Gunn, by the way, has got himself ahead of Rafa Marcello now, so he is into 4th place and will definitely still be hoping for a podium. Out onto the hanger straight they will go, past the GT4 leader. Well, they're not yet, actually, because Freddie Tomlinson hasn't yet been in to serve this penalty in the race-leading Ginetta, but the number 90 McLaren should go through into the lead of that class before too much longer, from the Optimum Motorsport car that will, the Optimum Motorsport car will lead. The Raceway Motorsport Ginetta will drop down the order. They're pretty close together on track as it is, but the penalty to come for the Ginetta should make that a done deal. Through comes Ross Gunn up the inside of that class-leading McLaren. He tries now to take the last few car lengths that he needs to out of Rob Bell to challenge for this podium finish.
And it might look like Jack Brown there's been a bit too conservative in traffic, but his lead is over a minute to P2, so he might as well, like I was saying with Harper, can take that risk. Brown is taking all the risk away from it. He's super fast anyway, he doesn't need to push, and he's got a really nice tidy race win if he just strokes it home. And he's got that big Expel sponsorship on the side, so his car's obviously covered in some of the best protective film you can get, so he's going to be absolutely happy to have cars firing stones at him and stuff. He's got zero issue whatsoever. Gap's a little bit smaller, isn't it, Harper to Mitchell? Harper getting held up there as well under the brakes into Brooklands, it seems, as they come into shot. Mitchell now really on the rear of him. They're really, really tight. And Mitchell then gets held up by the same GT4 that little bit later. But they are still tight, sorry.
No, it is, and it goes to show that slight little hiccup in traffic could easily have cost Dan Harper the race lead again there. On board with Ross Gunn, that is Rob Bell ahead of us for third position. Behind us now, though, is Raffaele Marcello. We saw that he made the move earlier on, but didn't see exactly how it happened. Hopefully we're able to pick that up in a moment or two, but for now, Ross Gunn wants third place. He's got the pace, he's got the McLaren in his sights, and on the previous lap alone was a full 1.4 seconds quicker as they head through Baggett's and Beckett's, though. This a replay of how he got Marcello, who had a bit of a wobble at Cops Corner, Joe.
Yeah, you can see him loose at the apex, defends to the left. Look at the power of this Aston. It's going to go all the way around the outside. Easy flat here and then has the inside. Yeah, that was a huge amount of torque against a car that I think's got one of the best torquey engines out of a corner. So he was wound up and now he is on the back of Rob Bell. 6 minutes remaining, the big wiggle as well. We're really seeing, I think the teams have struggled with what the weather has thrown at them. The prep to this race has been super difficult to get these cars in a good window. This is the first dry running they've had properly since Friday morning, so they haven't had a chance to get these cars dialed in, and I think it's really showing. It's actually added to the spectacle.
Absolutely, it's kept everybody guessing because the pace has fluctuated massively over the course of even a single stint for some cars. That really means that we've never quite known who the pace setters were going to be, but it looks as though the BMW of Dan Harper could now be on course for a victory. 6.25 minutes to go. There is Raffaele Marcello coming through, now down in 5th position. 6th is Will Tregurtha there in the second of the Barwell Lamborghinis, and 7th place on the inside for Ben Barnicoat. Ben Barnicoat's in the Inception Racing McLaren. 7th place, not really the result that they would have liked out of this for sure, but at least they managed to salvage a top 10 out of it. Goon on his 8th, some points at least going towards he and Ian Loggie's championship campaign. Through he goes in the silver Mercedes. 9th place then for Callum McLeod, there the green Mercedes, and the top 10 completed by the number 50 car, and that is Wallace, who I've seen a lot of during this race, but he just in the background there in his Mercedes completes the top 10. Some big names though, Joe, a lot further down than we expected, and that really is just all down to the twists and turns of this race that have really meant that strategy has been impossible to predict for us and for the teams.
Yeah, and it is great having this extra pit stop, and it is such a headache for the teams. Who's played it the best? Oh, a lot of gravel being kicked up there. Doesn't look like anything to worry about too much. But yeah, who's played the strategy best? Barwell have by a mile, to be fair, but they just haven't had the pace out of the car to get the win today. Whereas Century, who are currently leading, looking strong, I think have kind of played the conservative strategy. They haven't done anything wild, but they haven't done anything stupid. They knew they had a fast race car, which allows you to not have to do a crazy strategy. And I think they've done a really, really good job all the way around today. Still need to work out why Barwell Beach Team didn't pit as early as they could have, because that car now under the hands of Ross Gunn is still flying, probably the fastest car on track for the last 3 or 4 laps that I've been looking, and I think it's going to give Rob Bell a really, really difficult last 2 or 3 laps.
Yeah, because that little bit of track position they lost by staying out an extra lap or so, if they'd have been a couple of spots further up the queue, they'd have been with Dan Harper, surely now fighting for the race victory. So you're right, I think that probably did cost them the race win here today. Car 77, by the way, being given a 30-second penalty added to the race time after the race in lieu of a drive-through penalty. This, though, the fight for the lead. Now, I don't see any traffic there, really, that they've had to deal with. This just looks as though Sandy Mitchell is coming back at the BMW. Again, maybe tyre wear a factor here?
Yeah, definitely could be the ebb and flow of it. We saw Harper lose a bit of time to traffic 2 laps ago, coming into this very corner they're at, but
again, it just looks like the attitude of the car's changed, very much like the Mercedes. I don't know if it's the front engine nature, it's just working the tyre that bit harder. You know, with a mid-engine car like that Lamborghini, the weight over the front and the rear axle is almost 50-50, whereas with a front engine car, even though that engine will be all the way back behind that front axle, you just cannot get away from the weight being more on the front, which then obviously loads the tyre in a worse way for longevity. It's equaled out a bit, but it's so funny, the body language of Darren Young, he looked quite relaxed and happy, wouldn't he, already? But now he is really tensed up. There's no smiles whatsoever in that Century garage.
Just saw Martin Plowman go by very slowly with smoke coming from the left rear corner of his McLaren. Hopefully he doesn't stop on the side of the track. We've got 3 minutes to go, and it's another absolute nail-biter here, isn't it? Dan Harper, Sandy Mitchell, and Rob Bell and Ross Gunn not out of this either, because again, if these two start fighting, those two could close in. The straight line speed of the BMW means that the gap grows down the Hanger Straight, but arguably it's the second part of the lap really where that Lamborghini should excel through the tighter sections down here through Vale and Club, then through Village and the Loop as well. Expect to see Sandy Mitchell reeling the BMW back in, and if he gets close enough, can he have a go and make a decisive move to get through?
Yeah, I mean, it's like an accordion, isn't it? I don't mean to bellow on, but they're really now pinching back up, and you've got 4 different makes of cars doing very similar lap times. After 15 minutes of a restart, they're really starting to spice its way up. We go on board with Ross Gunn here, coming into a big brake zone. Looks like he's pretty even. Rob Bell looked like maybe he's going in a little deep there, maybe lose a bit of time. Looks pretty similar, doesn't it? A couple of GT4s. That Ginetta is going to compromise a little bit Harper, but he'll still be flat. Mitchell will be fine. Looks like he's maybe lost a bit actually in that complex, doesn't it? The gap looks bigger visibly already after those 2 corners they've just done.
It looked like he had a wobble coming through Village, the right-hand hairpin did Mitchell, and now gets bought by the R-Racing Aston Martin through Brooklands. That might now be his chance gone, because we're about to start the final lap of the race. By the way, the number 56 car has not served its penalty. It's now being shown the black flag, so he's no longer being scored, so they're very much taking the let's argue the toss after the race approach, but I'm not convinced that that's going to be all that successful. Final lap of the race begins then. It will be a 78 lap Silverstone 500 this year, slightly shorter than we've had for the last few seasons because of the 3 safety car periods, and Dan Harper with no traffic on the horizon, and now all of a sudden a 1.5 second advantage over Sandy Mitchell. Just needs to bring this one home. For 3rd place though, Ross Gunn has not given up his aspirations of finding a way past Rob Bell. Can the Aston Martin driver get onto the podium? If he can, we're perhaps heading into the part of the track now where he could attack.
Yeah, we've got 2 opportunities left. As I said, this is the next one, down Hanger Straight. Look at Mitchell has come into the clutch of him, so we thought he was on the front foot. He looks the weakest out the 4 now. Ross Gunn knows he's way too far back now, so the last one for me is coming into Brooklands. We're 7, 8 corners away from that still, so his job is to really open the corners up, get good speed, even try and maybe look after the rear tyres, not spin them up too much, so they're in the best condition they can be. Really close there. What's Rob Bell thinking? What can I do to defend? I want to stop him getting a run if I feel weak. Track limits are out the window on this last lap. None of them have got black and white, so they've at least got 2 lives remaining on that. Through the high-speed stuff, how can the Aston follow that McLaren closely is by the looks of it. Harper passed 1 more GT4. I pray for him that's the last one, and he can now just have a very relaxing final sector.
What a fantastic result this would be, though, for Century Motorsport. That BMW is going to be a real force to be reckoned with this year, I think, and they are going to come through after a disappointing starting position for them to surely now claim the race victory. Down towards the braking zone at Brooklands they come. Dan Harper has driven brilliantly. Darren Young as well, in fairness, put in 2 really good stints. The second of those affected by the safety car, but the first one was genuinely really quick. Out of Luffield corner then will come Dan Harper. Century Motorsport can finally breathe, although he has a wobble over the curb at the final turn just to give us one more scare. To the line he will come though. Darren Young and Dan Harper win the 2023 Intelligent Money British GT Championship round at Silverstone. The Silverstone 500 and the RAC trophy going their way. Second place goes to Sandy Mitchell in the number 78 Lamborghini. That was a fantastic drive for he and Sean Balfe, whilst Rob Bell in the 27 car will come home in 3rd position. Further back there, that was Will Tregurtha and Ben Barnacote separating themselves themselves by 21 thousandths of a second in the fight for 6th position on the run to the flag in what was a real nail-biting battle between those two as well. In GT4, it will be on the road the Ginetta that leads the way, but they are being black flagged for not serving this penalty, and so actually that number 56 car is not going to claim the victory. That will go the way of car number 90, which has really been one of the pace setters all race long. The Ginetta got to the front on strategy, but Jack Brown and Charles Clark, no matter who's been in the car, they have been setting the pace within GT4. They've built up an enormous cushion over the rest of the field, and as they come out of Luffield Corner now to see the checkered flag, it will be the race victory for Optimum Motorsport in GT4, a class that really none of us knew which way it was going to go, but it has been relative domination from them, and Optimum Motorsport celebrate the win as the car comes across the line. Second place in that class should go the way of the number 12. That's Ed McDermott and Michael Broadhurst, another car that we never really expected to see on the podium, whilst Academy, despite their issues for both cars, will get the 61 car onto the podium. That's the Eric Evans and Matt Cowley car, which should therefore take over the championship lead. Well, 3 hours, Joe, went by in an absolute flash. We crammed a lot of drama into those 3 hours, and Century Motorsport deserving race winners. I think ultimately, regardless of strategy, safety cars, and good or bad fortune, they had the quickest car. They had, certainly in Dan Harper, the quickest of the pro drivers, it seemed. You could argue Ross Gunn, but Dan Harper consistently able to put the lap times in. He made the decisive moves, and a well-worthy winner.
Yeah, and Dan Lewing, his teammate, did a mega job at all times. We saw some good overtakes, some good thoughtful driving. When there was a faster car behind, why fight it? Let it go. Clean pit stops, all of those things. When the grid is this competitive, you've got 23 other GT3 cars trying to beat you. Everything needs to be perfect, and that's why it's so rewarding to see such a tight finish. Those 4 cars all within 2 seconds of each other by the end of 3 hours. Yes, we had a safety car, but it still got spread out on there. The opposite story really in GT4. These guys were a long, long way ahead of anyone, weren't they? I think it was pace of car, pace of drivers, good strategy. They nailed everything. It would actually be interesting to get involved in the debrief of these Optimum guys. What could we have improved? Because you always go back to base and you go, what would have been better? But when you win by such a convincing margin of a lap, what can you do better? I don't know, really. Maybe you enter GT3 of a GT4 car and see how high up you would have finished.
It's always tricky in GT4, though, when we get safety cars, because that's always the class that suffers, because if the safety car comes out when half of them have been lapped and half of them haven't, or half of them are pitted and the other half haven't, then that can really mess up their results. So there was an element of that as well today, but no doubt about it, Optimum Motorsport had the pace to win regardless of all of that, and absolutely deserved it. Well, we were treated to a really, really special Silverstone 500 this year. The sun has shone throughout as well, despite the threat of rain. The crowd, the sizable crowd we've got here today, have, I'm sure, enjoyed themselves over the last few hours. And we see Century Motorsports BMW claim the victory from a Lamborghini in second, from a McLaren in third, from an Aston Martin in fourth position. Great variety of car at the front of the pack. British GT is bigger and better than ever in 2023. And this, of course, only the second event of the year. Out of the car gets Dan Harper, punches the air in delight. Darren Leung is there to celebrate and embrace Dan Harper. Those two have done a fantastic job. And down there, in amongst all of the activity, as always, is Bryn Lucas, Dan Harper and Darren Leung down there, ready to have a chat, hopefully, with him in a moment or two, if that he dares to interrupt the celebration, because those two, quite rightly, Bryn, are now starting to enjoy themselves.
Well, Darren, while we wait for Dan to take his helmet off and come over here, that was a battle, wasn't it? I mean, Sandy was a hard one to overtake there, but Dan just seemed to have the pace.
Yeah, well, as I said several times already today, in my opinion, best driver in the world. Absolutely phenomenal guy. Really done the job for us today, especially with everything we've had to come up against, starting from P18. He's just never had any sort of faltering, attitude-wise or anything. He's just been there to pick us all up, including me. So yeah, for me, this is credit to him. This is all him.
Yeah, he's going to come over in just a second. He's just taking his time to catch his breath, which I think is understandable. And you mentioned how far back you had to start. Yeah. Let's just get Dan over here. Dan, just been talking about how far back you had to start on the grid there, and the fight you had with Sandy. You gave us a bit of a wobble, a bit of a scare for Darren, I think, as well. Maybe a couple of laps from the end, because Sandy started to gap you back again. Was it just a problem, or were you just taking it easy?
No, I was not taking it easy, I'll tell you that. That was unreal. I mean, I can't believe it, to be honest, with how everything's gone all weekend, really.
I can believe it.
And yeah, I'm just so happy for Darren, for the team. It's just been so much hard work, and all over winter we've tried so hard, and we've got this thing in a really good window, and it's such a pleasure to drive.
Well, this man's saying you're the best driver on the grid. What do you reckon about that?
I don't know, still a bit of work maybe, but today was a good day, let's say that.
A very good day. Well done both.
Cheers, thank you.
Great stuff, and well, Darren Leung full of praise for his pro teammate there, and rightly so, because Darren Leung did a good job, so did Dan Harper. They both deserve that, and they both deserve the credit, absolutely. The pro drivers make a bit of a difference, Joe, but as you've said on multiple occasions, it's the AMs that really make the difference. So all of that praise Darren's giving Dan, quite rightly, Dan gives straight back to him.
Yeah, exactly. And the pro will be doing work behind the scenes, be it setup of the car, but also to try and make Darren quicker. They'll look at the data, they'll look at the video and try and close that gap. And that's what we're really starting to see happen across the whole field now.
Okay then, so the Silverstone 500 is won by a BMW in 2023. Darren Leung and Dan Harper victorious for Century Motorsports. Andy Mitchell and Sean Balfe come home in second for Barwell, with Optimum's McLaren of Rob Bell and Mark Radcliffe in third. A good day in the end for Optimum across both of the classes. Beach Dean's Aston Martin, Ross Gunn and Andrew Howard were fourth ahead of John Ferguson and Raffaele Marcello. You sense we didn't see the best of them really after that damage that was sustained on the way to the grid. Then Mark Sansom and Will Tregurtha, under the radar result for them, but both Barwell Lambos inside the top six. Brendan Reeve and Ben Barnacote, though, the one that got away for Inception Racing, they settled for seventh. And it's Loggy and Goonon, Price and McLeod, with Chris Hart and James Wallace completing the top 10. In GT4, it is Charles Clark and Jack Brown who claim the race win, with Michael Broadhurst and Ed McDermott second, Matt Cowley and Eric Evans in third, ahead of Holloway and Ellis, with Rollage and Millar for DTO Motorsport completing the top five. Of course, you will not see at the front of that field the Thomas the 56 Ginetta, which was black flagged for not serving the penalty. So, Optimum Motorsport get a car on the podium in GT3, but a car on the top step of the podium in GT4. Charles Clark and Jack Brown, your winners in GT4, catching up now with Bryn.
Well, let's start with you, Charles, a BRDC Rising Star. You've just got yourself a pretty decent win here. I'll come to Jack in just a second, because watching that one, no nails bitten at all, I imagine.
Yeah, it was... It's my first British GT win, so I'm absolutely buzzing, especially here at Silverstone for the Silverstone 500. Couldn't have done it at a better place, really. We've worked hard in the test to make sure we're on the pace in the dry. Coming into the weekend, it was wet, so we didn't really know what our pace was going to be like in the dry, and we both did a great job and brought home the win for Optimum.
Yeah, 2021 you won at Spa, 2022 you won at SNET, 2023 you won at Silverstone. You've completed the golden trio, should we say, the trinity.
Yeah, well, hopefully there's more to come from that. Yeah, it was an interesting race. The first stint was quite tricky, it's very hot, I was struggling quite a bit, but the pace was good. Charles went in, did a great job, I took over, and it was managing at that point. So I let a couple of cars go who weren't for position, and it worked out really well. It was just a cruise to the finish line of my stint, so it worked out really well in our favour. So thank you very much, everyone. It's good.
And you had the 56 Ginetta, didn't you, that you knew there was going to take a penalty. They weren't taking the penalty, so you knew eventually it was going to come to you?
Yeah, no, I kind of figured that they would get the penalty in the end. So, those two cars in front, I was not interested in risking the car and risking what we already had. So,
well done both. Go and get your trophies, enjoy some champagne. Well done.
Guys. Cheers, guys.
So Optimum Motorsport then celebrate the race victory within GT4, and the number 90 machine, which, as I said, really was never that much in doubt. The Ginetta almost managing to steal it from them out of Raceway Motorsport, but ultimately the penalty takes them well out of contention, and so it's Optimum Motorsport who claimed the race victory at the end of a topsy-turvy 3 hours of racing here at Silverstone. The Silverstone 500 never fails to deliver, and the 2023 edition was absolutely no exception. Well, it seems a long time ago now, doesn't it? But the 3-hour Silverstone 500, the third round of the championship, got underway with the Team ABBA Racing Mercedes on pole position after a cancelled qualifying session, and Mercedes were all at the front of the field. Round Copse corner they headed. Immediately, John Ferguson was in trouble, dropping back behind James Cottingham and Ian Loggy. Those two cars would have very differing fortunes over the next 3 hours. There was early drama down at the club sequence of corners as Nick Jones was tapped into a spin, in his Team Parker Porsche, and after an early safety car, the action in the traffic on the restart was second to none, with drivers fighting for every inch of real estate. The 84 McLaren unfortunately grenaded itself up at the loop. They were out of the race with damage to the right front corner, whilst the Team Abacar found itself up and down the order throughout the race. Team Brit had a spin down at Maggots and Beckett's, and upon the rejoin, Aaron Morgan was collected heavily by one of the GT3 McLarens. That did a lot of damage to both cars. Both drivers checked over at the medical centre, but ultimately it was a lengthy safety car period that gave us a sprint to the finish, with the pro drivers back on board in GT3 fighting it out at the front. A penalty for the race-leading Ginetta in GT4 meant that it was the Optimum Motorsport number 90 McLaren that found its way into the race lead and ultimately race victory, whilst Dan Harper chased down Sandy Mitchell for the overall race win, finally making a brilliant move through Brooklands and Luffield. 3 or 4 corners side by side between the two of them saw the BMW out in front by the time they got to Copse Corner. Sandy Mitchell just could not quite live with the straight line speed of the Century car, but he did stick with them until the very final lap of the race. Darren Leung was celebrating the move. He would celebrate even more so when the car crossed the line to claim the checkered flag at the end of 3 hours of racing here at Silverstone. Century Motorsport make it 3 different winners from the first 3 rounds of the championship. So that was the Silverstone 500, and now drivers out onto the podium. We're going to start, I believe, with our overall GT3 podium finishers, and so the third placed car was the Rob Belmont Radcliffe machine there, Sandy Mitchell. It's not quite a third Silverstone 500 victory for him, but still a really, really impressive result that for the Barwell Motorsport Lamborghini that really was never a contender until that final stint of the race. And Sandy Mitchell and Sean Balfe, second place for them. But ultimately, the race victory will go the way of Century Motorsport. Darren Leung and Dan Harper, in his first season of racing with us here in British GT, win the Crown Jewel event. It may be the third round of the championship, but it's certainly more than just another race. To have the opportunity to win the Silverstone 500 is something that all of the drivers on the grid will have been hoping for. Dan Harper and Darren Leung raised the race winners trophy. There's a bigger trophy to come though for them, presented by none other than Andy Prio, GT and touring car legend, who has a bit of a history of racing BMWs successfully throughout his career. Hands the RSE trophy over to Darren Leung and Dan Harper, winners of the Silverstone 500 in 2023. Well, what a magnificent moment this is for the two of them already, I think, planning their celebrations perhaps for this evening that may run long into the night. The champagne will be sprayed though, and Sandy Mitchell's done this before, has to do it from the second step of the podium this time around, as Century Motorsport get their moment in the spotlight here at Silverstone. And could this be the beginning of a championship campaign for Century? And they had a solid, if unspectacular, pair of 6th place finishes at Alton Park, but the win here today, worth more points because it's a longer race, will put them potentially into contention for the championship lead. So they are looking very strong. It's going to be interesting to see how they get on at the next round of the championship at Donington Park. Not a dissimilar circuit to this one. Well, I said it will put them in contention for the championship lead. It really does, doesn't it? 53.5 minutes, points, excuse me, their tally, with Ian Loggins, Jules Gounon joint second with Andrew Howard and Ross Gunn. John Ferguson and Rafa Marcello are fourth for Ram Racing, and 2Cs, James Cottingham and Johnny Adam, are in 5th position, but within about 15 of the championship lead. Then it's the Barwell Motorsport duo of Balfe and Mitchell, and then a sea of McLarens, Radcliffe and Bell for Optimum, West and Kirkhofer for Garage 59 are joint 8th with Morgan Tilbrook and Marcus Clutton, with Marcus Hansom and Will Tregurtha completing the top 10. The next group of drivers are the overall GT4 top 3, and we see the Academy Mustang pairing already up there. Then, I mean, what a fantastic result this was for the One Motorsport duo of Ed McDermott and Michael Broadhurst, another duo who really benefited from the strategy and the safety cars. But the victory goes to Optimum Motorsport, a brilliant day at the races for them, and it's Jack Brown and Charles Clark who will claim the victory in the GT4 category after what was a very, very strong performance for them. With or without those safety cars, I think we'd have been talking about the number 90 car as a potential race winner, and they will take another hatful of points away from Silverstone. That will definitely help their championship aspirations as well. So the celebrations ongoing within GT4 under sunny skies here at Silverstone. We can quickly take a look at the championship standings with Optimum ahead of Academy now within the GT4 ranks and a relatively healthy 15-point lead. Then it's Josh Rowledge and Aston Miller third, Ed McDermott and Michael Broadhurst jumping to fourth, with Carl Cavers and Lewis Plato completing the top 5. Fantastic racing action here from Silverstone. Join us again next time at Donington Park in the Intelligent Money British GT Championship.